A young man just sat there, wondering what would happen if he vanished. And the moment it hit him, it didn't lead to silence. It shoved him into another world, forcing him to figure out how to live from scratch. He was trapped in a gloomy workday hell morning tonight, grinding nonstop until his body and heart ached harder and harder. He stormed into the diner, ordered noodles, grabbed a plate, and dug in like there was no tomorrow because honestly, he couldn't even figure out why he was still living, especially when he couldn't save a single cent. So there he sat at the station, bone tired, finally realizing just how brutal this is for him, right? As the very last train screeched into the platform. People on the platform started closing in on the train, and Yatsuki Shinomiya was still stuck in his head spiraling over that parallel universe and what would happen if he made it there, wondering why he hadn't watched anime in forever, picturing those girls, and even imagining himself as their hero. He stared at the ceiling, wondering who he'd become an adventurer, a hero, anything big, and then his mind kept spinning, screaming, "What would I do? What would I do?" Work wouldn't let him breathe, so he swore off, forcing himself to grind and burn out again. He craved fun with his whole heart, but it kept slipping out of reach. He snapped awake from his thoughts, or was it a dream, and realized he was totally alone on the platform, while the last train sat right ahead of him. He shot up from his seat and sprinted for the train, and it felt like it was waiting just for him, because it hadn't started rolling yet. He actually lunged into the carriage at the last second and finally let out a breath, terrified he'd missed it. A girl greeted him like she'd been waiting forever. She said his name, lit up with joy, and when the guy blinked in disbelief, he started staring at her because she looked straight out of an anime, like a goddess. The girl grinned at Yatsuki and warned him he was about to get tossed into a parallel universe, and he immediately called it a cheap trick. No way was he playing along, but the girl kept pushing, begging him to stop and then snap. Yatsuki started to drop like the world vanished under his feet. They grabbed him and demanded we ship him to another world so he could spin up a whole second life. She had to hand him something before he walked out because he'd need it where he was going, and it wasn't just any gift of skill. Right then, cards materialized in front of Itsuki, and he couldn't even breathe as he realized his second life was about to kick off. They grabbed us, then handed him a choice, pushing hard to convince Yatsuki that this was exactly what he needed and that it would definitely help. The protagonist started spiraling skills, a parallel universe, and all the what-ifs in his head until he couldn't shake the question, was it really that way? Suki Shinomi figured those crude, bug-like techniques wouldn't amount to much, so he started weighing his options, either going all in on offensive skills or picking moves built for straight-up combat. Then the hero felt this choice was doomed, so he yanked the plan and went for something totally different. He promised that in his second life he'd live happily, and he picked this skill to make it happen. The goddess tried to talk Itsuki out of this card, pushing a better option, but he stood his ground, dead sure his pick was the right one. She demanded to confirm his decision, then handed him a gift for fun, telling him to be careful before sending him off to the starting city. Itsuki blinked awake, and boom, he was in a brand new world. Right behind him, something enormous moved, a colossal caterpillar roaring like a nightmare. Itsuki snapped into action and sprinted straight under that thunderous roar. You think that goddess has played him, like full-on tricked him. He can't believe this is what he wanted. So oops, Uki trips, stumbles, and face plants. Then a voice yells from behind him to get down, because right there comes a brutal roar from a huge caterpillar. Itsuki snapped his head around and saw a sword guy, eyes full of panic, like he feared he'd never reach in time and he needed answers fast. Who was this guy? Anyway, then the swordsman shot back, asking Itsuki if everything was okay. Itsuki felt a wave of gratitude toward Hayato Hayakawa because Hayato didn't care about anything else except Tsuki's safety. Hayato lunged into the moment by introducing himself as a no-home wanderer and even compared himself to Itsuki. Turns out, Hayato didn't just show up, he got reincarnated into this world too. A girl stepped up and stared at Hayato, asking who the guy beside him was, and Tsuki quickly introduced himself like he was trying not to explode from embarrassment. 4 gorgeous girls stood right in front of the guys, then Uki smiled, and the girls went straight into asking Hayato about Uki. He got swept up in his dreams, then started fantasizing about a harem of girls until, in his head, they were barely clothed, circling him like royalty and calling him king. And right when it was getting good, Hayato cut in and told him they were going to the city. Hayato started gushing about Japan, and nostalgia hit him like a wave. Then one of the girls asked him about it, assuming it was his hometown, and yep, it really was. Hayato asked Suki what insane skill the god had left him with, and Suki grinned, saying the moment he revealed it, everyone would be blown away. Suki smirked, shot his hand out, and tried to pull pocket money out of thin air, then boom, a coin materialized in his palm, and everyone around him went completely speechless. Suki started bragging that he made a set amount of money each day based on his level, and that he didn't have to lift a finger to work. Hayato's cheeks burned as he blurted out to Itsuki what he planned to do next, and Itsuki just kept going, showing off his skills and bragging that he could earn as much as he wanted. Everyone was totally lost except Itsuki, who kept going, listing every skill the goddess had handed him, While the crew argued about the next move, the city ahead kept crawling closer, like it was breathing down their neck. Hayato pitched the guild idea, they snapped it up, and then he pushed them to dive into alchemy no hesitation. He loved it just as they spotted a city closing in. They bounced along the road in a horse-drawn cart, and when they craned their heads out, a picture-perfect view hit them. Ahead, a towering stone fence blocked the way, and beyond it sprawled a massive city. Then the boys surged forward, shouting with pure joy as they set foot inside. Suki jumped out of the cart and started strolling through the streets, scanning every face until his eyes locked onto two breathtaking girls. He grinned to himself, already imagining life wrapped up in the glow of beautiful women all around him. Finally, he reached a calm truth. Since he had nowhere to rush, he could live in peace and actually be happy, because in this world, his life had started for real. On a pretty quiet street near the A Street restaurant, Suki rolls up and orders himself a plate of beef shashlik. Chowing down his kebab, he checked the map Hayato had handed him because Itsuki was on the hunt for the Alchemist Guild, and he couldn't wait to see what kind of trouble or secrets would hit once he stepped in. All while absolutely loving the beef in his mouth. Someone yanked it by the shirt collar, and when he spun around, he caught sight of a girl wearing cat ears. Suki spotted that the girl looked completely lost, so he offered her his shashlik, and she didn't even try to refuse. That cat girl looked straight out of a weird nightmare. She barely wore anything, and a tight collar sat around her neck. A man sprinted up and yelled at the cat girl to stop, then told Itsuki she couldn't be fed without permission since she was a servant, while Itsuki froze in fear, totally unsure what to do. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could this tiny girl already be a servant? Wasn't she way too young for that? The man leaned in and asked if he should buy the servant, and then boom, everything clicked. He wasn't some buyer at all. He was a dealer in illegal goods named Yosos. Suki's playful axe snapped. He went stone serious, barked through a rough voice, and said he didn't like it. After what he said, he couldn't believe it. Could Suki even fathom something like this was here? The girl stared right at him. Itsuki popped out a huge caterpillar to snag Yoshi's attention, one that clearly wasn't real, and it totally worked. The merchant's eyes went wild, so Itsuki shoved his beef into the girl's hands and told her to scarf it down fast, but the merchant immediately screamed again, begging her to stop. The girl dug into the shashlik at lightning speed, while the Suki was already bolting off, yelling goodbye and waving his hand as he disappeared. A two-story building loomed in front of Itsuki. This was the Alchemist's Guild. He stopped dead in front of the door, staring at it like it might bite. Pyoto warned Suki to make a guild card and keep it on him at all times, so Suki remembered. And then he walked right into the quest. He froze at the doorway, scanned the room, and checked the house was occupied. Then slipped in, slammed the door shut, and blurted out an embarrassed apology only to get snapped at. "Don't be so stupid." Right in front of Yutsuki sat an old woman clutching her phone, eyes hard with annoyance because his noise was loud as day and she could hear him perfectly well. With the same annoyed look, the woman demanded to know what he wanted in her guild. Then Soki couldn't breathe, even a little terrified as sweat beaded on his face. After he finally steadied his nerves, Itsuki told the woman he was ready to join the Alchemist Guild, then threw his name out there. He'd made it here because of Hayato. The dissatisfied woman shot back, remembering Hayato, insisting he didn't need to bring a letter of recommendation. She already knew about Itsuki and how the aristocracy had been crushing him. In a soft voice, she said his name started with flower, and that sent Itsuki's confusion spiraling all over again. The woman yanked out a card and thrust it into her Suki's hands. He lunged to take it, but the second his fingers closed, it burned hot like it had a mind of its own. The moment their hands met, a burst of fire tore through the air. Suki jolted and screamed as flames licked his palm, and then a card erupted straight from his hand. It was a guild card, and the woman snapped that there were no special exams. Since he'd literally just arrived, Hitsuki didn't have a clue, and it hit him hard. He gripped the card with a grin, and then it hit him. This world actually made him happy right up until the woman reminded him he still had to pay the 5,000 Nora registration fee. Yutsuki slammed his palms on the table and demanded, "Teach me, I want to learn alchemy." The woman smiled and introduced herself, Reinrich. They stared each other down, and Suki blurted out an apology again, begging Reinrich to teach him alchemy, while Suki's words made her think he'd finally come around, but then she snapped that it wasn't fair, because she hated it when people backed out after promising. But then the master stopped and thought it through. Suki really did have alchemy skills after all, and she decided it was time to give her the very first lesson. Reinrich stormed ahead down the hallway, dying to see what Itsuki could pull off, so he followed right behind her. Up ahead sat a table packed with test tubes, flasks, burners, and even a mortar for grinding. The master ordered Itsuki to whip up a basic potion, and there he was, crushing leaves in the mortar while he worked. Then the master warned him straight, without non-stop practice, his instant magic would turn into nothing. Suki couldn't figure out why he couldn't just blast his magic, so he kept trying to crack the manual part. Only for Reinrich to hammer the same thing over and over, he had to learn the basics first. The master eyed it, grinning like he knew a secret, and told him to train harder because if he keeps pushing, it'll get way better. Ryan Rick gripped this bottle in her hand and used it to show exactly how it could boost a skill's success rate, and when Suk saw that, he froze so hard he actually opened his mouth. Thoughts about what might be inside the bottle spun like crazy in his head, and in a shaky, awkward voice, he asked if it was a potion, but the answer never came. The master launched into alchemy's core separation, conjunction, and coagulation and made it clear that if Oki didn't get that, there'd be no next step. Oki nodded and said he understood every word. Rainrick tried to tell her that she didn't have to carry every memory, but Suk cut her off and snapped the moment shut. Then he finally understood everything. Huki pushed straight into separation first because that's the core of alchemy, then realized he needed ore, and with everything clicking in his head, he had to move fast. Standing over the table, he was fighting to get it done, and Reinwick watched every single move like it mattered while sweat started pouring down Itsuki's face from sheer effort. So he brewed the potion and couldn't wait to show Rainrich, but a little dread gnawed at him as he waited for her reply. Then the master shook her head, and the potion flat out failed. The woman handed Yitsuke a textbook, and he fought tooth and nail to make sense of it, but his mind spun out into a messy blur, and hopelessness crashed over him. Suki grabbed for his focus, and the moment it clicked, he realized he couldn't just stop there, he had to do more. As evening crept in, he was still huffing through his alchemy textbook, hammering away at a formula, and praying it would finally click until he snapped, realizing he simply couldn't keep going. The boy was already wiped out, he couldn't even catch his breath, slumped on the floor with zero strength left to go on. Then Reinwick spotted something and grinned, because she'd found out Yatsuki had brewed a bunch of solid, working potions. The door swung open, and a girl with a basket stepped in. Right, the master's assistant who lived here, Reinrick asked her to cook something for his Suki, because exhaustion had him completely wiped out. He wolfed down the fresh food and slurped it like it was heaven until it finally hit him that someone was calling his name. The master cut through the noise and demanded a break because they needed to talk. Mouth stuffed, he somehow flicked his eyes to the right. There was a wreath holding 2 cups of tea, so he stumbled into a shaky head motion and blurted out thanks, totally mortified. The master took a sip of tea and told him to listen as Suki ate because while he was practicing, she suddenly clocked something important. Reinrick took another sip, then her expression snapped from serious to sharp, and she smirked as she told him he had no business working here. Itsuki froze as the spoon in midair stared him in the face, and the master's anger cracked into shock as he stared right back. Even so, she still rented a bed for him because Suki had to have somewhere to stay. Only one catch was that Reinrick would come later and slap a price on the place. The guy froze in shock, because he never thought he'd have to pay for the accommodation. The woman promised she'd hit the Adventurers Guild tomorrow to sell his potions because she swore they were top quality. And of course, Ooki was shocked again because his potions still weren't good enough to be put up for sale. The moon's already climbed high, the stars are blazing, and inside the guild house, the chatter still won't stop. Suki got stuck with a low-class room because it's cheap and he's nearly broke to begin with, so yeah, his potions are going to end up getting sold. Morning broke, the city yawned awake, but then screams tore through the streets. One woman begged for help as her luggage vanished. She swore at the thief to stop, and he slipped away by melting into the crowd. At the screams, everyone snapped their heads around in terror, and they instantly knew a robbery just happened. The thief came barreling down the street, clutching a knife, bellowing for people to get out of his way, or he'd start killing anyone who dared block him. 2 girls stood right in front of him. He swung the knife and roared that they were getting out, but one girl flashed a signal to Sordi, and in a heartbeat, she snatched the handle behind her back. Sordi struck the thief's shoulder without breaking a sweat, yanking the bag right off him. He jolted in pain and started coughing hard. The second girl shot up beside the thief, and before he even registered it, drove a hit straight into his stomach. Then the man exploded into a non-stop storm of curses at both of them. The girl yanked his hand, snapped him over her shoulder, and flung him down. He never saw it coming, and fear hit him hard as he crashed to the ground. Sorde applauded the girl's work. Aine's effort was so sharp it left her breathless, and she finally exhaled hard just to catch up with herself. Aine's face instantly burned with embarrassment, like she'd gone too far. But Sorte snapped in right away, telling her the thief was still alive and breathing. Everyone burst into happy chatter because they recognized these girls. Then the girls handed the bag right back to the woman it was stolen from, and the woman practically lit up with pure gratitude. Ryan, Rick, and Ietsuki huddled in the alley, staring ahead like, what the heck happened out there? Because right at the end, a huge crowd was packed in. The master showed him exactly where the Adventurers Guild would be, and she jabbed a finger straight ahead, insisting she couldn't wait a second longer. Then they said their goodbyes and split off down their own paths. Itsuki. Yeah, he showed up in the perfect place, and he never would have guessed that in this world, he'd actually end up making real moves and doing business. Late at night, in that tiny room, loud snoring rolled out. Suki was out cold, hugging her pillow tight. Meanwhile, Ryan, Rick, and Hayato sat on the balcony, trading words under the night sky. The master muttered that the moon looked awful tonight, and Hayato instantly remembered how it had felt the very first time he arrived in this world. While Ryan Rick clutched a mug and took a small sip, wondering what Hayato could possibly need this late. But the boy really wanted to give Suki something, so he held a tiny bag in his hand and begged for this small favor. Hayato just wanted to help him out a bit because he's the good kind of guy and he couldn't wait to show his gratitude. He slammed the bag onto the table and sat back, waiting for the master to grab it for herself. Then she just stared and asked if he truly believed he could decide that. Suki stood on the guild's doorstep, gripping a bag of the potions he'd crafted, convinced it was the perfect setup. Maybe Hayato would wake him up for this. And yeah, he'd even chalk it up to being shy. The guy swung the guild doors open like he owned the place, confidence blazing in his eyes as he rushed in, ready to jump straight into business. He burst into the room and instantly got hit with chaos, crowded, loud, and alive, with fights breaking out at one table, drinks flowing at another, and loud discussions spinning at the rest. A bunch of people snapped their heads toward Itsuki, staring at him like, "Wait, what?" And he stood out like a black sheep among folks who'd seen everything. He forced an awkward smile, sweat breaking across his face from pure embarrassment, then tried to greet him and stumbled a little. Suke's face fell the moment he took it in, and he instantly decided, "I don't care," like he had to convince himself, though he still couldn't shake the weird, heavy vibe as people stared at him while he pushed past the tables, because something in his gut told him this place was trouble. Across the tables, they leaned in and whispered, their eyes locked on the bag swinging at his belt. Then everyone snapped to attention when they figured out he was with the Guild of Love's Bells. Suki spotted that girl standing behind the counter, and he figured she could help him. She looked adorable, and with a bright smile, she asked if he needed anything. That girl totally embarrassed Yutsuki. She leaned on the counter, all cute, and propped her cheeks up with her hands. His words jammed up and he started to stutter, scrambling to say what he came for. Then he finally blurted out that he wanted to sell potions, and before the sentence was even done, he dove for his bag. Suki started dumping his potions out, filling the whole counter with them, then leaned in and asked if he could buy as much ore as possible. At the tables, everyone was yapping. Then they spotted the potions, and their suspicions finally got confirmed. The man snorted in disgust, swearing they were about to sell those overpriced potions again. While everyone else quietly negotiated behind his back, Itsuki felt instantly awkward, like the whole room was choking on tension for a reason, and when the girl inspected the potions, she didn't hold back. These batches were low quality, plain and simple. A guy's voice boomed from behind every okay, calling out to the girl at the counter, "Fair." The two of them snapped their heads toward him. The man strode up to the counter, grinning as he kept chatting with the girl, clearly eyeing those good quality potions. Then he snapped his hand up and bonked Yutsuki on the head, demanding to know if he even knew about them. Itsuki was so stunned he flung himself into the potions to keep them from going down. They started dropping to the floor, each potion popping and shattering with a vicious clatter. Itsuki, barely able to prop herself up on the counter, stared at the shards as her spilled potion soaked the floor. Laughter boomed through the whole room, then they turned on him, shouting that he deserved it and that he was a man from the Love Spell Guild, and making it crystal clear they didn't want him selling potions here at all. Suki had slipped into a spiral. He'd poured his heart into those potions, and now frustration crashed over him as his mind raced. Why was he from the Love Spell Guild, and what in the world were these people even talking about? He remembered Master Rinarik's words about how he made great potions, and before he could even breathe, heat and rage started boiling in his veins as the same man who'd hidden Itsuki swung at him again, shouting insults and demanding what he'd do now. Laughter exploded down the hall, then rage hit him like a bolt. He lunged up and swatted the man's hand away, snapping at him to get ready because he wanted to fight. Even so, Rare shot up and pleaded with a shaky voice, asking him to stop and begging them not to throw down here. The man spun toward Itsuki and taunted, offering to play smirk sharp, saber blazing in his hand, while the other guy snarled with rage, bracing to fight, and Itsuki couldn't stop thinking what the heck was wrong with this bald menace. He was so adorable, he lifted that fist and threw a punch, smashing his potions like they'd offended him, because right there, he was itching to beat everything down. A sharp female voice cut through the air, and there was Ina. Stepping in between them in a flash, she slammed her sword to stop the saber and her arm guard to block the fist, then snarled at the man, furious, asking what the hell he thought he was doing. Everyone in the room, including the man, froze in shock. His voice started to stutter, so he finally lowered his sword, and Itsuki was just as stunned by Aini's sudden appearance. Then an iron grip clamped onto his arm, and pain shot through him. "Sorte, let go of your hand," he snapped, while right in the crush between the two fighters, two adorable girls from the Scarlet Frontier stood watching. Suke mulled it over. This was the first time he'd ever heard that name. Then it hit him. He'd seen her just yesterday, and when he really stared at her, he couldn't deny it. She was stunning. He shut out the noise for a second, then straight up sorted out the whole mess, saying he wasn't from the Love Spell Guild at all, but but from the Alchemist Guild instead. Everyone in the room just froze in confusion. Then Itsuki pulled out his guild card, flashed it to the crowd, and the man nodded toward the bag. The man stared in disbelief at Ain's words, feeling her guilt sink in because the misunderstanding was on them, and they never wanted to stir up trouble for the Alchemist Guild. Now, Huki was dead serious. This wasn't some misunderstanding. He knew that man was at fault for refusing to trust him at first and for smashing the potions. Sorty slammed her hands on the table so hard the guy jumped she wasn't thanking Annie for her help, and Anne tried to yank her back before it went too far. Then the girl strode up to Suki and told him it wasn't his fault at all she'd replaced the destroyed potions, begged for his forgiveness, and left him completely baffled. A woman burst into the doorway, scanning the whole room like a hawk. Then every head snapped toward her, and Ryan Rick stood there, right in the middle of it. She snapped, demanding they listen to her because once they'd wrecked their product, she wasn't letting this slide at all. Even Itsuki couldn't believe what the master looked like. She demanded to see the guildmaster, then spun around and zeroed in on the guy she'd come to talk to. Suki stepped up to the master, swallowed her guilt, and apologized because it was all her fault that the potions got wrecked. Ryan Rick waved it off, saying everything was fine and she didn't need to stress so hard. Rick didn't lay the blame on him, she pinned it on the ones who actually did it. Still, Huki swore he might have been involved too, and the master shut that down fast, telling him to stop blaming himself. She smirked and winked, telling him it wasn't him who should be losing it. It was all of them, and Itsuki realized it's way easier to say don't be sad than it is to actually do it. Rick snapped and said the Alchemist Guild would cut them off for good, and everyone nearly lost their minds. Then the Adventure Guildmaster rushed in, trying to talk her out of it, because they refused to start buying potions from the Love Spell Guild. The sword-wielding man busted out excuses, saying he should have checked the guy's identity before swinging, and he kept apologizing because Farrier was just trying to apologize too, same as everyone else. But the master dug in her heels, then snapped at Aina with zero respect, stepping in for her student after he poured his whole soul into preparing those potions, refusing to let her get away with any of that nonsense, and demanding to know just what they were going to do next. Everyone was already huddled in their seats, shaking with fear, but Rainrich barreled on anyway because she was sure they'd understand exactly what Hayato's letter of recommendation meant. The second they heard the name of the Dragon Slayer hero, fear hit everyone like a brick wall, while Yuki just sat there thinking, is this really the Hayato I know? Because somehow he'd turned into a total celebrity here. The Adventurers Guildmaster saw everything clearly, then vowed that whoever caused the mess would be punished, and the man swore he'd pay a whopping 1 million Nora for the potions. Rangrit couldn't believe her ears. She swore they'd messed up, because the number they just said had only one digit. So late, they demanded answers. Why on earth did they have to fork over an insanely huge amount of money? Suki felt it too. She thought it was way too much. But the master fought to protect the students' rights, and Hayato backed Itsuki to the end. Yet Itsuki was already worn out from all this because nobody else seemed to get it. It's like Suke lunged in to stop the master, because suddenly no one could even tell who the real victim was anymore. Then Rinrik snapped everyone to silence, and Suk pushed in anyway, begging her to listen to her student. Then Agnes snapped in, telling Sorta to wait and hear her out because she knew that kind of huge sum wouldn't just be handled that easily, and Sorty suspected she was going to pay whatever it took. Ian swallowed hard, and right then, Sorty's worry started to spike because that red-haired girl wasn't just talking, she was dead set on becoming a servant to work off the money, and everyone around them was shocked speechless. Aine told Rinrik to calm down, and that shocked her. Then Huki demanded what she meant. The man snapped back, lifting his voice, and asked why she was carrying his mess when it was his fault. She snapped serious and demanded to know what he could do, and the other man warned that if she turned into a servant, the Adventurers Guild's name would be wrecked. Ain't didn't think that would work. People needed an adventure guild, or the whole reputation would crash fast. The fairy swung back to the girl, and she snapped that she never wanted her turned into a servant. Something about it felt dead wrong. But I laughed, told her it was all okay, and hugged her tight, because if she stayed with me, everything would turn out fine. Suke closed in on Reinarek and demanded, why did you do it? Something's off here. She just shrugged and said it was the girl's own choice. Sorte snapped that she refused to take this, and Ain't tried to calm her, but the girl only got louder, saying the shattered potions forced her friend to become a servant. Aine swore she'd take responsibility, but Sorte flat out refused, because the second she did, he feared their entire adventure would fall apart. But that girl could handle herself just fine, so the cat girl shot back, then who's gonna take care of everyone if I'm gone? Ian begged the alchemist for mercy, but Suki wanted to run straight to the master for help, only for her to slam the door and refuse him. Itsuki sank into his own thoughts and snapped back, denying it all because he only came here to grab a carefree, childish, happy life. First a giant insect, then a servant. So now what does he do with her? Then he flat out refused. I was shocked and begged him to explain, but he just said it would turn into a headache. He said it's straight servitude isn't the answer here, because he's safe now, thanks to her, so he's not about to turn his savior into a slave. He tells Hayato, "Don't worry, I've got this," and swears he'll explain everything, then immediately starts brewing more potions since he's already told everyone everything's fine. I told him to wait, but Itsuki snapped that it was fine, then an argument erupted. The girl stood tall, certain her strength would help, and Itsuki pushed back hard, refusing to let someone that beautiful end up as a servant. Itsuki shot a confused look. What was he talking about? A beautiful girl. And the wild part, Sorte was already seething with rage, which left Itsuki completely stunned. Reinwick was chatting about a candidate like it was gold, some girl from the Scarlet Frontier they could hire as a servant, and just when Suke tried to shut it down, the master kept going, why not use her as a working hand? Suke's smile cracked into sadness, but if he wanted to live and grow here, he'd need more strength. He couldn't get it that way. And the master finally clocked the truth. He wasn't just weak in power, he was too soft to handle what came next. She jabbed a finger at Ayin and swore she'd be waiting for her tomorrow morning because she couldn't wait to find out what Ayin was capable of. Ryan Rico spun around and headed for the doors, and just as Suke tried to shout her name, she cut him off. Let's go. While everyone else just stood there in stunned silence. Night swallowed the sky, and Itsuki collapsed onto the bed he'd planned to sleep in exhaustion, crushing him after that brutal day, even wondering if he could really survive living here. Humming to himself, he flopped onto the pillow. Then morning rolled in, and suddenly a weight pressed his shoulder, his arm went numb, and that fresh, sweet smell filled the air. He froze in fear the moment he saw Ainin, his arms practically naked, and then he blurted out a scream, demanding to know what she was doing there. Aina didn't have an answer at first, but once her thoughts finally lined up, she looked at him and said that Rinnerik claimed it was a duty. Itsuki seethed at the master, snapped his eyes shut, and demanded she get dressed. Then Aina froze, convinced she wasn't good enough, but Itsuki shot back right away, and Aini finally swallowed her pride and apologized. Sorte's head popped up in the doorway, and before Anya could even react, she screamed, launched into a forward handspring, then snapped a Suki kick straight to its face, yelling that this was instant punishment. Suki, bleeding from her nose, demanded what he thought he was doing, and Sorte snapped that he was nothing but an animal, then vowed she'd protect Anya from him. He tried to explain, but Sorte cut him off cold, not even letting him finish, and just like that, Aina stepped in and told them to calm down, while Reinwick chuckled about how nice it is to be young, then sipped tea with a grin. Itsuki Shinomiya got swallowed by his memories. Agatus had shipped him to another world, and her words kept drilling into his head, do your best. He still remembered that giant caterpillar and the mockery that somehow happened by mistake. Then boom, he finally ran into a girl who was trying to make herself his servant. The room is nearly empty, just a small group huddled at one table when Anya leans in and tells him that once they finish eating, they're heading to the Merchant Z, and he instantly shoots back. Are you sure? Amy looks completely lost and blurts out that she has to figure out what she's worth as a servant. Then she whips around to her Suki, calls him master, and pleads for him to take care of her. Itsuki snaps to Aini that he can't stand how it sounds, and Aini's face drops in shock, clearly rattled. The girl fires back. What exactly don't you like, thinking it's because she assumed Itsuki hates hearing Aine call him master, since she swears it feels rude. The girl's mind started racing, and she brainstormed a whole menu of ways to say it, calling him lord, dear, sweetheart, or even my leg. Suki was stunned when Amy of all people said that to him, and Amy kept trying to figure out how to address him, then said it was way too soon for that, but she could still call him my precious. The guy's totally lost his word snag as he stutters. He blurts out for the girl to stop, and I just sit there thinking, like, what is happening right now? A bewildered Aine finally spills the truth to her Suki, saying her race has a rule that names her husband after their very first night. Sorte slams her fork down and angrily jabs her plate, snapping that this is totally unnecessary. She makes it crystal clear she won't let her friend become Itsuki's servant. With fierce confidence, Sorte declares she'll buy Aina's freedom back soon. The girl erupts into a scream, teetering on the edge of tears, like she's about to lose it. The boys burst out of the place and head down the street, and Itsuki leans in, asking Sorte if she's truly ready to buy Aina back. The girls march side by side. Sorte pulls Aina into a tight hug, promising he'll protect her no matter what. Aina practically blurts out an answer to Uki's question, then declares she's ready to back her friend, but Aine shoots Sorte a sharp look and says she can't do it, because then the truth won't come through with real sincerity. Suki cuts in mid-sentence, snapping at the girl with pure displeasure that he still needs money. Sorte's rage sparks instantly, and Ina glares at the guy, questioningly. A tearful eye locks onto her friend, and she blurts that she's glad Sorte is worried, but her answer won't change no matter what. Despair crashes down, and she collapses into her friend's arms. I'm going with you, the girl insists. Meanwhile, Itsuki's completely baffled, staring at Sorte like, why won't you just give in? Sorte whips around and points straight at Itsuki, saying she'll go with her so he can't hurt her. The boys keep marching through the city streets when Itsuki turns and asks Aine if she still wants to hit the servant merchant, and Aine answers right away that she hasn't made up her mind yet, calling him my lord, like always. Suke trudged along, mind racing, wondering why she kept calling him like He figured she wasn't a bad kid, so he felt bad for her, but he still couldn't wrap his head around what she was trying to pull off. Four guys are slumped inside the Adventurers Guild HQ, debating something in total confusion, faces drawn, hearts heavy like Kiso. Like they've just heard bad news. A grumpy career hunter storms up, grills them, and demands to know what they're doing, because ever since morning, those guys have been walking around with nothing but heavy, gloomy vibes. One of the men tried to speak up about Aina, but the words died in his throat because crushing sadness hit him so hard he couldn't breathe. She spins back to him and says she gets his feelings, but stewing on them all day won't change a thing because she left this place for them. After those words landed, the girl's heart crumpled. Tears sprang to Ferrier's eyes. She blurted out, asking the man what he could do for Aina. The man stared back, sorrow heavy in his face, but something hopeful sparked in him, too. Then the men stepped in for the girl, suddenly backing her up, admitting she was right, blaming themselves, and vowing to bust their butts. And they kicked into action fast because they remembered the day was packed with requests. Master Reinreck strides up to the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Then Master, she spins around like she just heard something snap in the air. She bumps into a guy she already knows, and he tells her he hasn't stepped foot in a gun shop in ages. Then the gunsmith grills him about his life, and he just smiles and says he's doing great. The man leans in and tells her he heard she's got a new student, then pushes, so tell me, is that really true? Reinrix leans in and insists it's true, and the man's eyes light up. He calls it wonderful and asks if Ryan's any good at teaching. Suki's son and the girls finally roll up to the place they were headed right as Suki grins and says, "Trust me, this place is seriously interesting." The guys freeze in awe at the gorgeous mansion looming in front of them. And that two-story place looks so grand, it might as well be a real palace. Suki blurts out that he'd assumed the mansion belonged to some fancy aristocrat until he realized it was really the servant's house for a merchant, and the moment he sees it, he's dazzled by its beauty. Then he raps on the door and steps right inside. A gorgeous girl suddenly materializes in front of him, ushers him inside, and even apologizes for the wait so stunning that she looks like a real princess from this palace. The girl figured Itsuki had come from Reinrich to find her, then pulled him close and told him to follow her because the sight of her beauty had Itsuki grinning from ear to ear. Turns out, the outside was mind-blowing, but the inside blew it away even harder. The group slid onto a big sofa in the merchant's massive office, and then boom, a man Yatsuki already knew stepped in front of them, smiling, waving, and apologizing for making them wait. The man started telling him he'd heard about Itsuki from Reinrich, then thanked him for picking their side, only for Itsuki to point out that the other day, he looked like he'd spotted him somewhere. Lord Yasa stepped in and said his name, then dropped into the seat across from the boys, while the girl who'd welcomed Suki at the mansion entrance rushed in with hot tea. Suki's gratitude hit her so hard, she thanked her back, blushing the whole time. Itsuki's stomach dropped. Aina was stunning, but this pretty just felt like pure torture. He wasn't thrilled to have such a cute girl dragged into being his servant. And right then, Yasu snapped his attention on him and started sizing him up. Yeah, he sees him smiling, asks the guy if he likes the girl who just met him, and the guy blushes hard. Then he suddenly feels ashamed for saying he shouldn't pay attention to him. The mansion's owner thrust her forward and said her name was Wendy, and Suki's stomach dropped. He swore this world was laughing at him. He couldn't wrap his head around how a girl like her could be nothing but a servant. Shame and panic flooded him, and worst of all, the guy didn't just do it, he'd even gone and hurt him. Sorde told Yosis to push faster, and Yosis stared back in total confusion, then scrambled to soothe its oogie down. The merchant told the girls he was about to judge what they were worth as servants, and I reluctantly gave in while she shook with fear and swallowed her tears. Yeah, he started inspecting the girls and declared they were in perfect shape, but the moment he learned they were from the Scarlet Frontier, shock hit him like lightning. Sorde snapped, "Wait. Why am I even being counted in this?" And Yasis immediately laid it all out. He'd gotten every detail from Rainrich, and the money involved was huge, so huge that just Ina alone wouldn't even cover it. The merchant kept going. If Ina had to serve and work by herself, it would crush her, so Sartet could step in as a servant and take the weight off her shoulders. Sorte said she understood everything, but it hit her like a wrecking ball, pure, unbearable sadness tearing through her, and Ina was just as crushed, furious with grief for her friend. Sorte's eyes burned with tears, but she'd already accepted it. She told Ina, "I'm fine," then asked if they'd be together forever. Then she didn't even wait for the reply, because she could read the truth in Ina's eyes. Sorte shot to her feet with pride and declared she'd be a servant. Then Wendy beckoned them and invited them to come along with her. Yasas promised, "Now I'm going to tell you all about the Suki and the servants," and the boy snapped his attention right onto him. The merchant laid out the different kinds of servants. Debt servants were bought and sold for cold economic reasons, and criminal servants had blood on their hands, so they were seized and forced into service. And then there are these special servants pulled into service for royal, tribal, or secret reasons. Here, they're debt servants. Suki listened like his life depended on it. and he finally got the whole thing. Wendy burst into the little room and shouted that the evaluation was starting right now. She blurted out whether they could hold their own in a fight, because everyone knew those girls were the real adventurers. Aina and Sorte instantly felt awkward and admitted they weren't exactly combat geniuses. Then Wendy leaned in and asked if they could cook, and the girls confessed they only cooked when they were on the road. Then Wendy leaned in and asked if they'd ever worked housekeeping before. No wait, no pause, because she already understood. She flashed that sweet smile, told them to strip off their clothes, and left them stunned. Einan and Sarte stared in shock, realizing they'd been dragged into all of this. Everything made them feel wildly uncomfortable, and the embarrassment hit hard. But even so, they clenched their teeth and kept following orders, no matter what. The girls yanked off their clothes, stopping right in their underwear. Wendy strutted up and ordered them to check, and the moment her words hit, their faces burned with embarrassment and they squirmed in pure discomfort. Wendy thanked them, stepped in close, and demanded they turn their backs to her. The girls didn't get why, but they still obeyed and faced away. Wendy slid up behind Aina and wrapped her in a hug, and Aina's cheeks flared with pure embarrassment. Then Wendy quickly apologized in the sweetest voice. Aina was thrown off by Wendy's sudden move, stuck in the most helpless, awkward limbo, and the girl just wanted to vanish straight through the floor from pure crushing shame. When he told her there were different kinds of servants, she still had to do whatever her master demanded, and if she could satisfy her lord, she'd earn the praise everyone wanted. All this time, Sorte, who'd been staring at it all, sat there in pure shock, crushed by the moment itself and by the awful truth that she was waiting for the same kind of judgment. Wendy clocked that Aini was totally new to this. Then she slid a hand to her inner thigh. Ayan's cheeks flared with heat from everything that was unfolding. She wanted it to stop right now, because it felt like one more second and she'd completely crumble into tears from sheer hopelessness. Right out of nowhere, Sorty barrels in from behind and shoves Wendy in the back like, "Bam!" Wendy yelps, trying to shut this down, begging, "Stop, what are you doing?" Wendy got pushed right to the floor, and the shock hit her like a punch while Ine stared in disbelief, grateful at the same time for what she'd just done. Wendy shot Sorty a sly grin and said, "Looks like I'm walking out of here with zero money." The girl stuck out her tongue and teased Sorte with it, even while shame burned her face because deep down, she was thrilled she'd managed to shut down that bizarre assessment. Yasus kept telling Itsuki about the servant's contract nonstop, and the boy hung on every word, locking it all in his memory. Wendy pounded on their door, hurriedly apologized for making them wait, then ushered the girls into the men's office and announced the evaluation was finally ready, thanking them for sticking it out. Aina and Sorte looked crushed, like something was breaking their hearts. Suki noticed it instantly and snapped, "What happened to you guys?" When he asked, the joyless Aini snapped that he didn't get to ask her questions anymore, so Suki just couldn't take it and demanded to know why. Sorte blurted, then totally lunged at him with furious screams, snapping that Ion had told him not to ask any questions. Yet Itsuki still had no clue what was even going on. A freaked out Yasi squints at the paper with the girl's evaluation, while the girl's startled eye locks onto him as he spits out the results, and you can practically see her worry bleeding through. Then the merchant kicks off the results for the second girl, and Sorte's already fuming. Unimpressed, Yasus leans in and tells Itsuki the same thing both girls can fight, but neither of them can handle the housework. The merchant insists Aina's results are spot on, then leans in and asks if one of Sorte's findings is secretly negative. Wendy confirms it and then starts spilling the details about her. She claims the girl is an adult from the Wolf People tribe, but still somehow underdeveloped. That hits Sorte like a punch. Shame floods in. She hates the way Wendy's talking, because to her, this is none of their business. When you started explaining how Sorte handled the sexual intercourse assessment, the girl's face went bright red. She was mortified, totally frozen, and didn't know what to do with herself. Wendy slipped in behind Sorte and locked her arms around her hips, and Sorte shrieked, begging her to stop, yet Wendy kept tightening the grip and shifting her hold over and over, while Sorte screamed that she hated it and just wanted it to end. Wendy wrapped her arms around the girl just above the waist. Then, out of nowhere, Sorte erupted into wild laughter, and Wendy felt tickles flood her instantly. Wendy recounts Sorte's reaction to the assessment, saying it'll hit the partner hard, and Yasi just listens in calm silence while Itsuki, right there, can't help but freeze in shock at how she turned out to be a wolf, because in his head, he'd been sure Sorte was a dog. Wendy declared the assessment finally hit the payment mark. Ains was valued at 6 million Nor, and Sorte's at 4 million Nor. Yosef pushed for the contract ceremony to happen right now, then told everyone to huddle up in a circle and fold their hands, and the guys snapped into it, doing exactly what he ordered. The boys clasped their hands and grilled the merchant. "Are we doing this right?" Yasis nodded and said, "You've got it," then urged them to start. The moment they stepped onto it, the ground flared to life, then the back of their hand burned bright too, and suddenly a coat of arms manifested right there. Suk's palm burned with glowing light, and he couldn't stop asking if the ceremony was finally done. Then, Yasi, said the contract was sealed for good. The girl's palms started glowing too, and the merchant leaned in to explain the contract was unstoppable because it locked their bond together using a special skill. Yasis kept talking, insisting the contract barred servants from hurting the master or even harboring hostility toward him, like it was some built-in safety net, and then the key had looked completely shocked. He didn't buy it for a second, so he snapped his attention to Sorte and told her to look then. Before he could finish the sentence, she whirled and drove her spear straight at Itsuki. Suddenly, Sorte's body seized up in sharp pain, and she couldn't even lay a hand on Itsuki. Then she and Ani both dropped to the floor, clutching their heads like their skulls were splitting open. Yasus tells them the truth: if they try to strike him, severe headaches will slam them hard every time. A key like that knocked the wind out of him, and shame burned hot as the girls stared. Sorte jolted up, and Suki Astar rushed in, asking if she was okay. Suki told Sorte that once she learned her lesson, she'd rethink how she acted right before she charged in with brute force and snapped that she was a dog girl. Sorte stared him down with raw menace and yelled back, "I'm not a dog, I'm a wolf." Aine burst into laughter as she watched them, and Sorte and Itsuki whipped around, stunned at her reaction. Aine quickly apologized, admitting it looked like they were both having the time of their lives. Suki and Sorte snapped together, yelling in one furious voice that this wasn't fun at all, and Yasus just repeated that the contract was over. He thanked the guys, then told them to come back again. They stormed out of the mansion, head spinning about the next move, and I decided to call over my Suki, asking him to meet up at the Adventurers Guild so we could file the report. And the boy sat there thinking hard. Night has fallen, and Hayato stares up at the glittering sky, while the girls huddle by the fire as food sizzles until one of them suddenly says, "Hayato still hasn't come back." The second cat girl snaps, surprised that Hayato is late, blurting that she's starving and wants to chow down on meat. The first girl tells you the meat isn't coming. You are stuck waiting for the next city, and the cat girl blows up, furious. The cat girl snaps back and remembers the jerky, then whips around to hunt it down. She swears she'll toss it into the soup, but the other girl slams the brakes, telling her it's meant for a rainy day and begging her not to ruin it. A third girl creeps up on them naked, skin glistening as water drips down her body. Then she demands they don't add meat to the soup, because if they do, she won't be able to drink it. The first girl freezes in shock and blurts out what she's doing, calling her Emily. Emily can't figure out why the girl looks shocked, so she shrugs and says she just came back from a swim in the spring, only for the girl to snap that Hayato's already here and she'd better not wander around without any clothes. She shrugged it off and asked the girl, "Why are you stressing so hard?" But the girl couldn't wrap her head around why Emily elves acted like that. Still, Hayato hasn't shown up yet. She tells me Chris slipped out to go find him. Emily leaned in and told her friend, "Lady, you smell a little," then urged her to take a bath because, she said, Hayato probably won't like it, only for Letty to instantly blush so hard her whole face went hot. While Emily and Letty were locked in an argument, the cat girl's mind was zeroed in on one thing: meat, just how to get it, and when she'd finally sink her teeth in. Night has swallowed the world. An owl perches on a branch, staring down at a lonely boy brooding on a rock in the middle of the forest. Ayato stares at his palm, longing burning in his eyes as tears threaten to spill. Out of nowhere, a man creeps up behind him and drapes a blanket across his shoulders. Hayato jolts in terror at the surprise and blurts that a light wind has picked up, because if it keeps going, his body will start to freeze. He turns around fast to see who it is, and boom, Chris is right there in front of him. Relief hits him like a wave. He smiles and thanks her on the spot, but the moment he does, Chris suddenly gets all flustered and embarrassed for some reason. They stared up at the breathtaking mountains ahead, side by side. Then Hayato blurted that it's Suki, and he couldn't help but worry they'd be alright. Everyone in the Adventure Guild was having a blast when a man walked right up to Suki, slipped an arm around his shoulders like they were old friends, and said, "You guys crushed it today, so I'm buying." Suki only grinned and told him he'd pay for it himself. The guild members crowd in front of him and drop into a small bow, apologizing on the spot. "Suk," they say, "we know you expected an apology right away." Suk is like, "Then what's this?" And the men fire back that Aini proved the difference, and now they're telling him they'll do their best too. Everyone dropped into their seats and kept talking, and the men swore that if Suk couldn't forgive them, then they'd take whatever punishment he dished out right from his hands. The guy just smirked and said, "I've been through plenty of moments like that, back in another world." The man blurts out that he's a good one, while Huki now puts their trust in him, and the guild stands on the edge of their seats, waiting for the potions the alchemists have just prepared. Suddenly, Sorti snapped, "Hey, Suki!" And the boy whipped around. She was firing off insults that it was all the contract's doing, not his independence, and she warned him, "Don't get cocky." Itsuki hated the way Sorti spoke to him. He even compared her to the clingy boss from his old job. Aina's cheeks burned with shame for her friend, and she quickly lowered her gaze to tell him the truth. Sorte had simply had a little too much to drink. Floor. Rage flooded Sorte the second Itsuki's words hit, and she snapped that she wasn't okay with what he said because he'd just insulted her looks. Now she was seconds from exploding, demanding Itsuki apologize to her. Huki swore he'd do nothing to the girls as servants, and Sorte didn't buy it. He just figured Huki was bluffing. Suke snapped with rage. He was sick of this top versus bottom nonsense and demanded they stop spewing absurd things, leaving Aina and Sorte completely stunned. They called him Siki, begging him to come back, so he nodded, stepped in, and headed straight for them. The girls were left standing there, alone. Sorte still felt heavy after that talk with her Suki. She warned I not to fall for him, and I just nodded along like an easy target, then took a few more sips from her mug. Worn out, Sortaya slumped onto the table, whispering to Aina that she could pull off anything like this, while Suki and the guys kept right on kicking back, laughing, and having a blast. Aina chewed on Sorte's words, nodded like it clicked in her head, and then stared at Itsuki with a mystery burning behind her eyes as she kept thinking. Suki was still laughing it up with the men, shouting that this other world was awesome, and everyone else nodded along, totally agreeing with him. One of them stepped up Suki and bragged about the luxury they just pulled off, then asked if the payment situation was all good. Suki grinned and said, "Don't worry," then promised to show off his skills right now. Suki shot his hand up, palm facing the sky, and boom, a coin launched straight from his grip. He snapped the thing out of the air, flashed it to the crowd like he owned the moment, and the guys instantly stared, blown away. Itsuki held up his silver coin like it was a trophy, bragging that they should go get him a drink. Then one guy jumped onto the table and kept shouting about his skill, cackling at full volume, until someone pointed out that Itsuki's really got a silver coin and the other man couldn't believe it was the only one. The men fired off a question: how many coins did Itsuki have right now? Then Farah asked them straight up if it was fine to pay for it with their money, and the men just stood there, totally thrown off by all of it, while Suki was still out there having a blast. That night, the full moon blazed over a starry sky and lit up the whole city like it had something to prove at the Adventure Guild HQ. The fun was already done, and the man crashed asleep right at the tables. His Suki was nearly gone too, until thoughts started creeping in. He finally got it. This whole new world was where he'd start again after meeting all those different companies, and he could still feel that huge uproar in his bones. Yeah, maybe the second life wasn't so terrible, because right here is where his steady, measured life kicked off. The key burned into his mind, the faces of everyone he'd met on the road after being reborn, yet he couldn't wrap his head around how he died. All he could do was stare at the mystery, replaying the reasons that had dragged him into a second life. He pounded on the Adventure Guild's headquarters door, flashed a grin, greeted everyone with a "good morning," and declared he was from the Alchemist Guild. The men snapped their heads around, greeted him, and demanded to know if he was delivering potions. Suke confirmed it, then shot them a look of pure disapproval as he grumbled that they were drinking again. The men said there hasn't been a single huge request lately, but Scarlet Frontier is getting hit with interest, no doubt, and the guy stared back at him, totally confused. Itsuki rethought everything. Why, out of nowhere, he now had servants from the Scarlet Frontier, fierce female adventurers with unbelievable skills, remembering Ayin, swearing she'd be his servant to pay off her debt, and Sorte, fuming that broken potions had forced her into the same job. The servants hustle beside him as they scour materials for his alchemy, while they're also in full swing, battling as adventurers and jumping in to help with every step. He still remembers Sorte's rage. She swore she'd make him pay the debt fast, then sink her teeth into him while he kept grinding in alchemy, brewing his own potions, and even forging his own accessories. Until now, he can craft recovery potions at the intermediate level. He remembered the level was rising the usual way, the job still getting done in its own steady rhythm, and even though he wasn't worried or rushing, he just knew he'd grow little by little. Morning hit, and Suki had just jolted awake. He trudged to the window with a shake of his head, already plotting what to do today. Then his mood snapped bright. His hand shot up, and he fired off a spell using his pocket money. Like clockwork, a coin snapped out of his palm, then he caught it midair, squeezed it tight, and grinned at how effortlessly he pulled it off. And here's the crazy part, his unique skill, pocket money, had finally upgraded. It hit level 2, and that meant he was getting a one-time receipt worth 10 times the original amount. Then the first gold coin started rolling in. He figured that if the human's pocket could pull it off, he'd do exactly one thing, because Suki was fired up and he was already plotting to have a blast today. Suke figured that in this other world, he'd finally slow down, but instead, he just kept working no breaks, not even once. In the dark alchemy room, he caught sight of Reinrich's face and everything clicked. She'd been pushing him just like this from the start. And now, he realized, yeah, he was absolutely wiped out. He couldn't stop thinking about how he still hadn't even learned the city of Einziel, so he figured there had to be spots where a guy could have some real fun with beautiful girls. And he kept wondering if this place was truly a trading city. Suki tore down the city streets, grinning like he owned the night, shouting for everyone to brace themselves because he was about to deliver the entertainment, and he meant it. Suki grabbed a steaming, mouth-watering hot dog, sank onto a bench, and threw out the idea. First, we recharge. He was convinced he had to rebuild his strength before anything else. Because honestly, he didn't know this place at all, not beyond the route to and from work. While Suki chowed down, he grumbled that the city map felt like a total pain and started wondering where he could even get one. Then his eyes caught something and he snapped his head around. Right ahead, Itsuki spotted Jesus and Wendy, and the second the man laid eyes on his client, he snapped into recognition and greeted him with a grin. Wendy nudged her Suki to remember her name and flashed a bright good morning. And her Suki drank in her beauty like it was the best way to wake up, then shot right back. Good morning, to match her warmth. Yasis spun toward his Suki and asked, "You been out since the crack of dawn?" The guy said he was off today, ready to tell him he planned to go have fun, then he hesitated and backed out. Instead of staying put, he set out to shop, but he didn't really know his way around the city. The merchant heard him out and told him Wendy could show him around in Suke. He definitely didn't expect someone to offer help that willingly. Yasus spilled the news that Itsuki had just shown up in their city, and word came with a bunch of scary worries. The merchant straight up asked Itsuki if he wanted Wendy to heal his daily fatigue today, and when Wendy clocked the weird look on his face, she instantly figured he wasn't pleased with her. Itsuki just froze in total disbelief. He'd never imagined anything like that in his wildest dreams. Then he started shaking his head and outright denying Wendy's words, until she snapped around and told him, "Then you take care of me." And Itsuki immediately lit up and agreed. Suke kicked off his day plan to Wendy, and the first thing on his list was simple. He was dying to grab some fresh clothes. They strolled into a clothing store, and the guy wasted no time grabbing outfits off the racks, testing them one by one until Suk reached for a gorgeous tailcoat first, tried it on, and immediately asked if it was too bright. Wendy shut that down fast, saying it looked perfect on him. The girl noticed Yitsuke didn't care about the suit, so she waved him off and told him to pick something else, and he actually agreed. Right then, another girl slipped up behind the guys and shouted at them, and Wendy spun around, staring at her like, "Wait, what?" Uki was still staring at himself in the mirror, replaying the fact that this was his first time shopping with a girl. Then Wendy's call cut in as she told him someone had offered her some clothes. Suki eyed her with sharp interest because the second she stepped in, the new look made her look incredible. Then the girl who'd come up to them leaned in and asked Suki if he wanted to buy that outfit for Wendy. The salesgirl gushed that Wendy fit the outfit perfectly and that she looked stunning, and that's when Key's excitement hit hard until she suddenly got all flustered and embarrassed by Wendy's look. Wendy hung there, waiting for his answer, but he just stared at her like she was magic. Then Suki practically gasped at how gorgeous she was. He snapped back to the seller and ordered the outfits wrapped up, and the girl smiled, reminding him that Suki still had to buy clothes too. Wendy cringed with embarrassment and hurriedly apologized to Itsuki for dragging him into buying clothes for her too, but before she could even finish, he lit up with joy and gladly picked out a brand new outfit. Since his own clothes were on sale anyway, Wendy thanked him with a sincere smile and promised she'd treat his gift with care. Suke realized he only barely understood what it felt like to get hooked by the seller's scam. Then, out of nowhere, the girl snapped that it was her turn. The guy blinked, totally lost, and stared at her like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" When you stared at the boy and started telling him that today she planned to heal Itseki like crazy because that's the order she got from Yosas, she grabbed his arm and urged him to go somewhere. Uki and Wendy ducked into a cafe, grabbed tea, and talked like they had secrets to spill, while that guy stared at the measured life he'd been craving, amazed that crossing into another world could finally hit him with the kind of relief he'd been waiting for. Happy watched Suki and Wendy walk out of the place, holding hands as they moved down the city streets. Then, out of nowhere, a man yelled at Suki and stared at her with sharp, indignant fury. Itsuke didn't even recognize the man and snapped, asking Wendy if she knew him. Then Wendy's eyes lit up, and she tried to introduce Itsuke, but the man exploded into yelling at her, demanding what she thought she was doing there, and then he turned on Itsuke and demanded the same. Suki started telling the man that Wendy was showing him around the city, then the moment his rage hit, he snapped that Suki must have bought Wendy and promised he'd buy the girl too. Wendy panicked and ducked behind Itsuki, and the guy warned the stranger that Wendy was scared, then demanded he stop screaming. The man started lecturing Suki, insisting Wendy didn't belong with a poor nobody, and then he snapped at her to get out of the way. Suke hated it, turning to Wendy and demanding, "Who are you?" And she shot back, "I'm Dataril." Then she added, "I'm the son of someone powerful in this city." The man's fury kept burning. He snapped at Itsuki, demanding to know who he was, then blurted that he was gathering 120 million Nora to buy out Wendy and demanded to know whether Itsuki had that kind of money. Suki spun toward Wendy, stunned that the man would say such things. Dariel snapped, roaring that a lowly commoner like Suki had zero business getting anywhere near Wendy. Then he demanded Yosas be brought in, while his assistants hurried to Dadaral, begging him to calm his storm of rage. Itsuki didn't care a bit about Dadaril's words. He pulled Wendy into a hug and boldly swore he'd protect her. Right there, Dada Ril and his assistants were stunned into silence, completely blown away. Aine and Sorte strolled down a winding forest path, trading excited words about the fact they'd scored an incredible harvest today. Sorte snapped her attention to Aine and said, "I'm pissed after we hauled in all that stuff, we still dragged it right over to Itsuki." Aine just shrugged and said, "I can't change a thing. That's the contract." Aine snapped that if they didn't grab the materials, it'd slam the brakes on Itsuki's work. Then Sorte shot back, saying Itsuki, even off duty, was already chasing some woman right under her nose. Suki barked with unstoppable confidence that he was Wendy's master now, and Dataro exploded with pure rage. He couldn't believe his ears. Wendy rushed into Suki's arms, blurted out apologies, and confessed how guilty she felt for everything. Then she yanked back so fast that Suki panicked, asking if he'd squeezed her too hard. Dada Real kept yelling at Itsuki, snarling that he had no right to lay a hand on Wendy and insisting Itsuki was turning against him, while Itsuki didn't even flinch, totally unbothered by the whole storm of anger. Dada Real froze at Etsuki's reaction, and Etsuki just kept saying he didn't care like he'd already seen people like that 1,000 times. Then Datarel snapped that Etsuki would regret defying him because he'd never, ever forgive him. Datarel swore he wouldn't hand Wendy over to anyone, and Suki snapped back that he wouldn't give her to a man like Datarel. Pure tension crackled between them until Wendy suddenly stepped in and spoke up. Suki whipped around and stared at Wendy like, "Wait, are you asking if he's gonna buy you?" And Suki never saw that coming. The Duril glared at them in pure disapproval until a man suddenly showed up and instantly recognized Daedril. Yasis stood right in front of them, and when he clocked who it was, Huki or so he recognized Dataril nearly burst with relief, asking Yasis to explain everything. Yasis pressed Dataril, asking if he truly had the nerve to buy Wendy by dropping 120 million Nora for her, and before he even answered, Dataril dodged it and demanded to know who Itsuki was. Dataril snapped at Itsaki about why Wendy was with him, thinking the merchant had just bought her, but Yasi laid out the whole story still. Dataril didn't buy it, and Yasi insisted he was telling the truth. Dataro felt so awkward it hurt, and Suki just couldn't figure out what kind of guy he really was because Dataro even thought the man looked like Rain Rich. Datarel snapped that he'd buy Wendy out no matter what, so Suki better not get anywhere near her. Yasis grudgingly caved to Datarel, then snapped his eyes to Suki, pushing the idea that they settle it in a showdown. Whoever wins gets Wendy, and Itsuki nearly choked on the merchant's wild suggestion. The girls stormed into the alchemist's headquarters, where Reinrich stepped in to meet them, and the master immediately asked how they were doing. Aina snapped at Reinrich, "Where's Itsuki now?" And Reinrich shot back, "He's locked himself in the back room." Sorty kicked the door open with her foot and blurted a warning, "We're coming in." And Ainu froze, stunned by what her friend just did. The girls slipped into Suki's room with a whole batch of materials, and the worn-out boy thanked them. Then, out of nowhere, Sorty spotted something sitting on his desk. Sorty caught sight of the jewelry Itsuki had crafted, and the sheer amount stunned her. Aine leaned in and demanded to know why he needed so many accessories. Sorte stared in awe like it was magic. Then Itsuki started laying out the whole story, piece by piece. Sorte sucked in a breath, then exploded into furious yelling at Itsuki, and the boy and Ina froze, terrified by the sheer volume of it. Itsuki begged Sorte to stop shouting, but she shoved past him and kept going. Dadaril's father was one of the big influential names in the city, and arguing with him was basically impossible. Sorte said it was impossible to slip away from him. Then Suki crumpled into despair and begged the girl again not to yell at him. Sorte slammed Suki reckless because he only moves when he's under some kind of influence. Then the boys kept brawling and quarreling. Aina stepped in, snapped at them to shut up, and told Sorte to stop screaming, claiming Itsuki only did it to save a woman. But Sorte shot back that Itsuki did it because Wendy was just the servant merchant's hottest beauty. Aina hurried to apologize to her Suki, insisting she never meant it with malice. Aina told Itseki that her and Sorte were going to take him around the city soon, but they got there first, so Itseki was left staring in pure shock. Sorte snapped back and denied everything Aini said, insisting it wasn't about that at all. Uki then apologized to the girl and tried to pull her into a hug, but she flat out refused. Ina whipped around to Suki and demanded, "So what is this competition really about?" And the guy just shrugged, "You've got to collect money." He launched into his plan to rake in 80 million in almost no time, and Sorte nearly lost it when she heard the number because she couldn't wrap her head around how Wendy was worth 30 times more than she was. Rage boiled in Sorte's chest. She snapped and lunged at Itsuki, and Aini sprinted in to stop her. Then Itsuki turned to the girls and demanded they gather materials for his accessories. And Aini and Sorte nodded and threw themselves into the task. Aini promised she'd stick with Suki during their free time, then Suki shot back. "But is the opponent really that strong?" Aini paused for a beat and said, "Yeah, I've heard some nasty rumors about them." Suke said that right then, he was betting everything on the girls and he planned to move potions in bulk to the Adventure Guild. Aine couldn't wrap his head around the fact that he'd still agree to sell potions in a time like this. Then Suki hit him with it. There was a promise already made, and the girl even said he was genuinely kind. The girls were on the verge of leaving, but Sorte still couldn't settle. She blurted that she'd go hunt and gather Ukiwish them. A safe journey. Wendy sat in the room, lost in thought, and remembered begging Itsuki not to join the competition while he just stared, clueless, and told her it would all be fine before patting her on the head. A sharp knock hit Wendy's door, and right away they asked if they could come in. Then Yassis stepped into view, standing right in front of her, and demanded to know how the girl was feeling. When he said it didn't need to be good, she couldn't wrap her head around why he'd even throw that kind of Suki competition at her. Yasa blurted out that he wanted to apologize for using her, but he insisted that with everything happening right now, this outcome would somehow benefit both of them. Wendy plopped on the bed and chatted with Janice. And when Janice urged her to relax, Wendy felt the situation finally point them in the right direction. Rage bubbled in her chest. She could feel that Yassis was trying to auction her off to Mr. Dadaril for a fortune, because she's a special servant with the rare privilege to pick her own master. She had a sinking feeling he was about to steamroll her into giving up her privilege through this competition, and when they locked eyes and glared, Giannis couldn't help wondering if she'd even had fun today. Wendy clutched her chest and remembered Ugi's face, smiling as she said she'd had an amazing time. Then Yana pushed her forward and told her she had to do everything to make that happiness real. She shot up and demanded, in a loud voice, why he'd even dare propose a competition like that. And when she realized that 80 million burrows could be hauled in just 1 week, she couldn't stop staring. Yeah, his tough exterior finally crumbled, and he figured Wendy was convinced he'd never pull it off. So he shot her a confident grin and promised that this client wouldn't just slip away that easily. Wendy flushed hard, but he kept smiling. Suke slumped at the table and kept tinkering, and suddenly you could hear half-formed phrases fly out, plans for everything, laying out the best possible outcome for both of them and for himself. Hammer in his grip, he exhaled and his hands went numb. Ryan Risch burst into the room and told them to take a break, warning that too much work would turn sloppy fast. The craftswoman spotted the jewelry and realized he'd been cranking out tons of it. Then she figured he must be aiming to open an accessory shop. With tea mugs steaming and treats laid out, she told it the way the girls had described it. Then Suki's eyes snapped to the master, because at first she'd figured young people were reckless, until she realized he was always sparring with someone. He snatched the mug, took a sip of tea, and squinted as doubt hit him, muttering that he wasn't that young anymore. Then Ryan Rick cut in fast, demanded silence, and said she only saw a fat little kid here. Reith slid up to the table and asked if he needed more, and Suk just grinned thanking him, then kept talking to the master, because she absolutely needed her advice. Snatching the cookie, he admitted, yeah, straight up that accessories alone wouldn't pay forever, and with a quick apology, he pushed his real idea, let me sell potions outside the Alchemist Guild. Rainrich wrestled with every word, convinced it couldn't be done until the master snapped back that it wasn't about that at all. Then she leaned in and asked if he knew what Dadaril was selling, and that struck a spark in Itsuki's mind, even making him think about a pig farm. She said he was just naturally like that and that he had no business getting involved, because this pig was the head of the pharmaceutical guild. Suki just had a revelation, and the master immediately warned him, if you try to make money off potions, I'll step in. The guy snapped his own face hard, realizing there was zero way out of this mess. But Reinrich figured this was the moment to blow the business wide open beyond potions. Then Suki chimed in with the same idea. He grabbed his card and went straight after Hayato. Somehow the call got through, and Hayato admitted they hadn't talked in forever. The monster surged toward his team, and he immediately turned to Sinki, asking how he could help, only for Sinki to say he had something he needed to ask. Meanwhile, Letty and Chris, hiding behind a rock, yelled to Hayato that the monster was coming fast, and Suki insisted on one thing first, making sure it was the right time for him to talk. Hayato didn't spot a single problem, even as a giant bird swooped up over his squad's heads. Then the whole team surged into battle, and Itsuki immediately grilled him about the bag he'd handed over, wondering if he could actually use it. The girls tore into a bunch of monsters, and while Chris unleashed magic, the cat girl carved her way through everything with razor-sharp sword skills. A bird shot toward Lady, and she snapped, "Move," clearing the way fast. Hayato didn't care if he wanted to grab what was in that bag. He could use every last bit. A bird shot upward and screamed, and Hayato kept going, pointing out what was in that bag while warning him some of it he simply couldn't use yet. Thanks to his level. It was a promise, a warning that he'd somehow pull it off, and that totally stunned Hayato, because the way he managed it in such a short time blew his mind. He swore he'd do his best this time and haul the ore straight back from the dungeon, and as soon as he said it, Hayato sprinted toward the bird and drove his sword through the monster. It felt like he vanished straight through her, then a sharp bird-like cry tore the air, and it was like someone drilled a hole right through her skin. Hayato fumed, waiting for what Suki would deliver, and at first he didn't even buy it until Hayato confirmed his own words, and the girls behind him erupted in joy. Suki said his goodbyes, and then it hit him that Guild Card was basically a mobile phone, letting him reach a registered contact no matter where they were. So he dropped back into his seat, stretched out from sheer exhaustion, and kept grinding eyepiece on, polishing his gear like his life depended on it. Then he knocked once, ate, and crashed right back down to sleep at the table. Sortie threw herself into the chase, determined to catch the boar without panicking, while the girls sprinted right after it. Anya kept scanning, desperate to tell if they were finally getting close. She added that they had plenty of materials, so they could ease back with time, and Sortie nodded, feeling the pressure lift instantly. I told him the gentleman won't struggle with making accessories anytime soon, and that if he put his mind to it, he could start crafting even better things. Sortie stood ankle deep in the water, grimacing as she scrubbed the dirt away, and with a bitter, sad voice, she slammed this Scarlet Frontier mess as a total misuse. She hauled herself out of the water and snapped that she wanted to wipe out this debt fast. Ayn shot back that she was talking like only she looked happy while she dressed, then told her to quit bringing it up. Ayn tipped the freshly boiled kettle into her mug and tried to brush it off like it wasn't so terrible. Then Sortie looked at him and realized she'd trusted him far too much. The wolf girl snatched the mug, told him she hated guys like that, then chugged the whole thing, no hesitation, and I was so shocked I had to ask if it was really true. Sortie started to spell out what she meant, and it felt like those people just barged in without warning, wrecking everything inside, twisting your emotions into chaos, yet somehow. The worst part was that you'd start losing your grip, not even understanding what you were thinking anymore. She snapped serious, thinking there was 0 point in giving him attention here. Every guy who chased big curves was a total waste, so she forced a grin, spun around, and rushed back to Tsuki's work to make her presence felt. The girls burst into the Alchemist Guild and froze. There was Itsuki, trapped in Rinnerik and Ryath's grip. What in the world is happening, they thought, as Itsuki yanked free with a blood-curdling scream of, "No way," and broke loose. Reinrit stepped in and soothed the girls because nothing big had gone down, so he was a bit worn out, and they decided to cheer him up. Then Itsuki freaked out, convinced something dangerous was lurking, like the skull was there for a reason. The girl closed in, grabbed his hands, and pressed her spear right to Suki's neck. Now handing him the potion was easy. The master yanked Itsuki's mouth open and started feeding him the potion. He fought back, but the drops still splashed onto his tongue. "I'm not drinking something dangerous," he insisted, so he forced himself to look like he swallowed, then spit it out. Reinrich drove its uki fist into his stomach, forcing him to gulp the potion. Then his eyes buckled, his body went numb, and he crashed out. Suki slowly blinked awake, and a girl's voice asked, "Are you awake?" And then he realized she had her knees under his head. She was right there, offering him water, telling him to sip it slow. Suki thought those were Ain's knees then. Right then and there, Ains asked if he could finally stand up. He wanted to stay down a little longer, but the girl started shaking him until he jolted up, and when Suki looked over, he saw Sorte's knees there, like a silent command that screamed, "Get up now." Suki shot up, stammering, "Why Sorte?" And she snapped back that she had no choice. Then Siki called out Aine's name, and she answered instantly, only for Sorte to fume and label him a fool. He blurted out that his body hurt and that he was starving, and Ayan saw the gentleman finally wake up and immediately apologized for everything that went down recently. The three of them hunched at the table, and Geek barred the rules. He devoured the meat and polished off every scrap on the plate like a starving maniac. The girl stared at him, genuinely shocked. After he stuffed himself full, he grinned and rubbed his belly like it was pure victory. Then they shoved that dangerous medicine into his drink, and suddenly he was whipped into making accessories like a machine, even though he had zero memory of it. Reinwick sized up the accessories, and the bill slapped down at 40 million. Nora then Suki froze, because with only 5 days until the competition, they still had 36 million Nora to go. With supplies dwindling and the clock screaming, he had to invent something fast that could flip everything in one brutal move, so he slammed into his work and an idea finally hit. That day, the man gripped a chunk of rose quartz in his hands, and the second he poured magical power into it, the stone started to hum with vibrations, and a sudden, mind-blowing revelation hit him like lightning. Suki Shinomiyo was just a regular company employee. Then his nightmare began in another world, and nothing about it was easy. He tried to recreate a form from the movie designs burned into his memory over and over, but even though some broke and others still failed to do what they were supposed to, he finally hit a dead end and the whole thing stopped working. Shinomiya refused to give up. He poured every ounce of his soul into forging the servant, built to deliver the pleasures of human wisdom into the world. He slapped the tools onto the table and burst out, screaming that he'd finally done it. Then he thrust out his hand, revealing a shiny pink rotor, and called it the Thing. The girls just stared, totally clueless. He tried to explain it with a sarcastic jab, but I can't even. Then he swung back around and Sortie told him, "Look at them talk." The girls immediately assumed it was some kind of massage tool. Sortie pointed out Eintriet since she'd just said her shoulders were killing her, and when the girl agreed to give it a shot, she asked Suki to take care of her. He nodded, then his mind snapped back to how the device worked. Een sat there, holding her breath, and Iatsuki started right away. The girl flushed hot. Her whole body jolted numb from the rotor's vibrating buzz, and the massage crashed over her like pure bliss. making her realize she'd just found an insanely relaxing experience. After I finished the massage, I urged her to try it, straight up asking if she felt okay, and the wolf girl shot me a suspicious look, asking if that was really how it was supposed to be used. He got scared of her, because he can't stand smart dogs, so he rushed up to the girl and whispered the method to use it in his world right into her ear. His cheeks flared as she looked away, muttering, "That's just how it goes," then wheeled back to Ina and snapped that they had to get rid of him right now. Ina snatched the girl by the arm and demanded to know what happened, what was wrong. Curiosity burned as she wondered what was so messed up with the instrument, but Sorte refused to speak and ordered her to let go. And right then, Suki decided to step out for a bit. And the moment he took off, the girl yelled at him not to run away. He still pushed outside into the night, and after he checked his tool, his relief hit hard because the thing he'd whipped up in a hurry actually worked perfectly. Zuki figured spots like this had to exist here too. Maybe he could rake in cash without any competition. Then he stared at the tool again, remembered Wendy, and told her to hold on for a minute. He strolled down the street, plotting how to sell it, and then bam, he ran into a few men along the way. They stared each other down, and when one of them tripped Itsegi, he shot through the air and slammed into the masonry. As he hit the road, he heard laughter and voices right behind him, and the man was grimacing, swearing he'd broken his leg while the other guy snapped that he'd have to pay for it. The man stormed up to the fallen Itsuki and demanded like an apology deal that he cough up 2 million, or else then he promised he'd let it go. But the guy snapped back that it was way too steep and offered a potion instead. The man lunged for Itsuki and demanded money, then the boy yanked his hand off and shot back, asking if Dadaril had sent him. The man chuckled and asked for his name again, but Itsuki just didn't know it then. Right on cue, he sprang to his feet and sprinted away as the insults hit him, and the man and everyone around him roared at him to stop. He threw himself into the distraction, whipped his finger up at the sky, and shouted that a gold coin was dropping from above. At first the robbers laughed, but the second the coin actually rained down, their smug faces froze in shock. Suke was so relieved he didn't waste his pocket money skill today until the man snapped and threw a dagger straight at him. Suke spun around just in time to see it streaking toward his face. Right out of nowhere, a girl snapped her foot out and batted the blade aside. Suke hit the ground again. He spun around, staring at a cat girl who didn't say much at all, just one command, visit. Suki's jaw dropped in shock because the girl who saved him was Shiro, and suddenly, he was right back to their very first meeting in the city. They sat in a diner, chewing and trading stories about the stuff they keep running into, and while they ate, he leaned in and asked the girl what her name was. She bit into a sausage bun and said, Shiro. She stood over the Suki, sprawled on the rocks, and declared, I'm the master's weapon. If you reach for him, you'll die. Those men snapped rude threats at Shiro, and the second they didn't get their way fast enough, she shut them down because even if they begged and cried, she still wasn't letting them go. He swung, but Shiro was already behind him, taunting that he was too slow, and right then she snatched for her sword. Ready to cut when Itsuki tried to stop her, she glared at him, and her strike still went wide. But it only looked that way because the man still had a sword buried in his stomach, and he crumpled onto the road right as Shiro launched into a somersault and let out a karate scream. Finishing everything in one brutal strike at the same moment, she declared she was done, and Yatsuki couldn't believe how strong she was. He thanked her for her help, still scratching his head, and she told him, Yeti said to stand guard, Shiro will protect the master. Suke thought for a second, then demanded they bring her straight to her master only for Shiro to gasp and point at him like, wait, you're still the master. He looked lost again and demanded they take him to Yosa's, while the girl kept pressing, asking shyly straight up if he was actually going to buy Shiro, and then her mood snapped when she heard it wouldn't work anymore. But even so, he still wanted to rely on her. Itsuki was desperate to thank her, and he even traded a few words with Yosa's. Then Shiro turned around and told them, we can go. She sprinted ahead and it was her she chased, yelling for her to slow down because he couldn't keep up when she didn't listen. He suggested holding hands, but Shiro snapped that he wasn't treating her like a kid. Suke shot his hand out and begged her not to say it, and she blushed at his reach before sliding her own into his. They strolled along, fingers locked, while Shiro hummed a catchy tune under his breath. They were already closing in on Yasu's house when the man stepped out and demanded to know what happened so late at night. Then Siki tried to thank him for what he did with Shiro, but Yasu stared straight at Yatsuki and realized she'd fallen completely for him. Shiro lounged with her head on Itsuki's knee, and he couldn't help noticing how sweet and grateful she felt because he was about to show her something big. He yanked the rotor out and thrust it toward Yasu's, but Yasu's just stared, clueless about what he was trying to do with it. It's okay, he said. I'd love to trade them if we can. He thought he was about to snag those machines and asked the price. Then Itsuki shot out 4 fingers and bluntly named it 40 million. Yasi grinned and said, at most, around 100,000. Then fired off a quick thought that they were overselling it again because Suki was confident and dead set on making a presentation. The guy slapped the device down on the table and muttered that he didn't want to buy it. Yasus was totally lost, so Itsuki leaned in, all fired up, and declared that he wanted to buy the rights to it. Yosa stared back at them, totally baffled, then spelled it out. He's selling the rights to market that pink rotor as a massage product, and places like those. Itsuki nodded, confirming it. Yeah, he was totally intrigued by the product, thinking it looked crazy attractive, and the guy knew his way around these shops too. Suki was already grinning, ready to keep going until that man cut him off. He demanded the exact terms of the contract, and Itsuki started breaking it down. He wanted Yasses to shell out 40 million for exclusive rights to the rotor, so he could keep making it and selling it wholesale. He sets the price himself, but if he sells the goods, it's a straight demand of 50,000 per piece then. After pushing his contract, he sat tight, waiting for Yosis to answer. Only problem. He refused the deal because there's zero guarantee his cost would ever be reimbursed, and he's not about to pay 40 million for rights that don't mean anything. He also said there could be demand for the product, but there wasn't a good reason for you to keep it going just because you wanted to keep supplying it. Suke blurted out that he could handle the regular deliveries and that Ina and Sorte would go grab the materials for him. Yasus nodded and said, if the girls did the collecting, everything would run smooth. But then came the one big catch. He just rolled into the city like a lost vagabond, no home in sight, and nobody has a clue when he'll vanish again. And yeah, it kind of made sense because agreeing to an offer from some guy you barely even know screams zero trust. Yasis nodded. Then it's Suk, he continued. Suk threw himself forward like a vow, pledging his body and swearing he'd become a servant. Even the man blinked in shock, and so did Shiro. Yasis just couldn't wrap his head around it. Why would he go that far? Because this was something you shouldn't say. Not when everyone already knew the truth. The man burst out laughing and thought Huki was seriously interesting. Then the other guy tried to push for a contract, but Yasu shut that down fast and said it wasn't needed. In the end, he pushed for permanent rights to the quote pink rotor, and there was no use pretending it was only for the contract's lifetime. Itsuki was already rushing to grab the money and move on, but Yoses wouldn't stop talking. He warned that betrayal gets no mercy. Then the man leaned in and demanded if the term suited him when Itsuki swallowed hard and said yes, terrified. Yasis was already ready to lock in the 40 million, but Shiro was the real worry, and that next question had him on edge. Yank it out of Yasis's mansion and boom, the sun was already climbing the sky. Itsuki clocked it too, realizing he'd only built 10 devices since then, and the exhaustion hit him like a truck. Shiro jolted around toward the guy she was nodding off on, and Itsuki gently stroked her head until she drifted to sleep right there in the guild. Then he hauled her up onto his shoulders. When Shiro apologized, since they'd asked her to guard, she promised she'd protect the owner, and Itsuki agreed without a second thought. Datero barked at the men, smashing a plate as he did, then snarled that they couldn't handle some random stranger, so they'd better run it back and earn back every coin they'd been paid. The men scrambled, apologizing on the spot. The butler told him, show respect to the gentleman, any loud interference will only help the other side, and warned that if Yosis took offense, things could get ugly down the road. Dadarila nodded and vowed, I won't lose no tricks needed. Then he fired back that Itsuki couldn't get away with that crying, tear-streaked look because he'd make him regret. In the end, for offering his hands to Wendy. And in his head, it got worse. He pictured her in a bath, calling him Lord. The next day, voices crackled inside the Alchemist Guild. Itsuki stepped up and demanded what Dadaril had come for. But Dadaril didn't even wait for the competition day. He decided to boldly admit defeat. Daedral jabbed his finger at Itsuki and exploded, accusing him of having the nerve to call a man that then demanded, who do you think you are? Dadaril grinned and said he got the whole thing, and that's when Itsuki finally saw the huge gap in power and threw in the towel. Suki smirked, flashed a wide grin at Dadarila, and started hurling insults again, daring him because she was sure she could make him cry bitterly. Rila immediately sensed that Suki wasn't just joking. She'd truly been insulted. The girls leaned in, eyes locked on the fight. Datero roared that he'd never forgive the boy and promised to drag him through real hell, and when Suki burst into laughter, she jabbed a finger at him and told him to prove it. Their fight got cut short when Yosas burst in and snapped that it was earlier than the appointed day, then smirked and said the outcome was already sealed, before announcing the final results. In one wild moment, they dumped a ton of heavy sacks onto the floor, stacking them into a towering mountain. Dadaril grabbed a handful of coins with a trembling hand. Stunned, he couldn't even process it. And then It's So Cute stepped behind him and said he'd earned exactly 80 million. Itsuki jabs a finger at his own chest and declares, victory is mine, and Yasis whips around to Datoro saying, this is what it means. The moment the man realizes the client hit the full payment early, he freezes with shock. That's when the competition wrapped up for good and everything turned official. Dadaril started waving like crazy, insisting the guy was probably just messing around, then refusing to admit anything at all. The man whips his finger to the side, turns to Lee Trick, and declares he's certain she's the one who handed over the money. The woman complained that Dadaril was insanely loud. Then she tucked the phone away, shoved the package into the man's hands, and told him, go on, look at it. He snatched the package out of the air, demanded what it was, then tore it open and froze in disbelief, like his eyes were lying to him. Those were the payment details for the accessories, and the buyer was Leatrick. The man trembled, staring in disbelief like his eyes couldn't be trusted. She exhaled a cloud of smoke and nodded like, "It's all right here." Then she dropped the bomb. This guild bought every single accessory Itsuki made for 40 million. Dadaril stared in disbelief, because those accessories cost a jaw-dropping 40 million, and he just can't wrap his head around how any price like that could even exist. The woman insisted her judgment was spot on. Itsuki's alchemy wasn't something to sleep on at all, and at that very moment, her eyes locked onto the stunning accessory. Suke crumpled into tears and shouted, "Lethric!" And right then, Daral's rage exploded as he demanded where the boy had found the remaining 40 million. Suke snapped back that they were just trying to trick him. Yasus snapped his fingers and announced that Itsuki had gotten the last 40 million from him. Then he signaled the servant. He stepped in, clutching a tray in both hands, and shoved it toward Dadaril like, "Take a look at what I brought." Dadaril frowned and shot back. "And what's this supposed to mean?" Then he stared at the tray the young man brought and jerked in shock, calling it the King's Seal. Yasus corrected him, saying it was the pink rotor the customer had invented it. Yasus bought the exclusive rights for 40 million. And Datareal's voice stuttered as he insisted that if the king approved something like this, selling it himself would rake in a massive fortune. Itsuki told him he sold it to Yasus for just 40 million, and then he couldn't stop thinking about the King's Seal and how fast Yasus moved. Suki flashed a smug smirk and declared it was a game he couldn't possibly lose. Datareal erupted into furious shouting, swearing he'd never let Itsuki win. Then Wendy cut in mid-scream, looked him straight in the eye, and told him the outcome was already decided, so he didn't get to fight it anymore. Dadaril snapped at the girl, calling her out for mocking him, and then he demanded she come with him, insisting she was his, like she belonged to him for real. She shot back that she'd never go with him. Her body and her heart already belonged to Lord Itsuki, and she refused to budge. A hammer slammed the wall out of nowhere, and Yutsuki jerked in fear, then let out a quick little scream. He snapped his eyes to Dadaril, who was laughing right then. He muttered that everyone was laughing at him, snapped his eyes to the subordinates who had just smashed through the wall, then jabbed a finger at the opponents and ordered his men to wipe them all out. Leatrick snapped that all of this was infuriating. Ariel boosted the ventilation for everyone without even asking, and that kind of audacity was straight up rude, so she was making sure he was ready for whatever came next. At that moment, the night girls snapped their swords out and ordered Leatrick to back up, then Wendy flinched hard. Suki strode up to the girl and told her, "Don't panic, we'll protect you." Then he called out Aina, introduced himself, and slammed the Beastman girl with, "Hey dog." She snapped back and demanded to know who that dog was. Suddenly, a girl dropped down right in front of Itsuki and Wendy and shouted that they had another cat with them. Now, Itsuki's face lit up like crazy when he saw Shiro. 3 girls burst into the attack, led by Aina herself, and they sprinted straight into the men's crowd like both sides were ready to explode at any second. One of the guys swung his hammer, but Aina met it head on and blocked the strike with her sword. Then the beast girls came crashing in and attacked the rest of the men. Itsuki held Wendy in his arms and asked her if she was scared then. Even with his promise to protect her, he admitted his own fear too and gave a shaky little laugh. He watches the girl battle, admits he's weak, and shuts down no strength, no skills, and he refuses to fight or be rude. He even feels like an unreliable man, yet he can't bear to let go of that hand. He takes Wendy's hand and blurts out that he wants to be with her. Then the moment she hears him, tears well up as she cries softly right through her heart. At that moment, Datoro erupted in rage, screaming what was wrong with the woman and children, then barked orders for his wards to kill them on the spot. Out of nowhere, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Stop!" And every single person snapped their heads toward the hole in the wall. He strode into the room, went straight to Dadaril, and demanded what she was doing because dragging the Scarlet Frontier into some petty brawl felt way beneath a real adult, right? Then he turned to Leatrick and pressed, hard, to find out if she was telling the truth. Leatrick snapped that it was her words because the man's stupid son started it in the first place. And then she demanded answers from Darwin, the Western District's general manager. What's he going to do about it? Suki stared at the man standing up at the top of the area, then spotted a girl right beside him. She flashed him a sweet smile and gave him a quick nod. Darwin says the first move is to read the situation, and the moment he swings his gaze to Dadaril, the man instantly flinches. Dadaril's knees started shaking with pure terror, and he begged his father to listen. Then Darwin stepped in and told him, "You've always been meant to call me Dad." Then the man racks his brain, trying to figure out what he meant when he told his son to call him, and it clicks as he stares at Darwin, hunting for exactly who he is. Darwin smirked and basically shrugged. He claimed he didn't care, but the truth was, he didn't even get why that thought mattered, only that a brutal, new kind of danger was crawling in, unlike anything Leatrick and Yasus ever felt. Eventually, Darwin got the whole story, then the man dropped a bombshell, saying he'd bet the contest was for that woman, and he pointed straight at Wendy. Dadaril backs up his father's hunch and blasts Yutsuki for pulling the dirtiest tricks imaginable. Then Darwin's face turns ice cold, serious. He whips his head toward Dataril and tells him, once I'm in that competition, I want every trick in the book because winning's winning and losing's losing. Then he leans in and asks, is that how you taught me? Darwin swings his attention to Itsuki and blurts that he's the handsome man who beat his son, but the moment he tries to step closer, a blade clamps to his neck. Shiro fires back that he better stop, because if he even tries to reach her master, he'll drop dead right there. Darwin shot a sarcastic grin and admitted he was terrified, then wheeled around to the Suki and praised the kid's amazing build. Yeah, he was seriously handsome. Darwin told Itsuki to get his ward to yank the dangerous thing off his neck because if they didn't, they'd never be able to talk in peace. Itsuki spun toward Shiro, and the girl warned Darwin that one weird move and it was instant death, so Darwin nodded, then stared back at Itsuki and said, all right, we can talk now. After a bit, they all tumble into the room and drop onto the couches. Darwin shoves his shoes onto the table, and Suki shoots him a tense, loaded stare. Jesus and Lytric stepped into the room too, and as soon as they did, a maid hurried up to Lytric and asked if the lady wanted tea for everyone. Lytric just smiled and said Darwin would be fine. Then Darwin said he finally got the gist of it, and right then, utterly broken Dataril snapped into a full-on rage, which led straight to this very picture being obtained. Dataril whipped around to his father and demanded he hear him out, asking if he truly believed those people's words. Then Darwin snapped at him to quit the debate, because under these circumstances, he couldn't possibly explain or justify himself. Dataril barked that he was Darwin's son, then Darwin snapped back, we're not blood, and added that if Dataril really was his kid, he'd stop embarrassing them and just end it. That real guy was shaking from the man's threatening glare. Darwin said so, and he always insisted, if you want to win, you've got to be ready to die, and if you lose, you don't break, you accept it with courage. He whips around to the girl behind him and fires a question to Mira. Am I right? The girl grins and winks at the man calling him father, saying that this is exactly what she heard. Darwin laid out two brutal mistakes Dataril made first. He picked apart Yasus's choice, and second, he sparked a brawl with the Alchemist Guild. The immunity policy that shields the slave trade company and the Alchemist Guild is absolute until Dataril shattered it, and now they've got to own what happened. He can't stop thinking about what they should do next, so he grills Itsuki about it while someone's sweating like crazy, terrified that Yossi and Letric might actually leave him. He shot a look at Josus and Latric, then Jasius demanded pay for the mental torment caused by that brutal scene. And if he could get it, he also wanted compensation for the work he'd lose while his soul and body healed. Daryl demanded to know how many tens of thousands of holes that would be, and Yosus flashed a grin, saying he'd hash it out later with his wife and then send the bill straight to Darwin. Suki figured mental pain was no big deal, nothing that could scare him until her mind snapped to the fact that Yassi had a wife. Darwin pressed his hand to his head and groaned that it was all pain. Then he spun to Letric and demanded what was wrong with her. Latric snapped that she'd begin by tallying the price to fix the wrecked wall, and as her apology payment, she demanded the man's bank plus one of his prize privileges. Darwin shot in surprise, then let out a heavy sigh and admitted he figured she'd come asking for it after all. The bank's been ruthless, so he begged her to cut him some slack. Electric snapped back that a man shouldn't even get a vote in her financial calls, then she'd be fine with a two-person setup, but if he fought it, she'd file a petition to expose his son's secret trading. Huki's eyes go wide. He blurts to himself, so this secret trade, what does it really mean? Mira blurts that the pharmaceutical guild runs a secret pipeline for illegal substances, so she turns to the woman and asks, you mean that, right? Sook's jaw drops, shocked that he heard it straight, and blurts out, wait, you really meant illegal goods? Darwin let out a sharp breath and snapped that anyone who can't tell what's right from what's wrong is just scraping together vulgar money. Then he whipped his gaze to Dutterville and promised that even if today's mistake never happened, he'd still punish him soon. He launched a stubborn little business and it spiraled into pure trouble. Datril shook violently from head to toe. He leaned in and demanded, do you honestly think I won't catch what you're doing? For him, the church's punishment was all it took. He'd flee barefoot. Then he ordered his men to drag Datril straight to the mansion, and they snapped back that they understood. Then he warns them if Dataro bolts or kills himself, they'll all finally get it. Suki just stares and thinks, this guy, he's the real deal. Darwin spun toward Itsuki and demanded what he should do for him, and Itsuki snapped back that he'd already gotten enough, so he insisted it was fine, because deep down, Darwin was just trying to slip away from all this. Shiro stood behind Darwin and snapped at him not to freak out his master so much. Then Darwin fired back that the girl kept clawing and scrubbing his back non-stop, and it was downright unbearable. Darwin couldn't stop praising Itsuki's new servant, saying he'd love to have someone just like that all for himself. Then he jabs at Wendy and blurts out that, yeah, she's beautiful too. No shame. After that, he turns to the girls and goes, so why don't the two of you come with me? I swear I won't do anything bad. Suddenly, Suki shot up from his seat and slapped his hand over Wendy, shielding her fast. Itsuki claims his crush on girls isn't as messy as his son's, but he hates how they go about it. And plus, Wendy is already his girlfriend. Darwin said Itsuki was shaking with fear just a bit ago, but now he's a whole new person. Ready to bite, he praises Itsuki. He said, most guys who act like that don't last long, and then Suki snapped that he came here for something wild and fun because even if he gets killed, he refuses to call it the end. Darwin claimed the boy was nothing but a vagabond, and that part was fascinating until Suki snapped back that if this was about apologies, he refused outright. Then he said Dadaril would get punished, and honestly, that was all he cared about. Lee lured her into Itseki and told her there was no more yes or no to debate. He said where he came from was different, and this place had its own way of doing things too. An apology won't mean a thing unless you actually accept it, because nobody wants that awkward tension hanging between them. Darwin even said, that's why if you can fix it, just say it. Then he slides his hand onto his daughter and asks, how about marrying Mira? She's an amazing woman. Uki's jaw drops pure shock. Mira grins and tells everyone Itsuki seems like an interesting, generous guy, but she can't help wondering if he'll ever be truly satisfied with her. That's why he answered with a shaky apology. He couldn't shake the thought that someone like him didn't belong with a man's daughter. This time there was no connection to speak of. So he straight up refused, and Mira just stared, heartbroken, saying it was a real pity. Litrick told Itsuki to stop overthinking and just say what he wants right now. This was the whole point. And then he said that if it's really anything at all, he wanted one thing. After a moment, the young man takes a sip of the freshly brewed tea and the girl beams back, it's great, isn't it so tasty? Suki goes for coffee every time, so he can't really wrap his head around this tasty mystery drink, but the second he tastes it, he's hooked, and Lightrix even points out that Suki is totally carefree. After everything that kid had survived, worries just slipped right off him until Suki stepped in and made it official. Finally, everything blew over and Lightrix got a bunch of bonuses too. So yeah. Everyone's smiling. The woman was stunned because she couldn't believe they just turned their fight with her into peace, and even agreed it was a little modest. Yuki echoed her exact words, modest, while Lightrick chimed in that the bank is meant for two, so for her, it's the perfect kind of modest. Suke stared at Litrick's next move and tried to read his real intentions until Aina barged in and cut the moment short. The girl blurted that Darwin's messenger had just arrived, and now, right here and now, he wanted to pass along what everyone had been talking about. Then Suki shot to his feet and told Litrick he'd slip away for a bit. Lightrick started sipping tea and told Itsuki to come back once he'd settled down because he had a job waiting for him. Then Itsuki just waved and said he got it. After a while, the girls told him he was lucky, and Suki immediately snapped. So what are you two hinting at? The girl leaned in and said she still believes something like that ought to be paid for, with his own hard-earned money. Itsuki asks if she means he's a real hardworking guy, and she replies that she thinks he gave it his absolute best this time, so Itsuki thanks her. Then Ina barges in and says that gentleman is excited for what's next. And Itsuki nods, agreeing that, based on the map, it's somewhere around here. Ina then jabs her finger at the spot and asks, is it right here? And that's how Itsuki gets yanked into another world and lands with his very own home. Suki and the girls stood right before the giant mansion doors, stunned to their core, yet Ina beamed and said this place was her sweet home, and the excitement hit the girl like a burst of fireworks. Itsuki and the girl whip their heads toward Ina and ask what she means by sweet home, and right after, they start whispering like it's a secret code, while Itsuki insists Ina just called that house sweet. The girl shot back that maybe she was just comparing him to who he used to be, and right then, Itsuki yanked the door handles only to pause without ever opening the door. The girl asked the boy why he wouldn't go in, and Suki spun around, flashed an awkward smile, and admitted he was a bit nervous. Suki pictured his home in his head. He'd been thrilled the day he landed a job and rented a room with his own money, but he never imagined he'd end up with a place all to himself. He just can't grasp the real feeling yet. Then Suki swings open the house door and spots Wendy inside, and Wendy bows right away like a proper greeting. The girl greeted Itsuki, and he froze in shock. Then he demanded to know why Wendy was even there. Wendy just smiled and said her job was simple, get everything ready before the master arrives. Suki couldn't stop replaying Wendy's words, so when he finally hit that peak, he figured it was time to drop the fight and die in peace. Just as he was about to drown in thoughts, Darwin cut in and greeted him, and the young man shot back asking Itsiti if he was really satisfied with the house until Itsuki turned the tables, asking if he was sure the young man could land the job. Darwin snapped back that there was nothing to discuss yet, and because he never does things halfway, he tore the whole house apart and picked it all up just because the young man asked. Down in the basement, he set up a full-on alchemy room and then he lined it with the right furniture because every single thing was top tier. This place is a real gem, and it's heartbreaking for him to let it go, so he turns to the young man and asks him to take it. Suke thanked Darwin and they both slammed into a handshake. Then Darwin said, the case of his stupid son was finally shut for good from now on. It was Suk's world, and tomorrow, Yasus was going to show up here. Darwin storms out and Huki's like, okay, what now? Wendy suggests they make some tea, and Huki nods along like, yeah, that's exactly it. Then he whips around to Aina and Sorte and tells them to take the rooms that fit. Then he adds straight to Sorte that the stay comes with service and a fee. Sorte bristles in outrage, but he just smirks and tells her, then you'll sleep outside. After a while, Sorte sprawled in a plush bed, twisting and turning like she was savoring a dream, declaring it beat the nearest hotel by miles, and Ina nodded along like, yeah, she's right. Sorte clutched the pillow and cheered. Suki did an amazing job. Then it hit her. Wait, what about the bath? Ina nodded and said the master would take her right away. Sorte said she hadn't had a real bath in ages, grabbed his hand and told him to come with her. Then Ina tried to warn her that the gentleman was bathing right now, but Sorte wouldn't listen. Right now, Suk is sprawled in the bathtub, stretching every inch like he owns the place, and he grins, saying this is pure paradise since he hasn't soaked in ages and finally gets to throw his arms and legs wide again. Now that I think about it, he kept showing up at that spa nonstop, the one little oasis in a cruel life where overtime didn't even blink, and right then, all he needed was a cold drink and some chilled tofu to flip his mood back to good. He splashes water over himself and wonders if alchemy could finally build a real refrigerator. Then he grins, convinced he can score way more money than that pink rotor ever brought in. Suddenly, someone closed in on him. Uki spun around and saw Wendy standing there, asking if she could rub his back. Itsuki panicked and clapped his hands over himself right away, and the boy demanded why Wendy was there. Wendy shot back that she'd come to rub his back. After a bit, Suki just sat there, blushing hard and mortified. Then Wendy leaned in and told him, next time, tell me ahead when you're gonna bathe so I can serve you right away. The girl dumps soap onto the sponge and starts scrubbing Itsuki's back. Then she blurts out, am I hurting you? And Itsuki quickly reassures her, no, I'm fine. Right now, Suki was locked in on his body, Wendy curled up beside him, thanking him for choosing her and letting her stay close to him. And the girl practically beamed as she said she was so happy. Right then, Sorte butts in and fires a question at Itsuki, how long until he's done bathing? Because it's their turn now, while Ina steps in and snaps at Sorte to quit being so rude. Right then, they caught a photo of Itsuki and Wendy pressed close together. Sorte froze, his hand trembling as he started blurting out to Itsuki that he was nothing but a scoundrel. Suki told Sorte it was all a misunderstanding, and right then, the girl grabbed the basin and covered Iris's face so she wouldn't have to look at it and defile her own eyes. Ina quietly spun around, slipped out of the bath, and Sorte immediately started needling her, claiming she hated it, Suki like he didn't have it coming. Then Suki snapped back that nothing happened at all, saying Wendy was only washing his body. Right then, Ina burst into the bathroom wrapped in nothing but a towel. Then she rushed to apologize to the master and said, if you're bathing, it's my job to help, so I want to jump in too. Ina shot Wendy a quick apology for dumping all that work on her without even thinking, and Sorte immediately told Ina to drop the worry. Then Ina pointed out that Suki was finally supposed to get out of the bathroom. Ina tried to get closer to Sorte. She said she just wanted to handle her duties, but then the girl suddenly slipped on the soap scraps, crashed to the floor, and her towel shot right off her body. Ina froze in embarrassment and shot to shut it, but Sorte burst in, right then, his Suki smashing into him and yelling, don't look, because the thought of his glorious bath time rest had just been ruined. Right then, voices tore through the halls of Darwin's house. Someone was still choking on regret over that arrow, but they had no choice. They had to deal with it, even if it meant waking their beloved father. Mara told Dharma not to fret, because Dada Ril had already wrecked their reputation. Then the foster father took the whole mess into his own hands, and Dharma nodded along, fully agreeing with Mara. He said a real man was a fool because he'd brushed off his father's kindness, and Mira cut in, so how long are we going to keep arguing about someone you're already done with? This talk is dead. There's nothing left in it. Dharma quickly apologized to Mara, then leaned in and said, if we're talking about interesting things, trust me, our current key figure is way more interesting. Mira grinned and said he was a wildly funny guy, and Dharma immediately shot back that he couldn't wait to meet the young master of the Alchemist Guild too. The very next morning, Shiro climbed onto the mansion's roof and stared hard at the birds that had finally shown up. Then she burst into the house, tail thumping like a drum, and the girl sniffed the air right away. A familiar scent hit her nose. She strode up to the door, cracked it open, and the girl's eyes snapped to a room right there. On a huge bed, her Suki was curled up and sleeping. The girl called the owner, and Suk, still half asleep, muttered that he'd redo the document by the end of the week, so he rushed to apologize and warned her not to mess with him about that file. Suki was shaking in his sleep, mumbling that the boss kept getting dandruff now and then. Then Shiro gently stroked his head, and Suki finally stopped shivering. A few hours later, with the sun blazing in the sky, Suk snapped his eyes open. Morning had already arrived, so he was up. Then something shifted right beside him. He looked down and realized it was Shiro, and just like that, someone started knocking on the door. Itsuki let him in, and the moment the room door swung shut, Wendy marched in. Tu greeted Itsuki with a bright, good morning. then declared that breakfast was finally ready. Then she leaned over the bed and told them Shiro had slipped in during the night. Huki nodded, swearing he woke up to find Shiro already curled up beside him, sound asleep. Wendy grinned and said, "This kid's out of my hands. There's nothing left I can do." She tells him, "I'll wake you up now." But Itsuki shrugs and says she can sleep a bit longer, then Shiro's stomach growls loud enough to give her away. After a bit, the table finally got set, and Siki clapped into place and wished every girl bon appetit. Wendy then told Ina and Sorty, "Now I'm pouring soup for you too," and the girls thanked him with bright smiles. Sorty grilled Wendy, asking if she really cooked all those dishes, and Wendy nodded, asking what was wrong. Then Sorty's face twisted, because this loss hit her hard, since the chores were supposed to be her job. Itsuki and Shiro dug into a mountain of food all at once, and Sorty told Wendy that she'd cooked up something absolutely delicious. Then Suki and Shiro couldn't get a bite down, so they snatched up their drinks and went right back to shoveling down that massive pile of food. After a bit, Itsuki bowed and thanked her for the meal. When he set down his cup of tea, he thanked her again, then lit up and said it was delicious. She smiled, and when he asked, she admitted that if the boy said so, it meant every bit of effort was worth it. Itsuki even bragged that yesterday's dinner was unreal, and he couldn't stop thinking about whether he'd get to eat food that good every single day from now on. Sorte shot a smirk and said the kid had definitely been fed. Then it hit, nobody knew who was really calling the shots anymore. "That's Zuki," she smirked. "And you clearly didn't get it?" Sorte stared at the boy and demanded, "What are you talking about?" Suki shot back that it wasn't an exaggeration. Someone's happiness basically rises or falls with how good the food is. Then he leaned in and asked whether the girl even knew what unpan tasted like. The kind you eat to fill your belly. That dinner didn't just fill an empty stomach, it lit up their hearts too, powering everyone with energy and hope for tomorrow. Because this warm, delicious feast is always served by Wendy the goddess, the real ruler of the house. Shiro spun toward Wendy, still washing dishes, and told her, "I brought the plates." Wendy flashed a grateful smile and thanked Shiro. Shiro locked eyes with Wendy, and Wendy caught it instantly. Shiro told her she'd grown a little, then claimed the food tasted way better than the stuff she'd had back at Yosu's. Wendy froze in shock, then burst into a smile and asked, "Wait, is that really true?" After a while, Itsuki snapped, "Girls, gather here for a minute." And Sorte immediately went, "Wait, did something serious happen?" But Itsuki only said it was just a bit worrying. He wants to reward those girls and make them feel appreciated, so he hands them glittering jewelry boxes and urges them to open and take them. He handed Ina beautiful earrings, tossed Cert and Wendy gorgeous brooches for their outfits, and then gave Shiro bell-shaped hairpins too, though they were handmade. Suki said this was his way of showing gratitude. Then Suki starts squirming and fidgeting. Sorte presses him and asks why he's so nervous, and Suki admits it's painfully embarrassing to hand gifts while you're staring right at each other, so the awkward feeling hits him hard. Ina blushed hard and hurriedly thanked the gentleman. Wendy promised she'd cherish the gift forever, and Shiro chimed her bell sweetly, while Sorte fumbled out an awkward thank you to the young man. After a bit, Suki caught up and asked Sorte and Ina if they were really leaving already. Like they didn't even get to rest, only for Sorte to shut that down and say they couldn't. Next job or not, they had to clear that meaningless debt. Then it's finally over for the chains. This girl swears that from a domesticated dog, she'll snap back into a wild, free wolf, and right as she says it, Itsuki suddenly reaches for her paw and she hands it to him without hesitating. Soru saw her mistake and burst into tears at Itsuki right away. Then the young man snapped his attention to Ina and warned her not to be reckless, telling her to look after herself. Ina nodded, saying she understood. Huki wishes that girl would reach safely, and Sorte tells Ina they'll be there by this time, while Ina insists it looks like the girl might be right. Sorte shot back that this wasn't the time to joke, they had to move before Renki came back, because if she discovered they'd been turned into some guy's servants, nobody knew what she'd do. Ina says Sorte's freaking out because the master's in trouble, but Sorte shuts that down and insists we've got to keep moving forward with a bright smile. That afternoon, right there in front of the Yoses, they held a contract ceremony for Wendy and Shiro, then contract seals burned onto the girls' hands. Yasi told Suki that he never thought he'd see someone forcing a servant into a contract like pushing a wife to marry her husband, because this merchant still had a ton to learn. Itsuki bowed his head and apologized for making the man come all the way, and Yasis thanked him for grabbing Wendy and Shiro. Then Itsuki even apologized again because Shiro basically dragged him into it. Yup, he's convinced that the boy is going to need this girl, and Suk wastes no time agreeing. Then, if anything changes, he tells the man to come straight back and let him know. After a bit, Itsuke was sprawled on the grass, soaking up that fresh, cool air. Then Wendy strolled over and told him dinner was right around the corner. Then the girl shot the boy a question. What was he doing here, Suki? He answered, "This garden is so wide, I'm thinking of turning it into a field." Wendy blurts out what the field even means, and Uki jumps in to say that the moment he arrived here, that exact thought hit him. Then, Wendy turns to the young man and asks if he's ever worked the field before. Itsuki shakes his head and says no, but then admits he still wants to give it a shot. He'll grow vegetables, Wendy will raise flowers and deck the house with them. Shiro will head into the mountains to hunt, and the whole crew can even go fishing together. Then they invite Aina and Sorte over, and when Shiro wakes up, he straight up grills the owner. What are you talking about? Suki smiles and insists the three of them should live happily together. Shiro pulls Itsuki into a hug and blurts that she's thrilled with the owner, and Itsuki nods back, grinning that Shiro is super cute, while in his head, he realizes this is exactly the kind of happiness he wants right now. After a while, Wendy slides up to the young man and snaps that the guests are here, making Yuki's eyes go wide in pure shock. Dharma and Mira showed up, and the young man stepped forward, bowing hard as he introduced himself, Dharma, one of Darwin's children, while Suki's jaw dropped in shock when Dharma addressed him as a young master. Dharma just kept grinning, and Iatsuki couldn't stop wondering what the hell had him smiling so smugly, because yeah, it was getting pretty annoying. Soon, Wendy swoops in with a tray of steaming teacups. Dharma nods, thanks her, and then promises, I'll introduce myself properly. He lifts his chin and reveals, I'm one of Darwin's adopted sons. My name is Dharma. And just like that, he lights up. He's genuinely glad to finally meet the young man. He runs the construction and design gigs for his adoptive father, and this was exactly how he planned to introduce himself until Dharma cut in and said, no, he's just a latex apprentice. Then he leaned in and heard a rumor, the young master's selling like crazy. Suki couldn't shake the feeling Dharma reminded him of some pushy, silly salesman, and when he finally got the nerve, he asked the guy straight up what business he was in. Dharma bowed to Itsuki and admitted he'd gotten a little carried away, and today he showed up to thank the young master and make things right. Itsuki snapped, wait, what gratitude and what apology are you talking about? Dharma nodded and said he meant the whole mess with Dadaro. The guy had put the boy through hell, and he'd actually apologized for it with real sincerity. Then Suk asked what happened to Dadaro, and honestly, Suk didn't look too bothered one way or the other. Dharmas leans in and asks Suki if he wants to hear it, but Suki blurts out an apology and says he doesn't need it after all. So Dharmas just nods and calls it a smart choice. Suki couldn't stop thinking about it. Both of them were adopted, yet they felt worlds apart, and she kept wondering what kind of criteria that uncle used to pick his sons. Dharmas said there was nothing to worry about at all. He handled that guy cleanly, no consequences whatsoever, and then he wanted to thank the young master. Itsuki told Darwin, yeah, I already made the deal, so don't thank me. Then he started replaying everything they just wiped out. Dharma snapped that this wouldn't fly, and then he decided to thank the young master from the very depths of his heart. Suki asked if calling him young master would be better to stop, and Mira snapped back that she needed to be careful. Dharma doesn't exactly have a soft spot for girls. Suke cracked a stone-cold manly face, and Dharma snapped at Mira, saying, don't read into that, he's not into men, he's into people who are better than him. And hey, his father comes first right now. The young master is sitting third in line, so he tells Siki, don't worry. Siki shoots back in his head, mentally begging Dharma to stop. Mira cut in, told Dharma that her father said the young master was meant for her, so he couldn't keep acting so casual, and Dharma immediately apologized, while Suki just rolled her eyes like, ugh, he's got to be that annoyingly handsome, doesn't he? Dharma says he doesn't like girls at all, and honestly, that face is just going to waste. He won't force anyone, not even Huki, but one day Huki will finally get it, and then he'll bring him to his house. Only problem, Huki snaps back that he'll never come. After a bit, they stepped out into the courtyard. Dharma leaned in and asked Suki what he thought of the house and whether anything bothered him. Suki flashed a calm smile and said everything was perfect, so there was nothing to complain about, and Dharma shouldn't worry at all. Dharmas flashed a grin and warned Itsuki he'd been insanely careful, and then Mira leaned in and asked Itsuki how it felt like, how easy it was to use the bathroom. Suki said, this bathroom is amazing. Mira laughed and said, I designed it. Then Suki leaned in and asked, so you really did? Mira nodded and told him that while she was working, she'd sometimes listen to what the other tramps wanted because she was determined to do her absolute best for the young master's satisfaction. He said the Japanese are super picky about their baths, then claimed this was pure brilliance. Mira just lit up and said it was incredibly pleasing. Mira tells the boy to slip out and meet her in the city, promising she'll lead him to a spot where other vagabonds hang out because she looks like a rich girl, so he can't stop wondering why would someone like her get adopted by Darwin. Dharmas throws in a quick apology, then snaps, all right, let's go. He tells them to ask for anything they need, and he nods to Huki, thanking Dharma and Mara too. Itsuki grumbled that the guests were exhausting, and right then, Shiro's stomach growled like crazy. Itsuki quickly apologized to the girl and admitted she was hungry too, so did Shiro. Then Itsuki grabbed Shiro's hand, wondering what would be served for dinner tonight, and Shiro chimed in that Wendy looked like she was grilling a mountain of meat. After a while, Itsuki, Shiro, and Wendy dug into dinner at the table then. Once they finished, Itsuki flopped into his chair and complained, I ate way too much, I can't even fit in here anymore. Wendy snapped Itsuki out of his thoughts and told him she'd already run a bath, so if he wanted, he could jump in anytime. Itsuki thanked her, grateful. The girl grinned and promised she'd come later too, then lifted her hands and declared she'd take a bath with the master as well. After a bit, they finally reached the bathroom. Itsuki grins, kicks off with the soap, and starts scrubbing Shiro's hair like it's no big deal, teasing her as a visitor, then suddenly asks if her ear itches behind the ear. He rinsed the shampoo out of her hair, and Shiro started to shake it off when the key snapped her to stop and told her to run and warm herself in the hot water. Shiro bolted for the bath, but Uki warned, if you run, you'll fall. So Shiro didn't slow down, he cannonballed straight into the water, and Uki just thought, I'm a cat, sure, but I can swim just fine. It was like a key cueing him to stop Shiro from swimming in the bath, but the girl ignored him completely, too wrapped up in her own thing. So he snapped, Shiro, are you feeling okay? And she just grinned and said she loved soaking in the bath. Right then, Wendy started stripping off her clothes to get ready for a bath too. Itsuki was already in the water, soaking in that perfect warmth with Shiro, and he ordered Shiro to sit up nice and tall right up to Wendy's shoulders and warm things up for her. Then Wendy slips into the bathroom, scrubs herself clean, and heads straight to her Suki, only for him to ignore her completely. So she quickly blurts out an apology for bothering him. Wendy drops into the bathtub, and just like that, Shiro suddenly starts feeling way too hot. He blurts that she has to get out of the tub, and Wendy and Itsuki are left alone. Wendy snaps the silence, apologizes to Itsuki, and asks if she can join the boys' room today. Itsuki says yes. After a while, the young man was sprawled on his bed when boom, someone started knocking at his door, and it was Suke who tells him to let the newcomer in. Wendy slips into the room in her nightgown, and with a shaky voice, she apologizes to Itsuki for interrupting him. After a while, Suki was sitting on the bed beside Wendy, and he told her that once he got his salary, he always went straight to that restaurant because their cutlet, rice, and meat dishes were flat out delicious. He wanted Wendy to taste them too, so he asked, and she said if the gentleman gave her the recipe, she could whip up something similar, even if it definitely wouldn't taste the same. Itsuki nods like, yeah, that checks out, but he's still determined to make this dish for her the next time. Then everything went quiet. Suki couldn't shake the feeling, like his mind had dragged him back to his very first date, where the silence stretched just as long between him and that girl. Wendy grabs the young man's hand and tells him he doesn't have to act so polite because she's only his servant. Suki barges in mid-conversation and blurts out that he's crazy about Wendy, then turns to her and asks, straight up, if she likes him back. Wendy nods and clasps her hands, beaming as she tells him she likes him a lot because he's just so different, unlike any gentleman she's ever met. I don't care that she's a servant or tied to a contract if she's with this man. She turns to the young guy and begs him to make her his woman. Wendy flopped onto the bed and Ziggy stared down at her. Then they scooted closer and their faces exploded into a blazing red heat. Suddenly, the door yanked open and Shiro stormed into the room, only to find the girl had picked the wrong door and it definitely wasn't the toilet. Shiro strode up to Wendy and Itsuki and demanded to know what they were up to. Then Itsuki scrambled to wriggle out of it, claiming Wendy wasn't feeling well and that he was just taking care of her. Shiro pressed, asking straight if that was true and if Wendy was actually okay. Suki said Wendy was totally fine now. Then out of nowhere, he promised to take the girl to the toilet. And just like that, Wendy got left alone in the room. Next morning, Itseki stared at the rising sun, still wide awake, fuming that he couldn't sleep. Shiro walked up and told him Wendy said breakfast was ready. After a while, the young man dug into breakfast and Wendy leaned in, asking if he wanted more soup. Suki nodded fast, then demanded another bowl for good measure. Welp, he and Wendy were mortified, and Suki dropped the bomb that he'd swing by Leetrick for a bit today, and when he nodded back, it sealed the deal. After a bit, the young man finally squared up, got ready to leave, and told the girl, I'm going. Wendy's eyes sharpened as she warned him to be careful. Suki spun around and strode off, then grabbed the girl by the shoulders and promised, next time, I'll get everything right. Wendy's face burned with embarrassment. Suki bolted out to the house and waved goodbye to the girl, while Wendy grinned and told the boy to have a safe trip. Then Suki ran off to do his business, wearing that painfully awkward smile the whole time. After a while, Suki finally shows up at the alchemist's side where Leetrick studies the potion, grins, and declares it's not bad at all. He points out the quality has jumped, and now the young man can try brewing an even higher level potion, and Suki agrees right away. Leetrick smirked and shot down the boy's answer as pathetic, then leaned in and demanded if he was truly so worn out from being surrounded by cute slaves, while Suki let out an awkward laugh. Then he spilled every detail to the woman, and it ended with Shiro barging in, only for everything to crash into nothing. Leetrick demanded, did the boy make it back to his room? Yes, Suki said, but he's totally lost, so confused he doesn't know what's going on. Leetrick snapped that the boy was the absolute worst, and that's usually what sparks a divorce. Then she mocked Suki as a stupid boy, claiming he'd just abandoned a woman sprawled on the bed because, hey, he was a man after all. She snaps, Siki, follow me, and checks if the boy's free. Then she declares she's about to give her lecture. grabs a glass, and pours something into it. She demands he takes a sip first, then the key wielder is shocked that he'll drink anything at all. Litrick promises that if he can talk about it while sober, she'll serve tea. The young man just smiles and says everything's fine. Then he said Wendy told him she liked him, and right then he wrestled with one thought. Was it real feelings or just a slave's obedient reply? Lightrick added that the young man had the guts to challenge the Adventurers Guild, Gildan Darwin. Now he fretted over every tiny thing because when the boy said, "If you hug her with feelings like that, you'll probably hurt her," everything hit him like a punch, so when he left with Shiro, he couldn't bring himself to go back to that room he just bolted. Lightrick snapped that Suki is nothing but a pathetic man. He can't just fix his gaze on himself, he has to look at his partner too. She's a total master of lies, but when it really matters, her mask slips surprisingly, her real feelings leak out anyway. Suki even asked if this was some story from real life, and he couldn't picture it coming that easily. So Lightrick just snatched the truth and called Suki out as a rude person. Uki grins and tells her, "Stay with me till the end." Lightrick snaps back, "If you pass out, I'm not taking care of you." After a while, the young man crashed asleep right there on the table, and while your cold words hit, he told her to leave everything just as it was and go to bed too. The girl nodded and agreed. Then Litrick swaddled the boy in a blanket and snapped that he was nothing but trouble, then sparked her pipe and insisted the girl had blame in this chaos too. Next morning, Uki bursts through the door, and Wendy freezes with nerves. Then bam, Uki drops to his knees, blurts out a heartfelt "Good morning, Wendy," and declares, "I'm home." Wendy finally forces a shaky smile as she greets him right there. After a bit, Wendy slid Suki a cup of tea, admitted she'd brewed it a notch stronger, and prayed the boy would finally come to his senses. Then Suki thanked her. Shiro snapped at Itsuki, asking what he did, because Wendy looked ready to explode and Itsuki just shrugged it off, saying that whatever he said, even the next morning when he went back home, was really nothing more than a grudge. Shiro leaned in and asked if the boy was working today. Uki nodded, then said there was still time before the next potion delivery, so she wasn't swamped, and Shiro immediately asked if he could play with her today. Then Suki leans in and tells Shiro he's got a small favor to ask, and with his eyes on Wendy, he adds that he'll most likely help Wendy today, after all. The girl wore that cold, indifferent face and told the boy not to worry, she'd take care of it herself. Easy. Then Suki realized it wasn't working, and Wendy's eyes told the truth. She wasn't happy. When she pouted and tried to slip out, Suki rushed after her to talk, but she ignored him. So Suki clamped his hands on Shiro's head and forced him to calm down. Wendy tramped down the hallway, then her breath hitched tears spilling into her eyes as she choked out that she'd been waiting for the master. After a while, it's like he collapsed onto the grass in the blazing sun, realizing he'd truly hurt Wendy, and he had no clue what to do next. That same nightmare happened before back then. He missed the date because of some urgent work, and the girl's rage lit up the room. Things turned awkward fast, and before long, they split for good. Suki snapped at her, saying she was acting like a kid getting butthurt over something small, so the girl shot back furious. Then what about him? If he claims he's an adult, he better keep his promise. Sukalai was sprawled on the grass. Then he snapped upright and said he had to apologize the right way, no matter whether Wendy ever forgave him or not. Then, right at that moment, the girl marched up to him and asked, "Can I sit here?" And Suki nodded, agreed. At one point, they started chatting, then they cut it off like nothing happened, right? Then, Suka bolted upright from his seat, swung his head toward Wendy in total silence, and dropped into a deep bow as he apologized. Even though he swore he'd do everything right, he's now dropped to apologize sincerely, and Wendy, stunned, then bursts out laughing. Wendy let out a shaky breath, vowed she'd forgive Etsuki this time, and then turned to the boy to ask if he finally knew she'd been waiting for him the whole time. The girl stepped closer and begged Itsuki not to ditch her next time, and Itsuki nodded and agreed. Then Wendy wrapped him in a hug and declared it was a promise. Suki believed Wendy had finally forgiven him until Shiro barged in and demanded, "So how's Suki doing with Wendy?" And then pushed, "Did you two make up yet? Because she's starving." Wendy promised she'd whip up dinner immediately, and Yuki shot back that Shiro could hang with him for a bit right after they finished. Later, after they finished eating, Shiro and Itsuki started clearing the dishes, and when Shiro turned to the boy, it demanded to know what he was doing here. Itsuki remembered why. He said that ever since he arrived in this world, someone or something had been guarding him nonstop, and now he couldn't stop asking, "So how am I supposed to protect myself?" Then the kid proudly reveals what she came up with. He snaps into magic and pulls out a hammer. Wendy blurts that it's incredible, then asks if it's a one-of-a-kind skill. Suki just grins and calls it spatial magic. The moment he arrived, he thought he'd finally been handed an item box by some goddess. Then Hayato, his friend, slapped a magic bag in his hand so he'd never get to use it, but now he just leveled up and tested it. He snaps on spatial magic and throws up a shield, and Wendy is totally lost on how any of that just happened. Then, Itsuki tells her to reach out and touch him. So she does, and bam, she feels an invisible wall like it's real. Suki nods and grins. He says he can conjure transparent walls, and then he'll use them to shield himself completely. The boy whips around to Shiro and demands she use the weapon on him, and Shiro immediately fires back, "Are you sure?" But Oki's like, "Yeah, it's fine," and tells her to test it on all of them. Shiro says she starts things, then she slams into the boy out of nowhere, and Huki realizes his wall held the line and saved him. Then he tells the girl to keep unleashing attacks nonstop, and Shiro nods, going in hard right away, but out of nowhere, Itsuki's wall just collapses. Suki says it has a durability limit, and honestly, that fits because if it could be used forever, that would be straight up cheating. Then he goes, "How about a magic attack?" And right as he speaks, Wendy butts in, saying she's already mastered most of the magic, and if he wants, she'll help him with it. The boy's shocked out of his mind and blurts out for her to use magic, so Wendy steps in, promises she'll start, then snaps into a spell, ready to fight the moment Oki is on the battlefield. Wendy launched a barrage of water shot, and the wall Suki was leaning on cracked in a flash, then exploded into rubble, splattering the boy everywhere. Wendy blurted out if Itsuki was okay, and Itsuki shot back that he was fine. His barrier can take on both physics and magic, but the truth is, its magic durability is a little shaky. Uki grinned and said, "We're heading to the city tonight." And honestly, at least this gives him a way to protect himself if anything goes wrong. And because he's grateful to have them around, he's throwing a treat for everyone that evening. Shiro's absolutely over the moon. Right then, Aina and Sorte were locked in a brutal fight with the monster. Sorte yelled that it was charging straight at her, and Aina nodded, yanked her sword out, and got ready. In a blink, she shot forward and drove her blade straight into the beast, slicing off its horns, and then she said they'd already ransacked most of the materials from this area. Aina called out to her, saying the food was finally ready, so Sorte took a taste and grinned because it was even better than yesterday, and yeah, it was solid enough to actually drink. Then Sorte leaned in and told Ina she didn't need to push herself into some fancy, complicated dish. Cooking wasn't that scary, Ina shot back, that it wouldn't work. She's not likely to meet the master's needs as a woman, but she refuses to be useless, and she'd rather prove herself in other ways. Sorte snapped, "Why cook?" Then her mind raced as she tried to figure out what she'd say to Renge if she saw the way Ina is right now. Right there on the second fortress wall, a girl demanded the guards open the gates. She had urgent business she couldn't afford to miss. The man shut him down hard and said a message just arrived from the border fort. No matter what, they must not let her in, even if she shows up. Then the girl demanded to know why. The man insisted it didn't matter how long, then that the girl's name was Rengwe, and she kept repeating over and over that she had no money. Ring said she was in a rush, so she demanded the guards let her through, but the sufferer snapped back that he'd already told them the rules, and this time they wouldn't let even Ring in. Rage flared in her eyes, then she snapped her finger to the side and ordered the guards, "Turn around." But the guard misses everything behind him, spins the wrong way, and ends up facing Renge. The girl smashes the guard over the head, he crumples to the ground, and she rockets straight for the gate. The second guard starts whistling into his scroll, but Renge whips around to Aina and Sorte and orders them to hold up, because the girl is already on her way to them. At that moment, Suki wandered the square. Then she spotted something weird, like a potato come to life, only it was actually walking. "Oi, it's Oki," he said. Something weird was roaming around, and Wendy snapped, "That's Moi." Oki pressed, "So where'd it come from?" Wendy just shrugged. "It must have slipped out of some store, and Moi is a vegetable." A stunned Key blurted, "Wait, do the veggies here really walk?" Wendy nodded and said, "Yeah, most of them do." Then she leaned in and asked, "So the veggies in the master's world, do they really not walk?" Huki nodded and grinned, saying there probably weren't any walking vegetables out there, but hey, at least the fish were fast on their feet. Wendy lit up, saying, "This is super interesting." At that moment, Shiro grabbed Mo and started chewing on him, and the girl told the owner she was starving while the young man snapped that it was downright disgusting. He ruffled Shiro's hair, shot out a sincere apology, then leaned in and asked if she wanted to eat. Shiro immediately admitted she was starving. Izaki declared it was all settled meat for dinner and swore he'd keep feeding the girl until she was stuffed. Then he turned to Wendy and asked if she knew a great restaurant around here. The girl nodded, grinned, and told the young man to trust her. They took off right away. Oki cradled Wendy in Shiro-shan, and the second he and Wendy locked eyes, both of them shot red with embarrassment. Then they rolled into a restaurant and absolutely demolished every last bite of delicious food until they were stuffed. Night had already fallen when the guards prowled the city streets, hunting Rengi down. He bolted, and the girl fired back that they'd been harassing her nonstop. She leapt off the roof, and right then, Shiro blurted out that she wanted to eat even more. It's pure shock. How can a body that small pack in that much? Renji was hovering above Itsuki, yelling for him to get out of the way. Then the instant he turned, Renge drove a punch straight into his face. They stumbled down, smashing the nearby barrels as they went, and Shiro whipped out her dagger. Then the guards surged in, shouted for the girl to freeze, and demanded she stop running from them. She bared her claws and warned that if they stepped any closer, Suki wouldn't stay in one piece. Then she leaned in and whispered to the boy, sorry, as she asked him to help her just a little. She begged him again to help rescue her comrades. And the moment Wendy's fear surged, she called Shiro, then went straight to the master. Suki insisted he was fine, so he told Shiro to take Wendy home. Shiro just grinned. Right then, the guard snapped at her, warning her not to rack up any more crimes. Suki hissed to the girl to slip into the right alley and bolt, so she grabbed him, yanked him through, and sprinted as the guard snapped. Stop! Suki and Renge bolted into an alley, but the guards crashed in right after them. Then Suki snapped into action and unleashed third-level spatial magic. He slammed an invisible wall into place. Every guard crashed into it like it was real steel. The others stared in confusion, and one guy muttered that, no matter what he tried, he just couldn't break through. Suki shot them a sincere apology, then leaned in and told the girl they should have started with a good time first. Rengi nodded right away, then glanced at the boy with a quick sideways look. Right then, Itsuki and Rink were under Shiro's watch. He was perched on the building's roof. The girl's mind snapped back to Wendy's words, protect Mr. Itsuki. And before fear could catch up, Shiro leaped off and shouted that she already knew everything. After what felt like no time at all, Itsuki and Renge landed somewhere the young man knew by heart, warm, familiar walls, kind girls waiting, and big greetings for the two of them. They served cocktails, greeted the guests, and guided everyone to their tables. Rangai leaned in and asked the boy what kind of place this was. It's Suke. He said he knew the owner, so they'd just pull a few strings with his influence. Reng said the boy had dragged her to a place like this and had plans for what he'd do to her. No, Suki snapped back. That's not happening. Not even the guards' eyes would reach a spot like this, so we'll just sit here. Then he told those guys were guards, and he snapped at the girl. What did you do? Rengi shot back. I'm just a little short on cash. And Suki immediately realized she hadn't paid the entrance fee. Then he leaned in and asked her name. Renge stepped forward and introduced herself, and Suk snapped that just moments ago she'd sworn she'd save her comrades. Renge nodded like it was a fact, then snapped, my comrades are in trouble. She told the boy she was an adventurer, asked if he'd ever heard of the Scarlet Line, and revealed that her friends were Ina and Sorte, members of that very group. A while back, she got a letter from Sorte like a bombshell because some guy had supposedly kidnapped them, and now she shoves the paper into the boy's hands and tells him, this is the exact same letter. Sorte shoved the question to Rengue, how are you holding up? And Rengue admitted that she and Ina are trapped right now, forced to serve a filthy drifter who keeps crawling them with his nasty hungry stare. And then just the other day, he caught sight of Ina when she had no clothes on. Itsuki was seething because that girl had just dropped a wildly strange letter into Renge's hands. Renge explained what it meant. And now Itsuki's determined to track down the men and rescue them both. Huki stepped in, stopped the girl cold, and demanded she calm down long enough to hear him out. And that tramp from the letter, yeah, it was probably Huki himself. Renge burst out laughing, calling it a terrible joke, until a female employee slid into the seat beside them and grilled Itsuki about taking over the whole Crimson Frontier. The second she asked, Renge snapped, rage flaring, and charged into brutal hand-to-hand combat with Itsuki. Ina, Sorte, and Renge hunkered down in the Adventurers Guild for months, and then bam, a bundle was delivered straight to Ina, the girl snapped, demanding to know if this was really their quest and a personal one at that. The girl snapped back that Rukaku's urgent request was, like always, meant for Rengue, so Sorte tore open the package, and yep, it was exactly for Renge. That girl demanded to know if it was truly an Earth Dragon, then snapped that they'd better hurry, while Ina asked whether they really show up this often. Renge nodded and said, don't worry, I'm used to this. I'll figure it out fast and come right back. Then Sorte leaned in and asked, so, can you actually handle it? Rengi said it was a piece of cake, but Sorte snapped at the girl to stay on her guard because Rengi's the kind of careless that gets you caught. Ringai grinned and said, it means we've made our choice now, I'll heat up, bit by bit. After a while, Ringai finally rolled into Rukaku. Renga wiped the sweat from her face and joked that it was just as blazing as always then. Out of nowhere, someone snatched her by the tail. The girl spun around and spotted the kid standing there. Renge, she blurted out that she'd known it. Then the boy grinned and said, yup, that's my little sister. Ring lit up when she saw the kids again, saying it felt like ages since they had last met. Then she rushed to Sue and Pam, asking how they were holding up, before turning to Shem and demanding to know what happened and why he was so badly wounded. Shema snapped that an Earth Dragon left her hurt, and right when the dragon attacked as he was heading home after trading with his dad, everything turned into a full-on nightmare. He hurt his dad's leg, so his mom has to work and take care of him, and the struggle hits hard. Renji steps in and tells the boy to snap out of it, then slips something into his hands and says he has to give it straight to his dad. Shama demanded to know if it was really money, and Rang shot back that she remembered the bill she owed Shama's dad, so she apologized for showing up late. Then Shama pressed again, asking if it was really like that. Rang told Sham to greet her dad, and the second she did, Sham blurted that she was starving, so she was eating right now, and then she invited the kids to join in, and every last one of them agreed. After a while, she fed everyone with mouth-watering food, and as evening crept closer, the grill finally rolled up at the Adventurers Guild. The man apologized to the guests, blamed the chaos caused by the Earth Dragons, and admitted there was nobody left. Then Renge stepped in, grinned, and said they hadn't seen each other in ages. The man blinked in shock and demanded, "You're really coming." Rang swallowed her nerves, apologized, and explained she'd trekked all the way from Ain Sahel. The man admitted he'd heard the same rumors too, and Ringday quickly apologized for cutting him off, but she had to grab the right equipment and get the information she needed. He nodded and told them the Earth Dragons first showed up about 3 months ago. Maybe they slipped through last time, leaving eggs behind. And this round wasn't just locals anymore. They had adventurers on the ground and a self-defense crew ready to wipe them out. Even so, the Earth Dragon's skin is so rock hard that normal weapons can't scratch it. After it finishes terrorizing people, it plunges under the sand and snoozes until the next hunt, so it feels almost impossible to pin down. Ring stared at them and figured there were 3 maybe. They were last spotted 5 days ago at the southern oasis, and that's all the info anyone had. Rank said it was right that she came here alone. He knew what she'd have to endure, but Sorte would have been in a furious mood for an ambush like this. She stared at the mannequin hanging from the tree branch. Suddenly, a storm rumbled beneath the mannequin and out burst an Earth Dragon that stared at it like it couldn't figure out what the heck it was. Rank said 3 days of waiting finally paid off. The first drag had shown up at last. Then she tore off her cloak and declared it was time to punish. The girl dismisses the dragon as some boring lizard, and now it's his turn to get eaten. She charges into the fight, face to face with the dragon. After her bath, Aina rushed in and told Sorte, "It's free." Then she grinned and said she'd finish it and head out. Aina straight up asks if it's really a letter, and Sorte nods, saying they've been through plenty too, so Aina decided to tell Ranga what she found and everything that's happening. Sorte leaned toward the window and blurted out that she was praying Renge was okay right then. Renge was in the middle of a brutal fight with the Earth Dragon. The dragon lashes out with his tail. Renge jukes it with pure skill, but one split-second swing slips past her and she misses the hit. The girl yanks herself out of the way and blurts that the dragon's defenses are insanely tough. Then she declares she's done playing around and will take everything seriously from now on. The girl lunges in a sprint and slams the dragon, carving it up right away. Then she hammers it between the stones and yanks out something slimy from its guts. The dragon's gone slain. Reng wiped her face and snapped that 2 dragons still remained. 2 weeks later, she was soaking in an oasis like she owned the whole world. She came sprinting back to the village and told everyone it took way longer than she ever expected. And the kids immediately chimed in, it was just incredible. Renge even faced the Earth Dragon alone, and now the whole city is overflowing with gratitude for her Shama. Told everyone that his father will be walking again soon, thanks to Renge. And the girl just smiled and said, "It's all good." Then Renge storms into the Adventurers Guild, and the guild leader tells everyone, "That girl really saved us all." But Renge shrugs it off and says it's no big deal, because protecting people is literally her job. The man apologized to the girl and admitted he couldn't scrape together much money right now, promising he'd send it to the guild later, while Rengyue snapped that she'd handle the rest and they could deal with the processing of the corpses. Then the guild leader drops the bombshell. She's gotten a letter. Reng's eyes go wide. And he demands, "Where did it come from?" The leader just answers, "Ain Sahil sent it." The girl realized the letter came from Sorte, snatched it open to read, and then stormed out of the guild in pure rage. The guild leader snapped, "What's wrong?" And Renjia quickly apologized, then blurted that she had urgent business, promising she'd be back next time. The guild leader snapped that the girl was swamped and had totally forgotten the letter sheet. Then right then, the girl burst into a run and begged Ina and Sorte to hold up. She swore she'd smash this man, and right then, she lunged to hit Isatiki while the young guy instantly threw his hands over his head. Right out of nowhere, Shiro burst between them and snapped at the girl that she was done touch him again, and Shiro would kill her. Itsuki's jaw dropped at how fast Shiro showed up. Reng snapped at Shiro to back off, but Shiro threw herself in front of Itsuki. Then Rengui swung a punch, and Shiro parried it with her blade to protect herself. Reng snapped to Shiro that she was in the way, and right then, the whole crowd in the place went pale, because this was getting seriously dangerous. Then the men charged up to the girls and demanded to know what they were doing while Renge was still rattled. Shiro vanished from her sight. and the next second she burst in from the side, sword already coming down. Rank tried to fight back, but Shiro's dagger shattered right out of the girl's grip. Then Shiro snapped into motion and drove a kick straight at her. Rank snatched Shiro by the leg and snapped that she was totally in the way. Then she shoved Shiro aside like trash. Shiro rockets straight at the female employee. She whips away and shrieks. Then Shiro lands lightly on her back and slips off with a soft instant jump. Wrench told Shiro she'd already paid for it, because she makes a perfect target. Then the girl threw a punch, but Shiro slipped it clean, shoved her hand away, and sprang over her like he saw it coming. She spun through the air and smashed a kick into the back of Ranga's head. Then she landed like it was nothing, and Ranga went flying. Rage swallowed Shiro whole. She bared her claws and swore she'd kill Renge, but Itsuki grabbed her hand and snapped that Shiro was Aina and Sorte's comrade. Renge declared that Aina and Sorte are her comrades, so she'll rescue them both. Then, Uki snapped to Shiro that they were making a break for it. He figured there was no point talking anymore, so he had to reach Ina and Sorte and demand they explain what was going on. At that exact moment, Renge whipped the table straight at Yatsuki, and Shiro lunged in, yanked him by the clothes, and shoved him aside so the table wouldn't slam into the boy. The girl swore she'd keep Renge pinned down so the master should run. Shiro insisted everything was fine, like she'd never actually end up killing her. Suki threw herself at Shiro, apologized, and swore she was counting on Suki. Then she bolted off, but Renge snapped a magic seal into place and warned that he'd never get away. In the blink of an eye, a swarm of spikes erupted all around her, and Shiro barely managed to block them. Then the line of steel shot straight through the Suki and tore him up. Itsuki crumpled to the ground and clutched his wound, wincing at the pain, then froze when he saw blood smeared across his hand, panicking as he wondered, "Is this really my blood, and why does it hurt this bad?" Shiro bolted up to her master and begged him to hang on. Then Renge snapped, "Get out of the way," and Shiro just refused to budge. In the blink of an eye, Yasus showed up and barked, "That's enough," and the pack of knights closing in around Renge finally caught up. Right now, Shiro sat beside Yatsuki, and Yasi admitted that the second he heard the client was in danger, he bolted here at once only to realize it was already pretty bad. Right then, Wendy shoved through the night, yelling for everyone to get out of her way, and when she saw Itsuki hurt, fear hit her hard. She begged him to hang on while Itsuki twisted in brutal pain. Yasi snapped at Wendy to calm down and told her to give the boy first aid right then. Then he shoved a bottle of potion into her hands. Eve yanked the potion bottle open, then told the gentleman to hold on just a bit longer while she started working on the wound. Now Ren standing there, boxed in by guards on every side. One guard snarls that the girl is under arrest. No more pointless fighting. Right then, the girl lifted her leg until an order snapped her in place, and out of nowhere, a magical seal flared to life beneath her foot. She smeared the ground with sticky mud, and the guards froze, couldn't move a muscle. Right then, Rangad launched straight at the boy. She fumed, thinking she'd kill one guy like it was nothing, like it was just Suki. Out of nowhere, Shiro shot right behind the girl. She slammed off the ceiling and rocketed straight into Renge, pinning her to the floor with a brutal crash. Yosis snapped his gaze to the guard and demanded he take the girl into custody before they lost their chance. Then the guard nodded and agreed. Yasi snapped his head to Shiro and said the girl had helped Shiro brush it off, saying that now it was all about one thing, saving the master. Wendy asked Yas to take the Suki to the Adventurers Guild, and the moment Yas said he needed her there, the girl snapped, "Why are we doing this? Shouldn't the church or the hospitals be the ones you can trust?" Wendy shot back that the master's potions were right there, and that this spot was the closest from here. Then Yasus nodded along with the girl until the guards burst in and demanded what to do with Renge. Yasa promised they could ride straight to his mansion and that he'd even speak to the Lord himself. Then he stared at Rengi with a downright menacing glare. In the Adventurers Guild, Itsuki finally opened his eyes, and Wendy was right by his bed, so when he woke up, you could feel the shock hit you. "Fast," Itsuki snapped. "Wendy," and Wendy answered that everything was totally fine. Suki's jaw dropped when he saw him inside the guild, so he blurted out, "Why are you here?" Wendy snapped back that they'd borrowed the room to treat the master, and Suki suddenly remembered he was still injured. Shiro lunged into the boy's arms, tears flooding her face as she blurted out an apology. Then Tsuuki stared at her, baffled, and asked why she was saying sorry. The girl snapped back that Shiro didn't guard her master well enough, and that's why he got hurt. Then she hurriedly apologized to the boy. Uki flashed a grin and asked what the girl was talking about, because if Shiro hadn't stepped in, he'd be in serious trouble, and now he grabbed the girl's face and thanked her like his life depended on it. Then Huki whirls toward Wendy and throws an apology her way for interrupting her, and Wendy just laughs it off with a warm smile, saying she's totally fine. The guild leader told them straight up when the girls dragged him in. Pure panic hit them because he had a gaping hole in his side. Then the key went. So was that really true? Wendy said the master's potion sealed the wound, but a scar might still linger. Then the guild leader snapped, "Who did this to the boy?" Suddenly, Uki sprang out of bed and demanded, "Did Ina and Sorte come back? and the guild leader shot him down, saying they still hadn't shown up here. He spun to Shiro and demanded to know if she had any clue what happened to them, but Shiro just shook her head. Then Aina burst into the doorway and blurted that Rangi was at Yashisa's mansion right now. Sukyu couldn't believe it. Aina was back. He blurted that he had something urgent to talk to her about, and Aina shot back that Yasis had already told her everything that went down. Aina drops into a bow and blurts out that she's truly sorry for what just happened because she knows a simple apology won't fix it, but it's the only thing she can do right now. The guild leader demanded to know what the girl was even talking about and why Aina was apologizing at all. Ina snapped back that Renge had attacked the master, and the whole guild went silent with shock. Then the leader pressed the real question, why did this have to happen again? Wendy blurted, who's Reng? And Ina snapped back that Reng used to be part of her crew then. Wendy shot back, so how in the world could your comrade do something like that? Wendy demanded. Ina explained it one wrong move and the master could be in real danger. Suki snapped at Wendy to calm down. Then Suki pushed, asking Ina why Sorte wasn't there with her. At Inyasis's mansion, a man lays it all out to Renga. Inyasis has racked up trouble after trouble, skipping the Rukaku entrance tax, shattering the castle gates, and going straight for the guards with an all-out attack. The girl even shattered a place under his control and went as far as trying to kill him. Then Yasa said the man was in treatment and would live, and the man couldn't help but feel bad for her. Reng started fighting to break free, but Yoses snapped at the girl not to even try because this chain was unbreakable, even for her. It's forged from special steel made to snare high-level monsters, and it also breaks apart magical power, so the girl can't cast a single spell. He also refuses to let the girl wreck the mansion like his own place did, so Renje clenched her teeth, sprinted down the hall, burst into the room, and shouted at range. Sorte grabbed Yasis and begged him not to be cruel to Rengu. Then Yasis snapped back that he wasn't. But when one of Yasis' own shops got wrecked and Sorte's owner barely survived, it hit hard. Sorte is the reason all of this happened. If Renge hadn't gotten that letter, none of this chaos would have ever started. Sorte started trembling with raw terror. Yasis demands to know if she truly doesn't want it because no matter what she says, the outcome is exactly what's standing in front of her. An important business partner was almost killed, and then the girl's friend flipped into crime and he blames it on his bad taste like that somehow caused everything. Ringa screamed for him to stop, then snapped. Why are you pinning all of this on Sorte? She didn't do it. Everything she did was to protect Sorte and Aina, and she didn't regret a single thing. Sorte snapped at Ranga, shouting that he was wrong, that it wasn't like that at all, and that she and Ina had never been treated with cruelty. Rang snaps, asking the girl what she means, and Sorte immediately breaks down, crying and begging her forgiveness. Yasus then steps in, saying, Sorte and Aina made a contract with Yatsuki, but it wasn't for anything good, it was all about servicing a debt. When the adventurer's damage left Yatsuki hurt, Aina and Sorte stepped up and took the fall for the guild, turning into servants themselves. The word is, the two still got along great. So yeah, the stuff in that letter wasn't true, but if that girl had actually read the whole thing, none of this would have spiraled the way it did. He thrusts the letter into her hands and says it's the next chapter of the one Renge left behind at the guild in Rikaku, because this one arrived today, fresh from there. Then Yasa snaps that it's time to hit the real truth, and Sorte admits she's guilty too. He's the kindling for all of this. He leans in and asks the girl one question. Does she finally get what's coming for her now? Sorte's eyes flood with tears as the pain hits her. She remembers how, the second she met Yutsuki, she couldn't stand him. He was always laughing like an idiot, always stepping right between them, and it drove rage straight through her. She also hated the way Aina smiled at him, because it felt like her spot had been stolen, and she kept begging Itsuki to disappear sooner still. When she spiraled, he didn't brush her off. She thinks teasing, getting mad, and laughing are all just good. She only can't even remember when it all started, and now she's drowning in embarrassment, because she realizes she wrote that truly stupid letter. She put that boy in real danger, and she even treated Renji like trash. Right there, her knees buckled in front of Yasi's, and she started blurting out apologies. It was all her fault, and she'd do anything, so she begged that man to forgive Ringa. Rank snapped into furious screaming, begging Sortate to shut up because Yasis sells illegal stuff, and if that girl speaks up, he'll grab her and tie her down. Renji erupts, screaming that she did it herself and that the letter has nothing to do with it. If I'm gonna be punished, she snarls, then punish only me. Sorte started begging the girl for forgiveness, swearing that she had forced the kind-hearted Reng A to do all this. Then the girl broke down, choked up with tears, and apologized to Reng Ai too. Yas threw his hands together and shouted that it was downright incredible, just like you'd expect from the people of the Scarlet Boundary. The bonds were unbelievably strong too. The law stands firm for everyone, so sobbing and screaming won't change a thing. He points at Sorte and Rangai and declares that they'll obey the Lord's orders, no excuses, by the law. He tells them criminal service will fit right in, then turns the famous adventurer into an easy target and swears Sorte is about to blow up and go crazy popular. Reng snapped out a call to the man right then, and Yasa slammed her behavior as a straight-up crime. Damn it, there's nothing he can do about it now. The law clamps down and makes him pay. Suki suddenly cuts into the talk, throws out an apology for interrupting, and asks Yasus if he wants to hear him out because Suki's sure the guy won't lose anything by listening. Sorte is completely thrown when he sees Suki's presence. Suki barged into the dungeon room and Aina, heart sinking, terrified, trudged after him. Then Suki held out his hand and told them, straight up, that they'd all be better off listening to him first. Suki was trying to prove to Yasis that the man had overlooked something huge, so Yasis spotted the kid and greeted him with shock, then asked the merchant if the boy was feeling better. Itsuki rubbed his nose, grinned, and said he felt way better already thanks to the potion Yosus handed him. The young man pushed deeper into the dungeon room, and there Sarte was kneeling and trembling, so Suki snapped her head toward the girl right away. She bowed to the gentleman, voice shaking as she admitted she'd done something no one could undo. Then Sorte started apologizing too, repeating the same words again and again like he couldn't stop. Tears spilled from her eyes, and you could tell she was terrified. Suki gently stroked her head and insisted, "No, it's nothing like that." And the guy swore he'd deal with the letter's contents later and raise hell about it. Now they had to fix the mess that had blown up, and the guy kept stroking Sorta, promising he'd definitely do something to her. Then he rang you. Sorte's sobs got louder and harder. Then Suki stepped in, pulled the girl into a hug, and spoke gently, asking her to trust him. Sorte couldn't form words, but she slowly nodded, one careful nod at a time. Renge, still chained, watched every move with sharp, silent focus, and the girl was stunned to see Sorte looking so broken up in front of this young man. Suki grinned and spun toward Yashisu. Then the guy claimed the merchant might have already let Renge go, since Suki just doesn't really roll with that kind of thing. Yasus flicked his eyes over the young man, saying he couldn't handle this right now, while the man insisted that Renge was a dangerous criminal who needed to be locked up. Suki spread his hands and demanded they stop talking like that about the girl. Then the young man said he wanted to talk things through, but the mess unfolding around him clearly didn't sit right. Yasis snapped him off immediately, saying there was zero room for debate. Then the merchant chimed in that the Lord would decide Rangai and Sorte's fate. Suki stepped in and swore he'd eat the loss on the damaged case and still pay up for Yasis' shop. Itsuki also swore he'd cough up extra money for the apologies the girls were supposedly going to grant him as some kind of moral payment. When he asked whether this kind of deal would really work for Yasus, the merchant went quiet, clearly weighing every word. Then Yasu snapped that his Suki almost died, and now he's coughing up real cash just to plead for forgiveness for the criminal. He shut his eyes and shook his head, admitting Itsugi was way too good-natured, because one day, that sweet smile might turn around and pull the cruelest prank on him. Even so, the young man insisted they could reach some kind of understanding, but Yosis cut him off hard. He refused to let the girl go. Then Suki snapped back that since he was the victim, he was the one suing, and he was prepared to pay everyone else. Aina burst into the conversation and said she was asking for Rangai and Sorte too, and then she stepped up, swore she'd take responsibility for what happened, and promised she'd make up for everything. Yasu snapped his gaze to the girl and told her he'd consider compensation from Aina because if they took it, she wouldn't get it as a free deal, she'd be turned into a criminal slave instead, not both of them. Huki was utterly shocked by how things turned out. Aina straight up told her that if it truly had to happen, and the girls were forgiven, then she was ready to take that step. Sorte broke down in tears, begging Aina to back her decision, and then she screamed at the top of her lungs that Aina must never, ever do something like that. It didn't take long. Itsuki jumped right in with Sorte, and Aina finally got convinced. Then the young man slid his hand onto her shoulder and told her her move wouldn't change a thing. They'd still keep one of their own locked up in that prison. Yasi shot the boy a look and answered first, beating Itsuki to the punch, then said he probably just wanted to wrap the case up before anybody got hurt. The key was the whole point, just what he planned to do. The guy shoved his voice up and was ready to start demanding things, but Yasa cut him off and said he totally misunderstood what was going on. Yosu said those apologies and forgiveness won't fix anything. This situation needs something way more solid. Jesus also made it crystal clear if you commit a crime, even if you think you've got a reason, you're still going to be held accountable, because the city can't run on chaos. The man claimed he was a citizen of Ainsahal, so he swore he had to follow the city's laws, no excuses. Then Yasi turned to the boys and ordered them to surrender on their own and fall back. Suki chewed on those words for a second, then spun toward Yosusun and said the man was right. His words were an ironclad, impossible to refute argument. But then he kept going. Yasis wasn't just some guy, he was a merchant too. And that's why the boy cared about what Yasis thought. Especially from a business point of view, Yasi couldn't quite read him, and there was zero spark in his eyes yet, so the guy finally asked, "So what does Suki even mean?" So he threw his hands out and declared, "I'm a vagabond, and I've got knowledge Yosus doesn't even have, and that's why Yosus can't judge him, because money runs this world." And he's finally cracking what it really means. Suke believed alchemy had huge promise, so he cooked up a small plan, and Yasa still couldn't figure out what the young master was trying to say. Itsuki told Yasis he could set up a one-sided loan if Yasis finally understood the situation. Then he pushed them, begging them to finish it right here and now. Yasa snapped that Itsuki somehow never even heard the merchant's pitch. Then Itsuki fired back that he knew exactly what was going on, offering a pretty unhinged option. Suki just told him he'd handle Yasi's himself like a merchant, no less, and right after, the kid threw down a fight with the man, but only under the rules of trade. Suki even said it straight up, none of that how or what matters, only this can he pull off whatever Yasa sets as the conditions, and that's the whole competition between them. The young man added, if I can pull this off within these limits, then I want Renge and Sorte to be cleared of every single punishment, no exceptions. Yasa told him, Suki wants me to look the other way on every crime if I win this bet. But then he scoffed, because the truth was, the man had zero power to pull off something like that. Itsuki wasn't sure this was real, but he told the man he had total faith in Yoshisa because that merchant truly could pull it off. Yasas lowered his head and thought it through, breathing out hard over and over, and the man promised him that, at least in part, there was definitely something he could do. But because all this talk is flat out illegal, he has to swallow the risk, and right after that, Yasis grilled the boy what would happen if Itsuki lost. The kid didn't even hesitate. He blurted out that if Yasis lost, he'd swear himself as Yasis' slave for the rest of his life, no regrets. Aina and Sorte just stared at him, stunned. Rank snapped. He couldn't take it anymore and burst out first, breaking the heavy silence that hung in the room after Suki's words. The girl then yelled that the young man clearly didn't get it, because what he was saying was pure nonsense. She could barely wrap her head around it. He'd really risk himself for someone else. And the girl didn't hold back. She snapped that he'd taken his beliefs way too far. Yuki bowed his head and wrestled with the thought for a moment. And then the guy snapped that it all came down to one thing. Renge was friends with Ina and Sorte, so he was ready to pull off something like that. Ren's mind instantly flashed back to earlier moments because Itsuki had already shown exactly who he was, and she realized something clear: he'd never once wanted to hurt her. Once the ring slid onto her arms, her body finally went limp with relief, and right then, tears started spilling down her face as she realized she'd been acting downright stupid all this time. Little Shiro slipped up from behind, yanked Yosas' clothes, and told the boy to back off because nobody messes with Yosas, and Shiro didn't stop there. She made sure everything between them stayed right. Suki whipped around and beamed at him, and the guy claimed he understood everything perfectly. Then he leaned in and asked Shiro straight up if she saw him as a loser. Shiro flashed a smile, but stayed silent because she trusted her master completely. Then Yasis erupted into loud laughter, bragging that Suki was seriously one of a kind. Then Yosas, the merchant, told him backing out now would wreck his reputation since he'd been summoned to this competition, so the guy nodded, agreed, and threw himself into the fight. Suki was a bundle of nerves, but when Yasis accepted his deal, joy still burst through. Then the boy leaned in and asked what conditions the merchant was trying to set. Yasis stared calmly at the young man and asked if Itsuki remembered the contest he'd fought with Dataril. Itsuki answered, "Yeah, I remember." Yasa said the rules wouldn't change from back then, just 1 week to go, and they'd have to cough up 120 million in local currency, no or about it. Yeah, and he also said that if the young guy can pull together that kind of money as payment for his shop, then he'll straight up win the whole competition. In this competition, the Adventurers Guild and the Alchemist Guild won't be allowed to help at all, and they've also banned the sale of the pink rotor because the rights to it belong to him and Itsuki. Suki nodded, then Yasis leaned in and said the Scarlet Frontier deal was officially on the table, asking the boy, like he was dead set on the answer, whether Suki really agreed. Itsuki clenched his fist and swore he was in, he'd take the deal. Then Yasis nodded and said, for now, Sorte and Renge would stay with him, so Itsuki could take them with him later. As soon as they all burst out of the confinement room together, bright sunlight hit them like a spotlight. Uki walked on, stretched hard, and groaned that it had been a brutally long night. Suddenly, a voice behind him clawed at his attention, and when he whipped around, he saw Renge closing in fast. The girl dropped her head and burst out an apology for everything she'd done, and Ring jumped in right after saying she understood perfectly well, because stuff like this doesn't get forgiven, but she still needed to make that apology count. Sorte snapped to her feet and stepped right in, defending her friend, insisting Renge hadn't done a thing, and that it was all Sorte's fault. And as the girl started to apologize, Suki lunged forward, stretching his hands toward her. The boy cupped her cheeks and squeezed them, slow and teasing. Then Suk shot him a warning: if she wasn't happy, she should just say it, and he reminded her, loud and clear, that they were on the same side. Then Suki spun to Ranga and told him not to worry at all, at least not anymore. The boy jabbed at his wound and said, "Look, it's already healed up, just see for yourself." Aina told Suki she was seriously sorry for everything that went down lately. She couldn't stop blushing with embarrassment, but Suki cut it off fast and promised her it was all totally fine. Suki beamed, telling them they could finally head home because every single person had been crushed by the day and they all needed that rest. Finally, they burst back home, every last one of the group piling up at the door, and Wendy greeted them with a sharp smile. but Shiro and Itsuki instantly sensed it. That girl was boiling with rage. Suki immediately stepped up and apologized to Wendy, saying they couldn't just leave her alone for so long, plus she was the one keeping the house running. Wendy shot right past the boy's apology and marched straight toward Renga. Then Wendy's hand flew up as she slapped the girl, still calling her name. Itsuki froze with pure terror, then turned to him with shaky eyes as he declared, loud and decisive, that everyone could head on and wash their hands, then marched straight to the dining room. Wendy yelled that breakfast was already on the table and turning cold, and the girl spun to Ranga, insisting she felt the same way about everyone else. Suke just needed a quick explanation, so he hovered near Wendy a moment longer, then he called out. And when she spun toward him, she swore she wasn't about to leave that kind of thing behind anymore. Suki apologized one more time, then scratched the back of his head like that would fix everything. And right after that, the whole gang headed for the dining room, where a rich, mouth-watering feast was already waiting. That's when Itsuki realized this world is nothing like his old one, but a perfect, easy life still felt miles away, so they weren't done struggling yet. Morning burst in, and his Suki sprawled on the bed like he owned the place. Soaking up the calm, sunlight had already smashed through the windows, lighting up the whole room. Then he clutched his pillow and slowly started to blink awake. He greets you straight in your head and drops the truth. His full name is Shinomiya, and yeah, it's okay because ever since he got shoved into this other world, so much has happened. His calm life was packed with trouble, then a tiny misunderstanding detonated everything, sparking an attempt on his life, and the scariest part. That same guy had already been hit just the other day. Renja's blade plunged into his stomach, and the boy's strength drained fast. His eyes started to glaze over as he crumpled down. Sorta caught him immediately, shaking with tears, begging him to forgive her because she was so sorry. Even with everything crashing down on him, Itsuka still fought his way through and saved his life, but now he's got to race Yasus for the chance to free Sorte and Rengue. And it feels like the calm, measured life he wanted is slipping even farther out of reach. Now the boy had 7 packed days left until the deadline in the fight against Merchant Yasus, and there he sat at his desk, crafting something with a focused grin. For the guy, it was brutal. He spent nearly the whole day hunched over his desk, then let out a shaky breath and wiped the sweat off his forehead, while Yasus's words straight up repeating the terms of his bet kept spinning and spinning inside his head. He knew it didn't matter how many accessories he could crank out in that window, none of it would ever be enough, and the pink rotor was off limits too. Kay ripped himself up from the table and headed for the door, dead tired. Then the guy laid it out right now. He only had about half of what he owed, so where was he even supposed to cough up the other 60 million Nora? Suddenly, Shiro popped out from around the corner and snapped his gaze to the owner. Then the girl blurted that she wanted to know where the young man was headed. He seemed a bit stunned and then admitted he just wanted to take a bath. After Shiro closed his distance, Yatsuka blurted that she needed to get cleaned up and reset her head, and Shiro immediately nodded, then told her she should take a bath too. Then they slipped into the room together and started undressing, while Case told them Wendy was sick of feeling awful from taking too much of Shiro's food. Wendy shot back that she wasn't doing it for fun, she was doing it because she was starving. The gay added that the girl should follow some rules, and as they walked farther, they suddenly spotted Renge and Sorte in the bath, and both of them shot them a stare right away. He threw up his hands at the gate right away, mortified. While the guy blurted out apologies that same instant, his face went beet red and he swung a tiny ladle. After that, she finally steadied her breathing and covered herself up with both hands, the blush still burning on her cheeks, and she begged the young man, "Don't look at me, please." He, gay with a full-on headache, couldn't understand why the girl reacted like that. And when it didn't make sense, he figured her character must have changed, then immediately cornered Sorte herself and asked. Sorte snatched up the same ladle again, and this time she snapped, hurling it straight at the guy while screaming at him to shut up, then calling him stupid for acting the way he was, and the guy only smirked back, saying he already knew. Shiro strode up to Rang Yi and spoke to the girl, and the moment Rang Yi turned and locked eyes with Shiro, the little one flung her arms wide and begged to be washed. Renj nodded, scooped a dab of bath soap into her palm and started lathering Shiro's head, then leaned in and told the girl, "Close your eyes so the soap doesn't get in." Renj kicked off the talk by telling Shiro she needed to apologize for what happened yesterday, then leaned in and asked if he was hurt, only for Shiro to hear she was fine, feel his shoulders drop in relief, and then admit that Renge was just amazing. Shiro admitted she poured everything into that attack, but Rengi still survived. So yeah, Shiro had to respect her, because the girl basically proved Rengi was terrifyingly strong. Renjai burst into laughter, then flicked her gaze towards Suka, still bickering with Sorte, and in a low voice said she even managed a small smile. Meanwhile, Aina and Wendy were posted up in the kitchen. Aina devoured the dessert and swore it was insanely tasty, while Wendy kept cooking and thanked her for the awesome review. Wendy also bragged that this sweet hits perfectly with tea, and it's even great as a snack. Then the gentleman leaned in and said it tastes just like something loaded with calories. Wendy added that she had something burning on her mind to tell Aina the next time they were at work, only for Aina to stare at her, completely stunned by what set Wendy off. Ada blurted out that she wanted to apologize, then she admitted she was stuck under the same master, powerless to help him, just like Wendy. As a member of the Scarlet Frontier, Aina knew she had to act, but when it finally came down to it, she had to lean on the master himself and his help. Then Aina stared ahead and confessed she felt pathetic, utterly powerless, like she wasn't even useful. Wendy blurted out that she was on board, then admitted she'd already handed her body and soul to the master, so now she'd do anything he demanded. But no matter what, the master shuts that down and stops her every time she always ends up getting nothing but praise. And it hits her like, I don't deserve any of this. Wendy still remembered what its case said. This was the reason he fought to be with her. Wendy wanted it all just as bad, and she couldn't forget his words either. He liked her. So yeah, the girl was crushed too. Ina lifted her eyes, locked onto Wendy, and demanded to know if that was really the truth. Wendy just grinned and said she'd come up with tasks only Ina could pull off, and yeah, turns out she nailed it. Ina smiled and agreed, saying Wendy was absolutely right. After that, the girl swore she'd go after the master too. But soon, its vibe turned pitch black because time was screaming to a stop and there were only 5 days left. He knew plain as day that even with his workshop packed to the brim, he still couldn't churn out enough items. No way he had time to tell Ina and the others to go scavenge resources. He had to think of something right now before he got turned into Uncle Yoss's next toy, and you could practically feel that whip cracking behind him. He tried to shove those thoughts away fast, insisting to himself he'd never let it happen. Then the boy balled his fist and swore he could trust Darwin. But the moment he remembered that face, his gut dropped like the world had just picked the absolute worst possible outcome for him. It's obvious he had to pull off something fast to stop losing this competition. Then Wendy cut into his thoughts and told him the master had a guest. She hooked up with the guest, her face lit up, but the guy was a bundle of nerves, totally lost about what she was up to. She just grinned and said it had been ages since they last saw each other. Because yeah, that was Darwin's daughter. The young man glanced away, panicking that nothing had happened yet. Then Itsuke spun toward Mera and admitted they hadn't seen each other in ages, and that's when Mera realized his voice had turned rougher. When Itsuke pressed her about the business Mera came to talk to him about, she lifted her cup, sipped tea, and told him she'd heard about the chaos that had hit them not long ago at the brothel. Then Mera broke into a grin and burst out laughing, while the girl admitted she thought it was super interesting. With a stone-cold serious face, it snapped back that they weren't interested in it at all. Not right now. Mera pressed on, firing off her own questions, and the girl kicked things off by asking if Suka could truly pull in the exact amount they claimed. It's then Kei realizes Mera knows way more than she should, and the guy shoots his arm out to the side, admitting this question still trips him up. Mera said she understood East Cup perfectly, and the girl nodded along like, yeah, that boy must be going through hell right now. Then Mera dropped a total curveball. She asked, if it's gay, why didn't you just take another look at yourself? The guy blinked in shock as Mera, grinning with victory, shouted that Yitsuki was nothing but a vagabond, and the girl backed her up, saying the goddess had gifted him that skill, if she wasn't mistaken. He started panicking, because that skills, pocket money, and alchemy plan was never going to raise the exact amount he needed that fast. Mera leaned in close to the boy and told him straight up that he didn't look like he was even considering a change. Then she urged him to try discovering a brand new skill. Gay was seriously weighing every word Mera was trying to hit him with, and then the guy pulled out a tiny card figuring he'd test his abilities first. He had a whole bundle of quirky skills, passive ones, active ones, and his personal favorites, alchemy he loved, extra pocket money perks, sharp evaluation, and even spatial magic. Right away, he clocked it, his alchemy skills had skyrocketed way beyond everyone else's, and then, bam, he spotted something hiding in the corner of the map. It says the boy even has multi-copy and formation abilities, so when CK got back to his workshop, he pored over the supplies and blank templates. Suddenly, the boy got a brilliant idea. Multi-copy copies anything. Just like its name, but magic items and potions that come with status effects get messed up because they don't duplicate cleanly. Hand molding is pure skill, freely shaping whatever you can get your hands on. And the boy knew one thing for sure. The materials you use depend entirely on how strong your alchemy is. With hand molding in his hands, he can pull off a turnaround faster than ever. Sure, multi-copy isn't as strong, but he's still cranking out everything at mass production speed. Yosas wouldn't let it loose on the pink rotor this time, so if that's the case, somebody's got to deal with the mass production of those accessories. Gay lifted his head, realizing it was finally just a matter of selling the materials. Then, as mass sales loomed in the short term, he remembered Mera's words about his class. Mira's truth hit him like lightning. The boy suddenly got the whole picture. He stared at her and blurted out, "I've got a small request for you, and it's seriously important." Then the young man burst into the house and shouted that everyone had to meet at the set time on the first floor, and all the girls rushed to their spot, staring hard at Itsuka. Sorde, Renj, and Ina just couldn't sit still as the girls blared out that they were ready to do literally anything their master demanded, and they waited, tapping their feet, for the next command. When the guy saw their wild zeal, it hit him. He needed calm, right now. He cut in, stopped the girls mid-rage and told them to breathe, slow down, and wait a moment. He said, "It's going to be easy, my task won't be a problem at all." Then he yanked out a tiny list and told the guy he wanted the girls to go grab every single thing on it. He doubled down, apologized, and admitted he wanted to get the girls to handle it all as fast as they could because he still had one last big request. A young man shot up a hand, pointed his finger, and declared he wanted all three girls in on this too. Aina let out a sad sigh and admitted she understood it all. Sorte wrapped her up in a hug, immediately started comforting her, and swore everything would be okay. She'd do everything she could, even be willing to step in for Aina if it ever came to that. It turned out it wasn't exactly what he meant, at least not the way the girls had taken it, and when he finally broke it all down, they instantly saw the whole job that still had to get done. Sorte and Renj bolted for the door, shouting that they'd crush this fast. Aina chimed in that they'd be back in the morning for the occasion, and Gate just smirked. He was counting on the girls. Wendy, the moment it was over, the gentleman spun toward her and dropped a small request. Could she help too? Wendy flashed him a warm smile, saying she'd happily listen, and then she'd ask him to trust her as well. While everyone else was scrambling to get ready and grab their assignments, Shira was crashed out on the couch, soaking up strength so deep in sleep she didn't even hear a thing happening in the hallway. Evening had settled in, and his case stood in his workshop, hand outstretched. The boy couldn't stop replaying his new skills in his head, knowing he had to put them to use. He realized one day's worth of that much could wipe him out, so he chugged the potions like energy drinks. Now there was one last job to slam through, everything had to be sold, and it had to happen by tomorrow. No excuses. Wendy tucked the boy under a blanket and murmured that he'd done an amazing job. Next day, Itsuki was buzzing with energy and grinning from ear to ear. He slipped into his costume from another world and burst outside, with only 4 days left before the competition deadline hit. The young man barked at everyone in the yard, saying the goods were already ready and all they needed was to sell the lot to hit the profit they had to earn then. Right on cue, they loaded everything into the cart. The girls shot their hands up and yelled that they could sell every bit of it like wildfire. Then they launched into this dramatic, solemn celebration, hoisting their hands high again. A massive crowd packed into the square, and even the most casual passersby stopped dead in their tracks, staring like, wait, what just opened in this city? One of the girls, the same company that had just shut down, called her friends over like, come here, take a look, to figure out why everyone was freaking out, and soon a bunch of girls were standing there, staring in total awe at the goods. On a tiny stage, Renj, Sorte, and Ina stood tall, rocking luxurious outfits no one in the local crowd had ever seen before, and they looked absolutely breathtaking. A case loomed nearby, practically yelling at everyone to come closer and check out his wares, and then the guy burst out, swearing he could deliver top-tier performance at a price anyone could afford, because it was a brand new accessory line from the Shinomi Assemble. The young man swore his products weren't just handy and gorgeous, each one came packed with serious protection for whoever wore them. And the supplier was the Scarlet Frontier Adventurers of the A rank. Not only is the design seriously luxurious, it's built for adventurers, and it also gives women the perfect excuse to dress up in style. It kept going, basically saying, yeah, it's an expensive accessory, but you're getting a special price today. The moment those words left their mouths, a pack of girls surged toward Itsuka with hungry, glowing eyes. Potential buyers were ready to snatch up everything the adventurer girls had just put on display. He was a little confused by how smooth it all was, but it instantly made him beam with happiness. Wendy stood right beside him, grinning too and guiding the guy through the line of customers. Just as Yatsuke was unloading another haul of jewelry, a voice crept up behind him. Someone asked, with a girl's tone, how things were going. When the young man spun around, Mara was right there, grinning like she had good news, and he shot a smile back. Everything was going perfectly between them. At the very end, she clutched a sign that pointed to the finish line, and somehow even she didn't escape the spotlight, soaking up compliment after compliment. Some people pointed out that the project team was zeroing in on designs for girls, so they made Aina's group wear them to hype everyone into buying the products. Kay also told everyone that, no matter the world, girls always fall for shiny things, and Mira burst into laughter because the guy nailed that instinct spot on. And it didn't let Mira go without a real thanks slotting in her help, lending him a shop, and giving him a prime location too. The place was packed with tons of possible customers. Mira told Itsuka, if you truly want to thank me, just tell my stepbrother because he's one of the facilities I run. But Itsuka shot back, stunned, I don't want to owe you anything. Sorte slipped around the corner and called to Itsuke, demanding a quick moment because the girl needed to know exactly which accessories were loaded with poison resistance. He said, it's gay, and claimed he was already headed back then. The guy grabbed the box and swore that one day he'd finally pay off the debt he owed Miela and her brother. Mira flashed a smile and tucked her hands behind her back, and the girl immediately clocked it. This guy was weirdly captivating in the best way. For the next 3 days, he churned out his goods in non-stop, limitless batches selling them one after another until the deadline finally slammed in. Itsuki gathered all the girls together and burst out in joy, shouting that their teamwork had finally hit the target and that every one of them had busted their tails to make it happen. Gay singled out Wendy and thanked her right there, and honestly, her advice on design and what to pick helped them blow up so popular they suddenly had people demanding more. Wendy beamed, then got all shy and told her master, "I'm so happy to serve you." Right then, Shion wandered over and blurted out, "I'm starving." Now it was time to wipe the slate clean. Itsuki grabbed every coin, hauled it straight to Yasusa's mansion, dumped it all on the table, and told him, "I got it all in one shot." The local appraiser who'd been handling Yasusu's case leaned in, looked the gentleman in the eye, and said, "Just like we expected, there it is," as he pointed to the 120 million nori sitting right on the table. Yas grinned and said, "All right, just like I promised, I'll make sure Sorta and Rangai don't get blamed." Then he immediately suggested they all sit down for dinner and toast their bet together. He spun toward the door and told him, "We'll do it next time, I've still got things to handle today." Then the young guy shot a wave and walked out. It was Gay and his whole team charged toward the guild tavern, where the air was packed with loud voices, wild shouts, cheers, and the non-stop clink of mugs. He flashed a smile and pressed Sorte for how much longer that girl could keep crying, while everyone around them cheered and pushed each other to drink up and finally let go. The young man took a couple of sips, then noticed the girl climbing onto a table and hoisting a barrel of ale. She hollered for everyone to drink up. Rank suddenly closed in on Itsuka, and between them lingered this strange residue, so she kept hesitating, eyes darting as uncertainty crawled over her. Ranga hurriedly apologized for any trouble he caused Iatsuka, but the girl couldn't shake the guilt she'd hurt the boy, and she wanted to make it right with a real, heartfelt apology. The gay guy stayed quiet, then suddenly slid the girl a mug filled with his drink. Renji couldn't believe he'd do something like that. Itsuki beamed and told Rangai not to worry because by the end, everyone was safe, and that was all he needed. The girl grinned back, lifted her glass, and clinked it with Itsuki. The lab was shaking with its sheer scale as he raised his hands at a tiny bottle of liquid, then blasted his skill multi-copy like it was brand new power he'd only just started to master. While he pushed through experiments and kept working, exhaustion finally hit. He let out a hard breath and muttered that was enough for today, then snapped his focus to the skill panel and saw his level had risen again. Now his alchemy had climbed to level 9 huge, no question about it, when he suddenly spotted something even stranger. Right in the middle of his skills, a brand new power burst into the spotlight called the famous magic circle, and the young man just froze, totally clueless about what it even was. Itsuki sat at the table with his hands clasped tight, and then she walked up, telling him the owner was wearing a gloomy face today, right as the guy started lifting his hand toward her head. He started petting Shion and told him flat out that his household was swelling and the bills were piling up lately too, so he had to push himself even harder at work. Wendy shot her master a worried look and told him, straight up, that if things were rough, he should just say so she could tell the girls. Then she leaned in and added, "I've got you, I can work too." Straight away, he burst into frantic hand-waving and blurted that his real focus was work, his one and only priority. He kept refusing again and again, then leaned in and told Wendy not to stress for no reason. He also told him straight up, "I'll do anything to make Wendy happy." And Wendy shot back, "If you actually need help, then just ask me. I want us to be happy together." The guy exhaled, instantly flustered, and marched to one of the city's buildings where Itsuki was already waiting. Then he practically begged Lightrick for a job, only for Lightrick to snap back that he shouldn't talk in that creepy voice. The man stared at the vials Ietsukaya had shoved into his hands, and Lightrick grinned and said his potions were a hit, so yeah, with the right people, he could make anything happen. But right away, the man shot down alchemy too. No support, no backing, because he claimed he couldn't ignore his lust for women, and the gay boy was totally stunned by how that logic landed. He was gay, and he wanted to say a few words about it, then he spilled everything, and Litrick nodded along, repeating the name of the boy's brand new skill. He leaned in and said, "Yeah, I raised my alchemy level," and claimed he'd even unlocked a stack of skills like manual molding and multi-copy. But the wild part is this. While he was busy using them, he never realized the final one had already been added. It's kind of heartbreaking. He felt like he was missing out on the whole growth process every time he created something and put in that kind of work. The light froze the boy in place, demanding his attention for a beat, and the man's face turned deadly serious as he leaned in and asked the boy if Yuzuka had told anyone else in the city about his new skill. The boy shot back that he didn't do it. Then Lightrick snapped that he should shut his mouth and stop the rumor before it spread. Itsuki demanded why. Lethric made it sound like the biggest deal ever. Most alchemists can't even reach level 9. But if Itsuki didn't want to end up being used for good, then he had to stop blabbing about it to everybody. Case said he finally understood everything, and Lightrick snapped his head away, then immediately told the young man, "If you really get it all, then you're going back to work." Lightrick demanded 500 medium potions and then had 3 days to forge them for Yitsuka. The guy met him halfway, promised to sell those potions to Yitsuka. Itsuki nearly choked at the sheer volume because the guy still expected Lightrick to be the same rude old woman, but this time, with all of it happening, Itsuki finally watched her change and grow. When It's Gay came out, he figured Lightrick had been right all along then. Once the boy sharpened his skills at the company, he got used to being treated like a tool, used over and over for their benefit. Then he rubbed his chin and said the whole exchange felt like that manga, Child of Alchemy or something, and right as he did, someone behind him started closing in fast. The girl shrieked for the guy to get out of her way right now, and she kept yelling it as she sprinted over and over until he suddenly realized she was totally stuck in a deja vu moment. Right when he started to turn, she slammed into him at full speed and knocked him clean off his feet. Then the only words she got out were, "Watch out." Itsu's GE got knocked flat and slammed onto the ground. Eyes squeezed shut, and the boy could only feel sharp, crushing pain, still totally clueless about what just happened. When he cracked his eyes open, he found the girl perched on his chest, scratching her head like she didn't mean to be there, and then she blushed, realizing she'd gone too far, and he felt the shame hit her. It all started with him bursting into screams, and the girl rushed over asking if the boy was okay. He snapped back immediately that he wasn't, that this was bad for him in a bunch of ways. Then he grabbed her and shouted for her to get off. The girl kept climbing, inching up to where Itsuge's head was now, and the guy snapped with outrage that she didn't need to go that far, only for the stranger to shoot back that the young man shouldn't move. After everything that went down, Yitsuya sat by the fountain, stunned and shaken, while the guy eyed her and cringed at those terrible looks. He rushed over and asked if she was hurt, and she snapped back, "Yes." Then she blurted out an apology, trying to explain fast she'd been running down the hill and her footing just wouldn't cooperate. They said she had to listen to him right now. The boy warned her, plain and hard. Adults can't undo a lot of what they do, so he grabbed her attention and begged her to stop charging down those slopes. She stared at It's Get carefully, then blurted that he was clearly a vagabond. His face froze in shock like, how did she spot that? The girl said she could feel that atmosphere too, and when Ron was done, she slipped her hands behind her back, introduced herself as Olegol, and smiled, saying she was happy to meet you. It was basically a safe bet the girl was around here, close to where they were supposed to meet, until Olegol shut that down and said she actually lived nearby in the city center. He thought about it for a second, then said, that girl's family is insanely rich, only someone with deep pockets could afford to live right in the center. Olegol nodded and agreed, because her father was the lord of the city. He cackled, thinking how Olegol had crammed so many amazing things into his life in no time. Then the guy's excitement surged minute by minute. Suddenly, fear hit it hard. Her smile faded into something cold and heavy. The guy stared at Olegol like she was a threat, trembling as he begged the girl, don't tell anyone at home what happened to you out on the street today. Olegol admitted those tones scared her a little. Then they set off together down the city streets. The girl asked where it was heading now, and the guy just grinned and said he was heading home. Oleg grinned and suggested they sneak in a little date before they even split, but he watched his anger spike when the girl ignored him completely. Boligold couldn't wrap her head around why It's Gay wouldn't give her a straight answer. Then she snapped and asked how long it had been in the city, and the guy told her he'd been there for months. In front of them, jaw-dropping architecture stretched out like a dream because this city wasn't just alive, it was buzzing with energy, and somehow everyone looked genuinely happy for once. Olegol spun around and demanded if the boy really believed that crap. Then the boy only grinned and said, yeah, it's true. He told me the world he came from wasn't even that bad, but somehow it felt suffocating, like he couldn't stretch out and grin the way he does now. Olegol flinched at this story because the truth was worse than it sounded, and then the man rolled out a monster with the heads of local lords, insisting this city is packed with nothing but terrifying people. But even so, he couldn't help loving this place. Yeah, it got rough sometimes, but he still managed to work, drink, eat, and laugh together in peace. That's why he loved living here so much. Olegol stared at the guy in silence, then dropped a heartfelt thank you for saying it. Kay froze, staring at the girl in pure shock because he had no clue what she was hinting at. Olegol explained that she'd lived in this city since she was born, and Kay felt relieved the boy actually loved it. Then she spun on her heel and sprinted off, and the girl threw her hand up, grinning and yelling her thanks for the day. It was a reminder he called after her not to run like that, warning she could fall again. Meanwhile, that carriage screeched to a stop at a stone wall. The driver leapt out and yanked the door open for his master, and the man stepped down, thanking the worker like it mattered. Then he told everyone the cab driver wouldn't get to leave, he had to stay here and stand guard, and the moment the order hit, he swore he'd follow it. It turned out the man was Yassi's. Then he spun back to the servant and ordered him to rush to the High Lord and announce his arrival in the city. When the Lord got the news, he summoned Asus straight to his massive palace. Asus showed up with a full report on the chaos Rangai had unleashed in the city earlier. The Lord leaned in and heard the merchant out. then paused to think before shrugging and deciding they could leave it all just as it was for now, since the victim was already smiling at how things turned out. Kei's wishes are taken into account, at least to a certain degree. Yasi's promised he'd be endlessly grateful, and Lord shot back that something felt off. This guy usually didn't help anyone before Lord even pinned it on the fact that its decay had turned him into a vagabond. Yasi's didn't shut it down completely. He admitted it was partly true and said there was more to it. Then the man leaned in, claiming that its guy was a wild, intriguing person, the kind who could be downright reckless. Lord said this was exactly what she meant, and she couldn't help but find it fascinating. Yasis wasn't just interested in someone else, he was actively trying to help him. Lord also agreed Yasis was right on the money, and then she leaned in, stressing that Itsuka was a seriously interesting guy. Yasis nearly choked on the answer, so the man tried to push it further, wondering if the Lord might have already crossed paths with the young man somewhere, and asked her about it. The Lord just smirked and said, "Yeah, you could put it that way." The Lord felt ill, holding back the 100 anobio praise. Then the girl flashed a smile and said it was almost in her wheelhouse, but she wasn't ready to swear it was perfect yet. Olegol burst into a coughing fit, covering her face as if it burned. Then Yasis snapped to attention right away, his voice tight with worry because the girl's health looked seriously bad. Olegol nodded and said, "Yep, that's exactly how it is." Yosef snapped, "And it's bad, really bad." The girl pointed out that Hayato's crew looked like they were getting crushed out there, but somehow nothing they did was going anywhere. When Yasis heard it, his heart sank. Aligol told him there was nothing she could do, but now she's actively scrambling to transfer her affairs. Yasa blurted out a name out of nowhere, then cut himself off mid-sentence. He snapped back. That wishful thinking could crush her, and right away he apologized. Yeah, he bowed low and announced he was leaving Olegol, trusting that the girl would be just fine on her own. With Olegol gone, sadness crushed her chest, so she shoved herself up from the chair, crossed to the window, and whispered with a trembling voice that she just wanted to watch a little more of how this city lived. It's Gay's house, right as they yanked the laundry off to cool after it's dried from the wash. Wendy blurts that it's super windy outside today. The girl rushed out an apology to Ring for dragging her into housework, and Ring waved it off. Fast said it was totally fine and that she was free today anyway. Wendy also pressed him about Ani and Sorte, convinced the two had slipped off to the guilds to hunt new quests only for Rengi to confirm it, saying the guildmaster had called them right in, and then admitting that Wendy was incredibly beautiful. They grabbed their stuff and Wendy shot. It's already noon, so Itsuke told himself they'd better hit his workshop first and share a snack before anything else, and Rengyue nodded along. Shiro, Wendy, and Rang slid into their seats at the common table, then dove into their food. Right on the table sat the steaming bowl of soup Wendy had cooked up. Wendy grinned and spun toward Shiro, then the girl leaned in and asked the little girl if she liked it, even though everything was basically right there to see most of the time. While Renge sat back, watching in perfect silence. Then Wendy whipped around to Renge, who had been watching them in total silence. Wendy figured their guests didn't like the soup, and Renge's mind flashed back to how Wendy punished her for attacking the master. Rank shot up from the receipt in a flash and bowed to Wendy, and the second Wendy did, the girl blurted a super loud apology that left everyone at the table staring in stunned silence. Rank also tried to blurt it out, then lost her thought. She still hadn't apologized to Wendy for what she'd done, because in her mind, all of this had happened because of her. Renki figured Wendy and Zuka hadn't been around each other that long, but when she watched them, it hit her hard. She could tell just how much that master meant to Wendy. Wendy mattered to Itsuka too. She'd never carried the look of a slave in front of their shared master, and he always treated her with raw respect and almost holy awe. Reng realized Wendy was trying to kill Yutsuka just like she'd done to Aina and Sorte, so she treated that boy like a real threat. And Wendy played the same dangerous game when it came to the master. Ring dropped into a bow again, blasting out a heartfelt, "I'm so sorry," for what she'd done, while Wendy just froze, stunned into complete silence. Suddenly, Wendy blurted, "Everything's fine, I'm not holding a grudge." And before Renge could even object, she snapped that the gentleman himself had already forgiven the girl and welcomed her in. That's why Wendy forgave Renji, because she adored her master, and she picked up everything he carried, from the way she saw people to how she judged their choices and what she believed they could become. Reng blushed with embarrassment, and Wendy hurried to add that she still thinks he sometimes lacks common sense, so he'd better be way more careful. Ringer choked out that she was mortified. Wendy promised she'd clear the table after dinner, and the girl even tried to boss Ringer around, telling her to carry the food to the master. Reng nodded and took the basket, then froze because it was way heavier than it looked. Wendy added that when Itsuko was studying, he barely ate or slept at all. The girls started trading smiles because they both knew they wanted to look after Suka then. Later, Wendy found herself alone in the kitchen, scrubbing the dishes long after dinner. The girl paused mid-breath, staring at the sink as she washed the dishes, and the words she'd spoken earlier kept slamming back into her mind because deep down, she finally knew it was true. She loved her master. Every time she said those words, it felt like a sharp pinch crushed her chest. Then Wendy's heart sank, and her face fell just a little. She knew it in her bones that Master always struck her heart with every word and every move. But after that night, everything shifted. It's Kay, and he almost never touched her body anymore. The girl demanded proof of his love because without it, insecurity gnawed at her, and she couldn't stay calm while everything kept piling on. With everyone fussing over her like that, it's downright humiliating for the girl to act this way, so Shiro abruptly closes the distance, convinced she's suffering. Wendy snapped back that, yeah, it was true. Then she wrapped her arms around the little girl, admitting it still stung a bit, as Ero started gently stroking Wendy's head. Right then, Itsuke was buried in his library, exhausted to the bone, muttering that the panacea recipe was impossibly complicated because he craved a cure-all, but nowhere did it explain how to make it. He jabbed a finger at one of the books and said that any missing limb, any sickness, any curse, every nasty condition could be wiped clean with the secret medicine. People thought that if he could pull off something that incredible once, he'd craft it again in a snap, especially with that brand new famous magic circle quote he'd just gotten. A tiny magic circle snapped into place on his hand, and a little vial of medicine started forming right from it. Then the vessel swelled bigger and bigger until the circle vanished. Itsuki's eyes widened at what just happened, so he grabbed the bottle, leaned in, and decided to inspect it for real. Then he realized it was that same legendary panacea secret medicine that wiped out every bad effect, and it could even regrow lost body parts, smash diseases, and break curses. Then a note hit him. This wasn't fate's rescue, just a way to drag life on for a while, and nothing more. Right as his breath caught, Rengyue's voice cut in from behind. Suddenly, she'd slipped in and was apologizing. It immediately spun around, flashed a smile, and asked the girl what was wrong, then held out the ring basket and said, Wendy told her to deliver the boy his lunch. His mind raced nonstop, shocked by how he pulled off something like this because he had no clue what would happen if anyone ever found out he could create something this wild. He's just replaying the fact that he's never done anything like this before, even the panacea, and he can't even wrap his head around why it all came so easily the moment he tried. Suddenly, Suka shot into doubt serving the goddess. Could that really pay off like this? He had no clue if the world even allowed this kind of thing, and no idea whether he was supposed to go along with it. Once he was done, he tore out of the workshop and hurried to the others, and deep down, he knew it'd be safer to keep quiet about what happened to him while he was working. The first face he spotted was Wendy, and this case smiled and called her over, then handed her the lunch basket, and the guy proudly said it was super tasty. Rank stood in the kitchen, gripping a knife as he sliced fruit, and the moment he asked if Wendy had any plans right now, he admitted he might need backup. Wendy fought through the moment, then told the gentleman to get more rest, so the girl clutched the basket and promised the young man a fresh cup of tea right now. Then she spun around and strode off, ignoring the gentleman's question, and Itsuki snapped. He wanted to offer her a joint vacation, not drag her back into work. After a while, Anya and Sorte finally came back from the guild, and the moment they stepped in, it was obvious they'd survived a brutal mission, because their looks said it all. Itsuki greeted the girls too, and straight up asked why they were gasping like they'd sprinted a mile. Sorte waved it off like it was nothing, and Wendy thrust towels into the girls' hands, saying the bath was ready and waiting. Sorte sank into the steaming hot water and swore she felt alive again, and Aina looked at her friend like, she's more right than ever. This is when Sorte's really shining. After the girls finished bathing, slipped into fresh clothes, and headed into the guest room, Yitsuke was already there waiting. Then they all piled in, sat down together, and waited for tea while he started firing questions about what happened. It all kicked off when the Adventurers Guild sent a request, and Wendy marched up to the guys, told them the tea was already done, then slapped it down on the table. Ina leaned in and said the job wasn't some random errand. It was to snag a monster that had slipped away from a dealer of strange creatures, a killer rabbit with a whole different kind of menace. And somehow, this monster still had human intelligence, which turned everything into a nightmare because it darted around with animal speed and attacked with pure, ruthless evil. Ina said they rushed to catch him, but the monster was way smarter, so it had set up a trap ahead of time and struck the adventurers first. Gay gave a sly chuckle and said the girls had to pull back because a terrifying rabbit was attacking them. And Sorte snapped that they didn't retreat, they fought smart and repositioned with strategy. Sorte roared that they'd find out for real who beats who, then the girl lunged to grab that rabbit with her own hands and twist off those long ears like it was nothing. Sorte practically burst with excitement finally. Their whole team was together and they were ready to strike again at that vile monster terrorizing people. Gay shot her hand up and told the girls she'd give them her best, wishing them luck, hoping they could handle things and finally catch the monster. Then she saw Shiro and the girl pointed right at her, saying something felt off like it was personal. The girls lit up and promised that Shiro would come with them, and Itsuka just stared, shocked, then sorta grinned and said Shiro was way too strong to waste, so he'd be their ace in this sortie. Shiro tagged along, and Sorte began hyping her up, telling her they were winning for sure today. Ina jumped in next, swearing that once they pulled it off, they'd celebrate the victory and party all night long. Kay and Wendy watched the guys head off, and then the guy grinned and said the girls were loud as hell in the best way. Wendy spun toward the gentleman and said dinner would be shared between just the two of them. Then the gate fidgeted, turning meek as he agreed. You're absolutely right, kid. Wendy spun around and headed for the kitchen, and it hit her. This was the first time they'd truly been alone together in ages. After a short wait, dinner hit the table, pure meat, heaven. Like a steak, he tore off a tiny bite with his suke and instantly tasted it, eyes wide as the food's greatness blew his mind. Once they finished eating, the gate finally decided to shut down for the night. The guy slipped out onto the balcony and rested his weight on the ledge, staring down with a heavy, downcast face. He knew he'd been spiraling in his own head now. He just couldn't steady himself. He bowed his head and murmured that he wasn't a kid or a schoolboy anymore, but the truth was, he couldn't even figure out why everything was happening like this. The boy swore that the next time he got the chance, he'd do everything the right way and finally stop hesitating when it came to Wendy. That sharp gaze hit him right across the face, snapped him back to his senses, and then he straightened up, clenched his fists, turned around, and strode back into the house. The boy bolted straight to the bathroom, scrubbing himself hard, because he feared whatever was coming next, and that awful smell on his skin would totally embarrass Wendy. Next, he scrubbed his teeth again and again, swished the rinse through his mouth, and felt instantly refreshed like he'd leveled up his whole vibe. Then he threw on his clothes, stepped outside, and swore to himself he was going to make it. It's-Gay hurried up to Wendy's door, fist raised to knock softly, then he froze mid-motion, suddenly doubting whether Wendy would even want this. He started to remember his old world. Then he saw several women circling up and sizing the men up, calling them totally clueless, and one girl snapped that they didn't just need mercy, they needed training too. As the world started to spin, his hands began to shake, doubts crashing over him nonstop. The boy kept insisting, "This has nothing to do with me, none of this is real." And then Itika even warned him he wouldn't sit there comparing Wendy to some monkey. Suddenly, he heard a girl's voice, and there was Wendy, standing right in front of his door, and the sheer shock hit him so hard he blurted out a scream. Wendy stepped up and demanded to know what the gentleman wanted from her, but he froze, totally baffled, and couldn't spit out a straight answer. Then Wendy yanked the door open and personally ushered him into the room. They dropped into their seats at a tiny table facing each other, and the whole time, It's-Gay kept feeling weird and totally lost, glancing away again and again like they couldn't handle the tension. Wendy clocked it and figured the whole mess needed a little relief, but she still had no clue what was really going on with that poor gentleman, so the girl swore she'd run off and pour him some tea. It was like fear hit him, because he suddenly snapped into focus and shot his hand out to grab Wendy as she tried to walk away. No way was he letting her go. He yanked her back while still holding her, cutting in with, "It's a Gakulter," and that name alone made the girl jump like she'd been shocked. Suka shot up on his feet and told Wendy he was done with waiting. He wanted to finally keep the old promise he'd made to her, and he wanted Wendy to let him do it. Wendy grabbed the gentleman's hand and declared her support, then confessed she'd wanted this for ages, craving nothing more than to become one with him. The girl blurted out that she'd always dreamed of being close to Itsuke. And right after that, the guy lunged in and kissed her while Wendy stood there, smiling, and said she loved her master. By the end, Wendy and Suka were finally alone at home, and they spent a night that felt like pure magic. Then, the very next day, after a whole day's drive, the adventurer girls and Shiro showed up at the spot where the rabbit monster was hiding. Chase got pinned as they closed in from both sides, boxing him in, then Shiro burst into view right in front of the rabbit, thrusting her weapon up and screaming that this time, the monster was not getting away. She lunged and swung right at it, but her strike missed by a hair, and before she could think she'd finally got the beast, the rabbit snapped out of the way, dodged clean, and sprang upward. He shoved past the girl, realizing they barely had any time left to claim victory, and that meant they had to drain the monster's strength until it couldn't keep going. Out of nowhere, a massive bear barreled into her path, reared on its back legs, and rumbled a terrifying growl. Sorte's eyes went wide because she never saw this kind of threat coming. During the wild chase, the girl snapped, "This is getting on my nerves." Then she swung her stick and clocked the bear, dropping it hard to the ground, before yelling at the others to grab the rabbit. The rabbit snapped its turn and bolted to the side, but there was already another adventurer waiting Rengue, who grinned and told it, "I'm here already." Rengie flicked her hand and promised the monster wouldn't slip away this time, then grinned so hard as she watched the rabbit spring for yet another jump. Wrench swung hard, but the rabbit slipped out of the way again. Then the beast streaked overhead and tore past the girl, and even at the very end, Renji still believed the opening to catch her was hers to take. But Renji couldn't land a single hit. This beast exploded past her, leaped over her, and barreled forward. Renji spun around, shocked at how blistering fast it was, then snapped and sprinted after it. Renji went for the rabbit again, aiming it straight at AINN, and just as she was ready, the girl whipped the net around and snagged it. Sorte saw Aina had finally pinned the beast, and she erupted in joy, shouting that the rabbit got exactly what it deserved. Then everyone huddled together and kicked off a discussion about the hunt, because getting through all of that had been brutal for them. Sorte said that after a bit, they finally pinned the beast, and I couldn't help thinking they'd done an insane job because now Sorte was itching to take a look at their catch. When they hauled the rabbit out of the net, It was like the world flipped, only a doll sat there, and the girls practically gasped in disbelief, while off to the side, a real rabbit just kept giggling. Right when he got distracted, a menacing Shiro slammed into view in front of him, while the rabbit just froze, staring in shocked disbelief. Then he bolted again, but every jump landed short. Shiro was always one step ahead, blocking his escape at every turn, and when Shiro stared at the monster, she promised, "You're about to be my lunch." Meanwhile, at home, Itsu scooped up a basket full of dirty clothes, grinned, and told the boy he'd help Wendy with the laundry today. Then he leaned in and asked what other chores needed doing. Wendy said they'd already taken care of everything, and the girl insisted she didn't want to trouble the gentleman, so he wouldn't have to worry. Then, Gay shot back that helping him wouldn't be hard at all. Then, out of nowhere, a voice slammed through the front door asking to be let in, and they were shocked to realize who it was, a stranger who said they needed help. It was Lord Olegal, shadowed by a bespectacled adult, while the girl stepped in to finally sit down and speak face to face with Itsuka. He thought the chaos was finally over and that normal life was back on track until, after a while, Olegal came to his place, and he realized he'd met her before, out on the streets of the city. Kay grimaced as he realized he had to flee the mansion and time jump again, only to slam right back into the cursed dungeon where it all started. A loud roar burst from inside, and the guy clutched his sword, shouting at the monster that Hayato was here. Then the beast slammed straight in at him, and he sliced it down. Hayato sheathed his sword with a sharp snap, strode back to his crew, and demanded the girl straight up, "Did anyone get hurt out there?" One of the girls blew out the fire in her hand and grinned, saying not a single scratch touched her or the others, and the rest shot off the same kind of answers. Hayato marched up to Chris and asked if she was tired. Chris shook her head and swore she was fine. Then Hayato insisted they still take a quick break. Eventually, they finally stopped, sparked a tiny campfire, and set a camping pot over the flames while one of the girls started cooking. The mage girl shoved a mug into Hayato's hands. Later, she admitted she still couldn't wrap her head around why that young man said yes, because to her, Hayato didn't just choose his path, he tossed aside his calm life and headed straight back into the dungeon. Hayato smirked and shrugged, saying he couldn't do a thing about it. Then the guy swore he'd hunt down the healing elixir, and Hayato leaned in to tell the girl straight up, the real treasure of this dungeon isn't some glittering prize, it's the elixir. Chris's group doctor worked with him, but she couldn't fully grasp what that meant. If it really was that bad, they wouldn't have come here on purpose. Hayato just said there was no other way out. The mage warned they're hunting for a real antidote. Then Hayato snapped that Olegol isn't just any target. She's a woman who lives for her country, so a ruler like her becomes a nightmare for anyone full of spite, along with every enemy out there. Hayato snapped that if he couldn't get the girl the elixir they were hunting, he'd never forgive himself. Then the guy pressed him, asking if he was really doing the right thing. They ignored his questions and left him in dead silence. Then the mage girl cut in, asking whatever happened to the man from Hayato City, until the guy realized she must be talking about Itsuka. Hayato took a sip, then told me they hadn't heard from each other in ages because he'd been stuck in the dungeon while Itsuki was off in the city, and from what Hayato knew, Itsuki was working as an alchemist. Then the girl snapped her eyes to the little bag and demanded to know if Hayato had snagged those ingredients for Itsuki. He grinned and said he had, hunting them down inside the dungeon just to gift them as a souvenir from their hard-fought expeditions. The sorceress said it again. Hayato would sneak an offering into a magic bag, and she was sure Itsuki would be thrilled with that gift. Hayato told him that Itsuki was truly a great person and he couldn't help but feel grateful to know him. Then the mage leaned back and admitted that Hayato was nothing like the guy from the city. Out of nowhere, a tiny girl bolted up and grabbed the magician's leg, yanking it like it owed her something, screaming that she couldn't get enough and demanded more. The girl complained the soup was almost gone and begged for at least a little more, but the magician snapped back, "Don't cling to her leg, it's too heavy for her to carry." Right in the middle of their fight, the team's doctor barged in and snapped, "Don't you dare make a peep," because every whisper could wake up some monster, and the dungeon already had them swarming everywhere. They had to stay as silent as possible. The magician snaps, calling Emily to be quiet, and Hayato springs into action, calming the girls and begging them not to panic. Then he whips around to Chris and asks how she's feeling. Chris said Emily had cast a spell that crushed the pain and made her feel way better, so Hayato snapped that they needed to rush and find the treasure fast, before they could make her feel even more amazing. The man rushed out an apology for showing up to Yutsuki's place so late, then blurted that his mistress had a sudden, urgent need to see the boy, leaving Yutsuki stunned when he realized it was Olegal right there in front of him. The man shot out an apology, then corrected Itsuki on the spot, saying Olegal was the lord of this city and this country, so she needed to be treated like royalty. Itsuki snapped in surprise, then waved the guests inside his house, where Wendy poured them steaming tea and they settled into the living room. Itsuki lowered his head and just went quiet. He swallowed hard as he apologized to Olegal for the messy mess between them earlier, and the second Itsuki remembered it, he let out a jittery, nervous laugh. Olegal flashed a huge grin and waved her hand in the air, telling Itsuki, "Don't sweat it, Lots of people have guessed her grandfather's name wrong before. The girl even said people keep thinking she's too young for the job and that somehow the guy's dirty thoughts have already run wild in his head, which honestly made her find it pretty funny. It's Suki turned away and panic hit. He was in deep trouble. Aligal even admitted she was a half-breed too and could read minds, but she wasn't going to judge him. Because for someone his age, this kind of stuff was basically normal. He dipped his head and snapped that she'd totally forgotten to introduce him. Then the moment he finished, she blurted an apology and pointed at him like, "That's my personal butler, Soma." Oligo said she couldn't believe she'd finally run into Itsuki in a place like this, and it sounded like pure relief, but the moment the girl called him brother, the boy's nerves snapped tight all over again. Somaluked prowled around and figured this huge mansion had to be a gift from his brother, but when he asked, the boy shot back that Darwin handed him the house. Aligal blinked in shock, then shot right back, asking how the guy managed to live here, because when the gate finally answered, it bragged that the place was massive, with an alchemy room and even a luxurious bathroom. That's why Itsuki figured he was living pretty good here. Oligol even said she was thrilled to hear about the bathroom, and the girl added that she'd use it later on, just not right now. Suki grinned and gushed that the cypress bath was pure paradise for silky skin. Then the boy blurted out that the mansion was packed with even more baths. Oligold suddenly erupted into coughing fits, and it totally threw the guy. He stared like, "Wait, what?" She snapped her hand up to cover her face, and Selma shot forward with real worry. Hovering over her mistress, Allah's voice came out shaky, but she insisted the others didn't need to worry. She said she was fine. Suke snapped his head toward Wendy and told her that Oligol wasn't doing well, and the boy immediately asked her to fetch a small bottle. Wendy nodded meekly and said she'd do it right now. A few minutes later, Wendy burst back into the living room with a tiny tray in hand. On it sat a small bottle she'd just summoned for Soma. Wendy told them it wasn't some scary potion at all. It was medicine made by concentrating and synthesizing a bunch of restorative brews, so nobody had to be afraid, and everyone could safely drink it. Awegal pressed Copley, asking if it was really true, so the girl clutched the medicine in her hand and said she was praying it wouldn't drain the young man's life savings. Suki snapped back that there was nothing to worry about. Then Oleg popped the lid open, gulped the medicine, and right after that, her face twisted like something was seriously wrong. Suki wasted no time and asked how Oligal was doing, and the Lord lit up with the news she was already feeling way better, and she hurriedly thanked the young man for the help he'd given her. Oligal blurted out right away that the potion Itsuki brewed was insanely strong, and the moment the words hit, the youth and Wendy grinned, snapping up the compliment like it was a victory. After that, Itsuki took a couple of sips of tea and grilled her about why she came and what was up with Oligol. Then the girl snapped back that she remembered the question and she was ready to strike a deal. Oleg also told Ezekiel, "If you want, you can cook up whole new kinds of panaceas for the Red Cross community, something that actually helps everyone." Suke instantly went on edge the moment everything started, because all he wanted was a quiet life. Then Oligol said she could carefully pore over the reports from Alchemist and everyone else. That's when she realized the people in the pharmaceutical world aren't just working, they've got a literal gold mine in their minds, which is why she instantly understood exactly who she was signing that contract with. She also knew the guy had already struck some deal before her, but that didn't faze Olegol one bit, because when it comes to work that helps others, she's all heart and zero selfishness. She also made it crystal clear Itsuki's a genuinely good guy who helps others, so he's the perfect pick for teaming up with her because she reads him like an open book. Then she drew her legs in tight, looked up, and barked that she wanted Itsuki's agreement right now without him overthinking her proposal. Suki snapped into another nervous laugh, and the boy thanked Oligol for the offer like, yeah, this time he was finally willing to trust. Oligol said she couldn't claim she'd done anything worth it, but the guy shouldn't stress. He definitely shouldn't thank her again. Then she shot to her feet and snapped her tone into something sharp. She said Suki was stirring up too many problems outside, and they were starting to spill right into her life. Oligol shot back that she understood, but the truth was, that guy was tangled up in every problem and dealing with it all was a total pain. They apologized to the boy, and the man hurriedly added that they didn't want to stress Mr. Itzik too much, while the butler tried to brush everything off and smooth over his mistress's art. Soma also swore they'd pull out every stop to make it happen, promising he'd handle it, while Illegal turned to the butler and snapped that he better not stick his nose where it didn't belong. Before the girl even finished her sentence, she bent back down and started coughing violently, again cutting her scolding short. The butler immediately pressed himself closer to her, panicked and desperate to help. Suki fired off the question again, asking if the girl was really okay. Then Oligol snapped into action, apologized, and admitted her health had been shaky lately, so they had to cut the visit short for today. Selma and Oligol climbed into their carriage and rode straight for the palace. Wendy stood beside her Suki and leaned in to ask the boy if everything would really be all right. He hesitated, then admitted he was still worried. Suddenly, the girls burst onto the scene at the house, and Sorte yelled that they'd finally made it. Yutsuki and Wendy were completely stunned. while Renge beamed and cheered them all on as they returned home. Itsuki leaned in and asked how it all went. Sorte tossed him the bag and admitted the hunt was brutal, and Renge chimed in that they'd had to grind a little to pull it off. Sorte started flexing all over again, bragging that an animal like that was nothing for them. Then snap, the bag tore open, and the rabbit bolted out, flying free. The rabbit darted up to Wendy and yanked her leg, and panic hit it so hard it started trembling, while Suki instantly dropped to a crouch and started shouting at the hare. Meanwhile, Wendy was mortified. The rabbit kept trembling, tears streaking down his face, and then bam, someone scooped him up Shiro, who wasted no time shoving him right back where he belonged. Oligol slipped back home and practically dove onto her bed while the butler escorted her inside. Then Oligol turned to Soma and threw out a sincere apology for how she'd acted. The man insisted everything was fine and that Oligol could finally rest in peace. Then he stepped into the corridor and slammed the door shut behind him right as someone called out his name. He demanded to know what happened to the Lord, assuming it was the same old story until Soma stepped in and stopped Volka's cold, saying the girl needed real peace. Volka snapped that Hayato had botched the job after all, and he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that they were basically out of options. Soma snapped that this curse can't be undone like that. And Volka insisted they had to dig up anything that could at least ease the lady's suffering a little. Huki hunched in his workshop, staring at the medicine like it betrayed him, because no matter how strong the dose was, it still couldn't save Oligol. And the worst part, that idiot didn't even know what Oligol was in the first place, so of course he was doomed. The boy popped open the tiny box where he kept his experiment, then stared at Panacea and muttered, like a dare to himself, "We should try it."